Hey quirky what if here. Last time, the girls of Class 3A returned from their night out expecting peace and quiet, only to discover the dorm completely destroyed and Izuku Midoriya asleep in the middle of the chaos wearing nothing but his underpants. After learning the boys had gotten Deku drunk before abandoning him, the girls decided to stop Mina from taking advantage of the vulnerable green-haired hero by settling everything through a ridiculous challenge game. But what started as harmless fun quickly spiraled out of control. One by one, the girls were forced into intimate challenges involving Deku himself. Gyro lost herself while sitting on his torso. Toru ended up trapped in Deku's sleepy embrace while he cuddled against her chest. Tsuyu became captivated while tracing the scars covering his powerful arms. Momo completely melted after letting Deku rest his head on her lap. And Uraraka nearly kissed him after finally realizing the depth of her feelings. By the end of the first round, the truth had become painfully obvious. None of the girls were competing just to protect Deku anymore. They wanted him for themselves. And before anyone could calm down, Mina made the game even more dangerous by introducing a new rule. Every round from now on would grow more intense. With emotions running wild, jealousy beginning to spread between friends, and pieces of clothing slowly disappearing one by one, the girls prepared themselves for the second round of challenges. Completely unaware of the emotional war happening around him, Izuku Midoriya continued sleeping peacefully in the center of it all. Let's go. Before we dive in, if you enjoy dark, powerful what-if stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, and it only takes a second. Now, let's begin.
Chapter 10, The Mouth of the Wolf. They were all gathered on the first floor next to the table with the plans of the building and the lantern that gave them a somewhat welcoming light in what is possible considering the situation in which they were. Momo cleared her throat to catch the attention of the others. Very well, what we are going to do is go in a single group in the direction of the elevator on the 5th floor which, according to the plans, is in a hidden room, he said calmly while pointing his finger at the place on the plans. Yui raised her hand slightly, drawing attention to her. Well, I've sometimes seen a door at the end of one of the corridors, although the truth didn't seem to be a door. Since it's the same color as the walls and you couldn't see it very much, she said, remembering that strange silhouette of a door at the end of the corridor. The point is that we all stick together now that we have a clear place to get to. That way Midoriya won't be able to kidnap us as we go along. Kendo said to everyone with a serious look, actually trying to get them out safely, because he didn't want another of his friends to be kidnapped by the green-haired man. True, I doubt he would let us get to the elevator quietly, said Setsuna, crossing his arms and sighing a little, considering the difficulty of reaching the elevator intact. Therefore, if Deku-kun appears, let's try to talk to him, and if he still doesn't react, we'll immobilize him, Uraraka said to the rest decisively, receiving nods from the others who agreed with her. Momo shows them all ropes in a small black box. I've created these ropes to hold him back. They're clearly stronger than the normal ones, and I also prepared some tranquilizer darts, he said, keeping in mind the sedating of the boy as he had done to keep him under control before he escaped. I'll be in the lead just in case, Tetsu said with a sideways smile and a fist pounding his chest. Me too, since my quirk will be useful to distract him, said Setsuna, smiling confidently and with her hands resting on her waist as she rests her weight on one leg. Okay, in that case Tetsu, Setsuna, Uraraka, Ibara and I will face it in hand-to-hand combat, Kendo declared authoritatively, and those involved had no problem accepting the formation. It will be the best, and Ishido, Asui, Ryako and I will be there to attack from a distance, Yui added serenely and with her arms crossed, since the four of them were better suited for long-range combat. Toru and Momo-chan, on the other hand, should be supporting in the center, Jiro, Tsuyu commented with a finger on his chin, looking at those involved who had no problem accepting. After all, Toru in particular had no combat skills and Momo could give better play by using his creation for support. Alright, let's get to it at once, exclaimed Tetsu, clenching a fist in front of him with determination and a sideways smile. Momo then walks up to the boy and places a hand on his shoulder. Making noise will only make it easier for Izuku-kun to know where we are, the black-haired woman told Tetsu, and he understood that he had to lower the intensity of his voice to go unnoticed. I pray that we will achieve our mission in rescuing our friends without being harmed, Ibara said with her hands clasped in prayer as she closed her eyes to ensure the smooth completion of her crusade. Then, with all that said, they went in a single group to the stairs in a cautious manner. Only a few carried flashlights so that others would be ready at any moment to go on the defensive if the green-haired man appeared. They climbed the stairs from the first to the second floor cautiously while illuminating their steps with their flashlights. You know, right now he asked me who the hell designed these buildings, Mina said calmly as the group continued to climb the stairs cautiously. Look on the bright side. If for some reason he is on these stairs, we can use the others at the other end of the floor, said Setsuna, smiling relaxed towards the hairy woman, since there were two emergency stairs at the ends of the structure in case the main elevator did not work, which was the current case. From one moment to the next, Kendo, who was leading the group, stopped in his tracks while stopping the rest with one arm. "Hush, I heard something," he said to them all earnestly, and the rest were silent, and they kept an eye out for any sound. They could hear a metallic tapping sound through the walls. It was faint and barely audible, but it was enough to let the whole group know of Izuku's presence. "It's close," Yanagi said, narrowing her eyes a little, and the rest were just as sure as she was. "Let's not stop and continue," Tetsu told the girls, and none of them objected, and they continued to climb cautiously until they finally reached the second floor. "We got to the second floor and we haven't lost anyone. It's a good start," said Setsuna, smiling relaxedly, thinking that maybe everything could go smoothly. "You talk too soon. This is the typical moment where something unexpected happens and we find ourselves in trouble," Mina said to the green-haired woman, using the knowledge she gained from all the horror movies she has seen, in this specific case the slasher. After listening to the hairy woman, everyone stood still waiting for something to happen. They looked in different directions waiting for the green-haired man to appear for a minute. And there was no change. "Nothing happened," Yui said calmly looking at the haired woman, "but it is clear that something was going to happen." CRSHHH. From the stairs leading to the third floor, a sudden explosion of dust and concrete formed that caused everyone to cover their eyes and walk away from the stairs. "He went through the wall," exclaimed Kendo, standing on guard and covering his eyes with one arm when he saw that the wall had been destroyed from the other side. Possibly he had hit it from the ventilation. "Can anyone see it?" Uraraka asked the others, trying to locate his friend, but the dust on the concrete didn't help much. "Over there," exclaimed Momo, holding her glasses as she pointed through the dust that was beginning to disperse. They all turned and saw the silhouette of the green-haired man, who was standing and too calm to the point of being disturbing, which was noticeable just by seeing his silhouette. Then everyone saw how the silhouette of the green-haired man prepared a fist and then hit the stairs with force, causing them to be destroyed, making distance between the group and him, who had stayed in the upper area of the recently destroyed stairs. "He's cutting us off," exclaimed Setsuna, gritting her teeth when she saw the boy's action. She was about to split her body to begin the attack, but a hand on her shoulder stops her and captures her attention. "Let's retreat to the corridors. Fighting in such a narrow place puts us at a disadvantage," Momo said to Setsuna with a serious look, receiving a nod from the green-haired woman, so that then everyone moved away from the stairs to be in the corridors of the floor. Everyone is on guard and has their eyes set on the faint cloud of dust that came from the stairs. They were waiting for Izuku to come out of there to try to attack them, but at no time did they see his silhouette. "Apparently he left. His goal was only to cut us off on this side," Yui said, calming down and sighing at the thought that the green-haired man had left after achieving his goal. "We just have to get to the next floor by the stairs at the other end, Jiro," Tsuyu said, looking as calm as possible, while internally she was somewhat frightened by the way Izuku had led them to take another path. Everyone started walking through the corridors on the second floor in the direction of the other emergency stairs while maintaining the formation they had established. "This is because of what you said, Mina-chan," Toru said to Mina a little angrily. "Hey, it's not my fault. Blame horror movies for repeating the same cliches endlessly," Mina replied with a simple shrug. After all, it wasn't her fault that this was a situation inspired mostly by cliches and references. "Then according to you, what would happen now?" Kendo asked the hairy class girl as she continued walking straight ahead, pointing her flashlight at the road. Mina folded her arms thoughtfully. "Well, I say he'll appear again," replied the haired woman calmly, and as if she had invoked danger, there was a loud metallic rumble above the group, who raised their gaze to the ceiling. "The ventilation," exclaimed Tetsu alertly, and so they all began to run away from the green-haired man who was in the vent, but it was useless as he followed them at full speed, causing light specks of dust to descend from the ceiling and the cracks to buckle a little as he passed over it. They were all about to reach an intersection, but a crack in the roof came off, and from the dark place came whips from Izuku's black wisp and at high speed headed towards Toru to catch her by the waist. "Help!" cried Toru, frightened at being taken by surprise, and then pulled in the direction of the duct in the ceiling. "Toru-chan!" exclaimed Uraraka, worried about her friend, and then she and Setsuna, Ibara, Tsuyu and Yui began to hold her by the arms to prevent Izuku from taking her. No matter how much they struggled, they couldn't stop him from pulling her into the conduit. It was just inevitable that she would be carried away. But because of the tension in her body, Toru moaned slightly in pain, and this caused Izuku to let go instantly, causing her to fall on her friends. After that, the rest of them noticed how the metallic sound quickly moved away from them until it was no longer audible. "He's gone," Momo said, breathing a sigh of relief, assuming that the boy had left, leaving them a brief moment of rest. Meanwhile, Uraraka, Yui, Ibara, and Tsuyu stood up from the ground a little sore. Setsuna, meanwhile, helped the invisible girl disguised as a nurse to her feet. "Call me crazy if it's just my imagination, but did he let you go?" asked Setsuna, somewhat confused and surprised at the behavior of the green-haired man who had let Hagakure go. "It seems like he feels like he was hurting you," Yui said calmly and a little thoughtfully while Toru was silent. Somehow it made her feel happy that he cared about her by letting her go so as not to hurt her. "It's good to know that at least we have the assurance that he doesn't want to hurt us," Yanagi said with a slight smile, and the rest agreed with her. After all, in the end, and after all, Izuku Midoriya was still the same. Just because he was in that state didn't mean he was going to want to hurt them. With all that, the group continued their way through the corridors towards the emergency stairs that would take them to the 3rd floor. They were relatively close to getting there, they just had to turn a corner and reach the end of the corridor to find the stairs. But before crossing they heard a loud bang that alerted them, and then they saw a door pass in front of their eyes at high speed until they hit the wall. Everyone was confused and peeked in the direction the door came from and could see Izuku coming out of the stairs with her hair shadowing her eyes. "There he is," cried Mina, as she and the rest of them were on guard for a possible attack. They were surprised to see him so soon again, but what was truly disturbing was to see how he began to walk slowly in their direction, at an imposing pace and with a frightening figure because of his silence and his constant advancement. Kendo took a few steps forward and looked at the green-haired man calmly. "Midoriya, please calm down and listen to us. We are trying to help you so that you are not scolded for what you have done. We also want you to let Kinoko, Pony, and Jiro free to avoid problems," the president of the B class said to Izuku, but he did not stop and continued advancing towards them. "I think he heard you," Ibara said to her orange-haired friend as she held her hands on her chest with some fear of the boy's imposing figure. "Or he doesn't care," Yanagi added, narrowing his eyes at the thought that maybe they should fight. "Yes, he's still getting closer," Toru said a little fearfully and taking a few steps back at how truly frightening the boy looked. "We've already tried the hard way, now it's time for the hard way," said Tetsu, smiling defiantly and animatedly as he stood guard and covered his steel skin. "Round 2, Midoriya," he exclaimed, rushing to attack the green-haired man. "Let's get to it," exclaimed Setsuna, smiling sideways and dividing different parts of her body to start bouncing between the walls and ceilings in the direction of Izuku to help Tetsu. "You guys take a step back." Kendo told the others to get a little further away, and they obeyed except for Uraraka and Ibara, who would take action as soon as they saw the opportunity. Tetsu arrives in front of the green-haired man to throw a combo of punches at his torso, but Izuku surrounds himself with one for all and receives the punches without flinching and without stopping his advance, which surprised the boy and the others, but that did not stop the gray-haired man from continuing to attack. While Setsuna and different parts of his body arrived next to the boys to start hitting specifically the green-haired man who was receiving the blows on his body, but despite that he kept walking in a straight line to reach the group. There were approximately 14 parts in which the girl divided her body, and her entire head was hitting the boy from different angles in a chaotic way, along with the attacks of Tetsu, who gave his all, but achieved nothing. "He doesn't flinch," exclaimed Setsuna, somewhat frustrated by the ineffectiveness of their joint efforts to stop him. Kendo quickly came over to support them and delivered a few martial kicks to the boy and then enlarged his right hand. "Take this," Kendo exclaimed, then clenched his hand into a giant fist to throw it at Izuku's face. But the next thing caused everyone to be surprised, as Izuku stopped Kendo's big punch with one hand and with great ease. Then he grabs her by the wrist and pulls her towards him to wrap an arm around her waist while her hair continued to shadow her eyes, which added to his silence made the girl instinctively become somewhat docile and feel nervous. But before Izuku could do anything to her, Tetsu punches her in the face without doing much and pulls Kendo away from the green hair, waking her up from that brief trance in which she was for a few seconds before the aura that Izuku gave off. "Thank you," Kendo said to his friend, and he smiled without giving it any importance. Setsuna made his parts take distance while Izuku resumed his advance. "It's my turn," exclaimed Uraraka determinedly, and preparing her palms to reach the front of Izuku and plant the pads of her fingers on Izuku's chest. Following that, Uraraka activates his quirk on Izuku, causing it to begin to float slightly until it reaches the ceiling. This would be a sign of victory for the group, but they were amazed to see how the boy positioned himself to plant his feet on the surface of the roof to begin walking on it. "Ibara-chan," said Momo to the B-class saint, who understood that it was her turn to act. "Please let's not fight anymore," Ibara said, clasping her hands on his chest while the vines of her hair stretched and went in Izuku's direction to surround his body and trap him, causing him to stop moving as he had no gravity or foothold to lean on. "It looks like it won't be a problem anymore," Kendo said, sighing with a small smile when he saw that they had already managed to stop and immobilize him. But then they watched as Izuku, still covered by the One for All, shrank his arms for a few moments and then applied force and freed himself, tearing Ibara's hair and causing some breezes to hit the group who covered their eyes. "Is it still moving?" Toru asked, astonished to see how the boy, being free again, began to walk gently along the roof in their direction. "It can't be. Ibara's hair can even immobilize Shishido," Yui said, a little stunned and open-mouthed when she saw how the boy had gotten rid of Ibara's hair. It was disconcerting. In front of them they had the boy who was unstoppable. He advanced and did not let himself be held. He received each blow without being really affected. He walked without losing his composure or changing his calm and silent attitude. "It's unstoppable. Don't think we'll let you go on," cried Setsuna, plucking up the courage to go back to the attack, and the parts of his body went back to the green-haired man. "Take this," exclaims Tetsu loudly to also furiously hit the boy, who again received them with a slight recoil as he was without gravity, but still showed no signs of really backing down. The reason is because he had embedded his feet in the ceiling. Izuku makes a movement with his right arm to push some parts of Setsuna's leg away to deflect them to hit Tetsu, who despite receiving them was preparing a punch to the face of the green-haired man. But he grabs him by the wrist and throws him backwards against a wall, which caused pain in the boy, but he got up again. All the others noticed that Izuku, by the force of his feet embedded in the ceiling, caused several cracks to begin to come together and gave the concern that the roof was going to collapse. "Free him before he goes to destroy the roof," said Kendo to Uraraka, and she nodded her head to join her fingers and free the green-haired man from the control of his quirk, causing him to regain gravity, and he fell to the ground on one knee to get up again to face Setsuna and Tetsu who were pressing against him. "Kodai, Yanagi, it's your turn," Uraraka said to the two B-class girls who looked at each other and positioned themselves to make their attack together. Yui made some large pebbles and marbles that were then thrown by Ryako with her quirk in the direction of Izuku, who covered himself with his arms and made them crash into the walls as he continued to advance. "He's unstoppable, Jiro," Tsuyu commented, somewhat disconcerted when she saw that Izuku was facing Setsuna, Tetsu, Yui and Yanagi attacks, and even so, it wasn't very difficult for him to advance without being affected or hurt. "You haven't gotten rid of me yet," said Tetsu to the green-haired man as he clenched his fists and reached out to give him a powerful blow to the abdomen. The green-haired man takes the blow and doesn't move an inch. Tetsu looks up to see the eyes that were hidden under the shadow of Izuku's hair and turns pale with fear as he feels a shiver run down his spine. Izuku then grabs his wrist and with a bit of force knees him in the abdomen that blows the air out of him and causes Tetsu to fall to the ground while holding his aching stomach. "Tetsu," exclaimed Ibara, worried about her friend who was really affected by the green-haired man's attack that disabled the One for All. Izuku stared silently at the gray-haired man and grabbed his head with one hand to lift him up in the air and bury his head in one of the walls, and then slammed his skull into the ground. When he picks him up again, he notices that Tetsu had lost consciousness and his body was returning to normal, so he ruthlessly throws him across the hall, passing by the group of girls to crash into the wall and be knocked out. They were all worried about the boy's condition, but others like Setsuna were upset with the green-haired man for doing that. "You've gone too far, Midoriya," Setsuna exclaimed to Izuku angrily and increasing the speed of his body's attacks, but the boy was unaffected and caught Setsuna's head without difficulty. "Setsuna," exclaimed Kendo, worried about her friend who was now in Izuku's hands. Well, a part of it was in his hands literally. Despite looking surprised, Setsuna smiled confidently as she saw the boy with shadowed eyes. "This won't help you since I can split myself in," she said with the plan of splitting her head, but suddenly she is silenced by the lips of Izuku, who had brought her closer to him to kiss her, which caused her to open her eyes shocked, and the others were also surprised. She couldn't tear herself away from the kiss and her cheeks were blushing, before she realized that her body was reassembling, and as this happened Izuku brought her closer to her waist while she placed her hands on his chest, making the useless attempt to push him away. But clearly she couldn't. He is stronger, and she for her part fell more and more into the sensation of the kiss. "I was trapped in every aspect." After a few seconds, Izuku pulls away from the kiss, leaving a panting and blushing Setsuna, who had her head resting on his chest in a docile and vulnerable manner. He turns to look at the other girls who still couldn't get over their surprise at seeing him. More than one had flushed cheeks at seeing such a scene. Izuku grinned sideways fiercely as his eyes were still hidden. "One less," he said, causing those present to shudder and then embedding his black whips in a duct in the ceiling to take Setsuna with him at great speed. "Yes, he took Setsuna away," Yui said, gaping and looking at the ventilation shaft with a slight blush on her cheeks. "Midoriya was unstoppable. We couldn't stop him in the slightest," Yanagi said in the same way, seeing the place where the green-haired man went with his friend. It is worth mentioning that no matter how calm her expression was, she still had a faint blush accompanying her. Momo and Toru approached the Tetsu followed by the others. "How is Tetsu-kun?" asked Uraraka to her friends who were checking on the gray-haired boy who looked really hurt after his encounter with Izuku. "He's just unconscious just like the rest of the boys," Momo replied, breathing a sigh of relief that he wasn't seriously injured, which was refreshing to the others who felt calmer about it. "Is your hair okay, Shizaki-san?" Toru asked her green-haired friend who had her hair a little shorter after Izuku tore it apart as she broke free. "It's just a little shorter. If there was water or sun there would be no problem growing it again. I'd say I could only use it another 2 times. Ibara replied with a slight smile, seeing the girl disguised as a nurse who had been very kind to care about her. "We can't stop moving. We have to take advantage of the fact that it's not there for us to go up to the 3rd floor, Yui said to the others who agreed with her. "We couldn't stop him even a little bit," Kendo said, clenching a fist in front of him and then showing determination. "That's why we must hurry to rescue them all. Let's go," added the president of Class B, and they all nodded and then began the race to the stairs that would take them to the 3rd floor. I opened my eyelids slowly, waking up and getting up a little to rub my eyes and look in different directions to try to recognize the place where I was. Where am I? What am I doing here? Those are the questions I ask myself when I see the dark place in which I find myself that is only illuminated by an emergency light located on the ceiling. This is a very spacious place, with a very high ceiling, and mostly the place is empty except for a large machine stuck to one of the walls. It seems to be some kind of generator, but its design does not convince me at all. It looks more like a typical machine of a video game, but I don't think about it anymore. I can also see how in a corner of the place there is an elevator entrance. I guess that's the way the others will take to get here. I inspect my own clothes and notice that I'm wearing a secretary's outfit, a secretary's moment. I remember everything. What happened with the stupid game created by Mina, then Midoriya's escape to the B-class dormitories, and then I was brought here by him to make me. I feel that my face is colored a lot and I cover my face with my hands. It was like what he did to Momo, Uraraka, and Tsuyu. It was very embarrassing. It felt good and I can say that to myself, but I'm still very sad to remember it. So I'm in the generator room, that's a good thing, but I remember that Tsunotori and Komori were also with me, that Midoriya had also brought them to do the same thing to them. I look around the place while my vision slowly gets used to the darkness that occupies the whole area. Luckily I can see them a few meters away from me. They both have their clothes somewhat unkempt just like me. After all, they were also assaulted by Midoriya. Tsunotori, Komori-san, wake up, Kyoyuka said to both of them, and I can hear them moaning slightly to start waking up. Jiro-sen, asks Komori, looking at me confused while rubbing her eye, which is normal considering it's past midnight. Normally we'd all be asleep. Well, I'd be at what was supposed to be a sleepover that we usually have on Saturdays when we go out together, but because of the game that didn't happen. What happened? Asked Pony, somewhat frightened as she looked in different directions of the dark place. There was no need for me to answer since I could see in the faces of both of them how they remembered what happened, which was remarkable for the nervousness they showed in their expressions. Oh God, it really wasn't a dream then, Komori said, covering her cheeks with her hands. It's not like I could see the blush on her cheeks, but I can still imagine it. After all, it's normal for a girl to be embarrassed after. What happened? Didn't you mean nightmare? I asked her, smiling tiredly and assuming that she chose her words wrongly. I doubt that she really considered that experience good enough to consider it a dream. Now that I think about it, I hope I'm right and that he didn't like what Midoriya did to him. Yes, of course, that's right, she said, smiling at me a little nervously, which only aggravated a little of my discomfort with what she really meant, but I have more important things to focus on right now. We're next to the generator. If we turn it on, we'll be able to make it easier for the others to find us, I told both of them, who, after listening to me, turned their attention to the showy and eccentric machine that is supposed to be the generator of electricity for the entire building. But where's Midoriya? Asked Tsunotori openly, and I also wondered the same thing, but at the same time I had a bad feeling. I hear a hissing sound coming from somewhere on the ceiling, as if something is falling, and I focus on a vent that was open in the ceiling. It was only a matter of seconds to see how something or someone at high speed fell from there to the ground, causing a slight tremor and the ground to raise a little dust around the object. The three of us got together and observed how the one who had fallen was Midoriya, who was with his knee resting on the ground without really being hurt by the fall, which seems normal to me considering that he is not for nothing that he is Yui's strongest student. But I am slightly surprised to see that in his arms he carries a tired, panting Takage who had a blush on her cheeks. All I can think of is that he did the same thing to her on the way here when he found the opportune moment to do so. Setsuna-chan. I hear Komori exclaim worriedly about her friend, which I understand, but it's not like I've hurt her, so I think she's fine. Did you do the same thing to us? Asked Tsunotori, sounding nervous and with a blush on her cheeks. I'm sure she knew it the moment she saw her and only asked, looking for one of us to deny. Of course I wish she hadn't done anything to you. Probably, I answered, trying to give him a vague answer. Perhaps it would be better for him to think that nothing happened. Midoriya approached us and deposited Takage slowly and delicately on the ground and then turned around to the place where he landed as if he planned to climb back into the conduit to go kidnap the others. I take a breath to calm down and then stand up to start walking slowly towards him. Why are you approaching? Asked Tsunotori, I think worried about me, or maybe I'm just confused by my illogical action. Anyway, I turn my head slightly to look at him. Someone must try to calm him down, I replied calmly and then walked slowly towards him, feeling freer. After all, I don't have those devilish heels on anymore that left my feet crushed. Midoriya, please control yourself and listen to me. You are out of control and you will get in trouble if you continue. We just want to help you, I said to Midoriya in front of me, who stopped in his tracks when he heard me. I guess I managed to capture his attention with my words. He turns to look at me and I can see how his eyes are covered by the shadow of his hair. He has an intimidating air, I admit it, and under normal circumstances I would be scared. But it's him. It's still Midoriya, and outside of feeling scared I feel somehow attracted to him. And I don't know in what sense, but that's not something I should think about right now. Midoriya begins to slowly approach me without saying anything, and I stay still in my place trying to keep my composure, calm, in control. I must be firm so as not to be caught off guard. That's why I keep looking at him even when he stops in front of me, noticing how tall he is. Still I remain very calm and there is no need to get upset, even though he has held my chin delicately with one of his hands. Of course this is nothing to me. It's something I can handle even with my eyes closed. That's why I have them closed while he's kissing me on the lips. I couldn't resist at all. It was so fluid and natural that I just didn't have any intention of putting up resistance. It happened, and I can feel how Komori, Tsunotori, and Takage gasp in surprise to see how I was forced to kiss him. Of course, I hope they believe that and don't know that I actually like this feeling. He pulls away from the kiss while holding my chin delicately so that I would remain staring at his face. You guys already played. It's my turn, he said in a deep tone that seemed provocative to me, which made me blush, but at the same time a crazy thought came to my mind. He maybe remembers what we've been doing to him so far in the game. After saying that, he lets go of me and starts to walk away again in the direction of the place where he landed. I for my part am a little disconcerted by his words, not out of embarrassment or something as silly as that, it's just that I really hate that he knows that we play with him as if it were a prize. Of course my motives are to prevent him from staying with Mina or Uraraka, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I participated and did the things I did, to the point where at some point I thought about acting selfishly and winning the game to keep it. I hate that he thinks that way about me. The ignition lever, exclaimed Pony, pointing to a certain part of the wall next to the generator. I look closely and can see that it seems to be bent and stuck in an unusual way, while next to it there is a panel of buttons and commands. I suppose he took precautions to prevent us from returning the light to the bedroom. Aren't you going to stop? I asked him with a certain seriousness in my tone as I watched him stop at the spot where he landed. He turned to look over his shoulder at me while his eyes were still covered by the shadow of his hair. I could see a faint smile on his face as he asked, "Did you do it?" he said, leaving me speechless and then proceeding to make a great leap that made him enter cleanly through the ventilation shaft through which he arrived. Yes, he's right. We didn't stop. We were doing something wrong, and surely we were all aware of that, but we still didn't stop the game. Anyway, that's something I should think about another time. For now, we need Momo to get down here so that she can use something created with her quirk to be able to use the power stick. The faster this situation ends, the faster I can stop all the madness of the stupid game. Now we move with the girls on the third floor, who were walking through the corridors in the direction of the stairs at the other end. The reason for this was because the stairs they climbed were destroyed on their way to the fourth floor, so they were forced to go to the others. It's good that we were able to get to the third floor, but apparently he took steps about it so that we couldn't go up there. Yui commented calmly while both she and the others walked at a slightly faster pace than usual. After all, they must have hurried, but they couldn't run much because they had to save their energy and keep on guard. He blocked the stairs leading to the fourth floor, forcing us to go to the stairs at the other end, Momo said seriously as she illuminated the path with a flashlight, thinking that she could have used the tranquilizers on Izuku. But it would be risky in case it hit Setsuna, Kendo, or Uraraka, but if it hit Tetsu's skin it would be a waste of a shot. Why don't you just block all the stairs so we don't go up? Asked Toru, clearly confused, because the most logical thing would have been for Izuku to have destroyed the stairs as well so that they wouldn't go up to the third floor. Because he's probably just playing with us. To hunt us down, Yanagi said serenely without turning to look at the invisible nurse, who felt somewhat frightened by the way Ryuko put everything in the situation. At that moment they were prisoners following the path he decided. The good thing is that we haven't met him yet, Uraraka commented, smiling with relief, and the others were about to shut her up, but they didn't do it in time. A shame, because they couldn't help but invoke that something bad happened. He was close. Slight footsteps began to be heard behind them, and they all stopped in their tracks with sudden fear in the air, and then slowly turned their heads back to see Izuku, who in the same way he had done before was walking towards them in silence and at a steady pace. Saying those things only makes something bad happen, Mina said to Uraraka by way of reprimand as the chestnut rubbed her head with a nervous smile. What do? We can't stop him, Jiro, Tsuyu wondered, clearly aware that they couldn't beat him. The boys in Class A couldn't, those in Class B couldn't either. They themselves had been outclassed minutes ago. Izuku is simply unstoppable. Ibara took a few steps forward, somewhat fearful. And she said with her head bowed, and then raised it with a determined look. I'll stay to keep him, she said, plucking up her courage and causing surprise in the others. What are you talking about? You can't stay with him, Kendo said to his green-haired friend worriedly, because he didn't want to lose her too. Ibara turned to look at them with a gentle, pure smile. I'll buy you time to get to the top. You go at once to rescue our friends, she said to them with all the good faith she could have as the saint of Class B, really very touching. No way, we're not going to leave you behind, Kendo replied clearly, denying the possibility of abandoning his friend. It's true, Shizaki-san, we're in this together, Toru said to Ibara with joy and assurance in his voice, making it clear that he was speaking honestly. Momo walked over to Ibara to place a hand on her shoulder. I agree, after all it doesn't make sense if we abandon ourselves to get to the generator, said the black-haired woman with a gentle and kind smile, seeing Ibara. It would feel bad to leave her to her fate against Izuku. She wouldn't let something like that happen. After all, it was partly her fault that she was in that situation. I wouldn't let her have to pay for it. We're going to stay here with you, Yui said to Ibara with a slight smile, while next to her Yanagi, Uraraka, and Mina nodded in agreement with her. It would really be a very touching moment of friendship if it weren't for the fact that they began to hear slow, soft applause coming from Izuku, who stood silent and still a few feet away from them while he had a faint smile on his face. Am I the only one who has a bad feeling? Asked Uraraka, smiling nervously and with some trepidation, while others shook their heads in the same state as her. Izuku stopped his applause and raised his right hand to point it at them. He held his middle finger with his thumb to apply pressure while coating his fingers with a tiny percentage of One for All, which caused everyone to remember what happened at the sports festival his first year. The way Izuku attacked Todoroki. "Cover yourselves," Ibara shouted to all of them and then made a big shield with her hair while Izuku released her finger and a great air pressure not as strong as that of the sports festival was sweeping down the corridor until it collided with the shield of Ibara, lines that were strongly affected and tear. But they succeeded in protecting them, but her hair had been shortened to the height of her shoulders. They were all coughing a little from the dust as they regained their vision to notice that the walls of the hallway were really damaged and Izuku was still standing motionless in place as if it was nothing he did. "5, he said, causing everyone to get confused. "What are you saying?" asked Hinagi, intrigued and raising an eyebrow. 4, Izuku continued, and Toru was slightly startled. "He's counting. He's planning to do something," said the invisible girl with the feeling that he was only giving them time to run away, as if he was giving them a slight advantage since otherwise they would have to deal with him. 3, said the green-haired man with a small smile on his face while the others were under pressure at the moment. "Hurry away while I'll hold you back," Ibara said to them all earnestly as she stepped forward and clasped her hands on her chest ready to sacrifice herself for her friends. "We told you we're not going to abandon you," Kendo said to the green-haired woman with no intention of abandoning her, no matter how much he was afraid to find out what Izuku would do to them when they reached 0. Ibara turned to look seriously at Itsuka. "The point is that they get to the generator to recover the light and save the others. Anyway, if he catches me he will end up taking me there, so we will meet later," he said with the intention of reassuring her and perhaps giving her the comfort of seeing each other later. After all, with Izuku things were unpredictable. "But," said Uraraka trying to reply, but she just didn't have words to argue against it. No matter how she looked, the most logical way would be to take advantage of the time to move forward. But I still didn't want to leave her. It's not the right thing to do. That's not what Deku would do. He'd stay no matter what the consequences. Ibara noticed the concern on her friends' faces and smiled gently at them. "Midoriya has shown us that he is not going to hurt us, so I will be fine. You must leave now," he said, trying to calm them down. "But it wouldn't be right to abandon you, Jiro," Tsuyu said with a bad taste in his mouth for the decision they had to make. 2, said the green-haired man, reminding them all that the clock is ticking and they had to make their decision. "Go now," Ibara said to her friends earnestly as she faced Izuku. "I'll stay with you, Jiro," Tsuyu said to Ibara, causing surprise in her and the others when she saw him take a few steps to be at her side. "I can't do much, but I don't want to leave you alone, Shizaki-chan," she said, smiling slightly. "Asui-san," said Ibara with her mouth slightly open and moved by the actions of the green-haired woman dressed as an angel. "You can call me Tsuyu," Tsuyu replied, smiling kindly at her friend. 1, Izuku continued, causing the others to grit their teeth in frustration and decide to continue. "We'll rescue you, just wait for us," cried Mina to the 2 green-haired women, while she and the others hurried toward the stairs. "Hold on." Uraraka encouraged Ibara and Tsuyu, who would be remembered for their heroic deed. They were undoubtedly heroines. Once they were alone, Tsuyu and Ibara stared with conviction at the green-haired man in front of them. They were willing to give as much time as possible to their friends. Izuku smiled sideways fiercely at the sight of both of them's looks. 0 minutes later, the girls were running through the corridors of the 4th floor after hurriedly climbing the stairs which, as expected, were blocked on the way up to the 5th floor, so they would have to go to the stairs at the other end. "Let's keep running. We must take advantage of the time Ibara and Tsuyu-chan gave us," said Momo to the others as they continued running. She took off her heels before going up the stairs to run more easily. "I'm hearing him moving through the vents," cried Toru, and the others also began to hear the sound of the boy moving above them with speed. "Be careful and don't get caught. We are close to reaching the stairs," Kendo said to all of them seriously, and out of nowhere from a ceiling duct came the black wisp whips that this time imprisoned Mina. "Kaio!" shrieked Mina, slightly frightened at being caught and then pulled by him. "Ashido!" exclaimed Yui, worried that both she and Yanagi and Uraraka would pull her arms to try to keep her with them. Yanagi in this case came up with the idea of using his quirk on the hairy one to have more support, but even so they could not do much against the strength of the black wisp. To the girls' surprise, more whips emerged from the chute to cling to the hands of Yanagi, Yui, and Uraraka, who were still struggling to save the hairy woman. Izuku saw an opportunity to fish for a combo of 4 girls instead of just one. "Let go of me or he'll take them too," said Mina to her friends, trying to save them so that they could continue with the objective. "I'm not even crazy to let me take you," replied Uraraka, closing her eyes and pulling him. After all, she didn't want another one to be taken by Izuku. If that was to be the case, she was willing to be the kidnapped one instead of feeling useless again for not being able to save them. Mina smiled kindly at her brunette friend. "Not that he was going to kill me, he's just going to take me to the generator with the others. I'll see them downstairs," said the hairy woman to the 3 of them, and then let them go and be the only one to be introduced through the conduit. "Mina!" exclaimed Toru, holding out a worried hand, but it was too late. Izuku had taken it. although it was no secret that the hairy woman would enjoy what was going to happen to her. Let's move quickly before he comes back for us, Kendo said to all of them seriously, and the others agreed with determined looks and then resumed the race. Minutes later, the 6 girls were running through the halls of the 5th floor after climbing the stairs. Kodai-san, where did you see the door? Momo asked the black-haired B-class girl who had said she had seen the door to the room. This way, Yui replied seriously to begin guiding them all to a corridor that at the end had a very inconspicuous door that went unnoticed because of its color similar to the walls of the corridors. Once at the front of the door, Kendo enlarged his right hand. Get out of the way, said the orange-haired woman to the others who obeyed to give her room to bang the door, opening it abruptly. When the dark room was open, they all entered and pointed their flashlights at the narrow and small place that only had an upholstered floor with a luxurious red carpet and the entrance to the elevator, which was golden. Momo created a lever with which to open the doors a little, and then Kendo enlarged her hands and completed the job, and then all entered the narrow place that was supposed to take them directly to the generator room where her friends would be. And how are we going to get down if there's no light? Asked Araka, realizing the fact he hadn't thought of before. Leave that to me, Yanagi said calmly, and then made use of his quirk Poltergeist to start manually moving the elevator down at a slower speed than normal. Kendo folded his arms seriously. We must have a plan on the way down, he said, as they would have to have a strategy to stop Izuku when they saw him. The first thing will be to confirm the status of the others. Between all of us we will try to dialogue with Izuku-kun so that he can come to his senses, Momo said to the orange-haired woman while she closes her eyes and adjusts her teacher's glasses that incredibly had not fallen off. Besides, it is not as if she needed to use them, but she had already entered character. What if he doesn't? I haven't seen him stop so far, Yui commented, and they all had to agree with him. After all, he has shown no signs of listening to them or being open to dialogue. I'll shoot him the tranquilizers and then we'll tie him up with the rope to take him to our bedroom, Momo replied seriously, and several agreed with his plan. Do you really think that's enough? I think I could easily avoid it, Yanagi said calmly, remembering how fast Izuku is that he could easily dodge tranquilizers. Not if they distract him, Momo replied with a slight smile, making it clear that someone must keep him still. Uraraka raised his hand with a determined look. I'll distract him. He tried to make a plan with the others to prevent him from escaping through the vents, the chestnut said to the others, and they agreed with her and nodded their heads. In a matter of a couple of minutes they all arrived at the generator room and again opened the doors and then proceeded to point their flashlights at the place as they exited the elevator. They noticed that it was well lit enough to see and noticed how their friends were in the place who had some flashlights with them. Girls, exclaimed Toru, glad to see them as he approached and caught their attention, for there were Pony, Kinoko, Kyoyuka, Setsuna standing while on the floor lay panting and exhausted Tsuyu, Mina and Ibara who had her hair a little shorter than before. Are you okay? Yui asked everyone in general, and Setsuna placed her hands on her waist. Don't worry, the ones who can't move yet are Asui, Ashido and Ibara because of their treatment, if you know what I mean, Setsuna replied with a playful and slightly mischievous smile that made the black-haired woman blush slightly. What did Deku-kun do to you? Asked Uraraka with a slight blush on her cheeks, and the truth was that she didn't want to find out, but curiosity got the better of her. And we don't want to talk about that, Kinoko replied, blushing as well and lowering her head nervously as she played with her fingers. After all, she couldn't go into detail about the way the green-haired man stimulated her. It was something she would keep to herself. Where is he? Momo asked the crowd intriguedly, and Kyoyuka walked over with her arms crossed. He must have gone to look for them. We have a few minutes before he notices that they got here, Kyoyuka replied with a slight smile, and Momo replied in the same way. She was happy that her friend and ally was well within what fits. Okay, we have to tell you the plan we have prepared, Kendo said to the girls who were in the generator, and then with the help of Yui, Yanagi, Toru and Uraraka tell the others what they had planned. Kyoyuka, on the other hand, walked away from the group and approached Momo. Momo-chan, I need to tell you something, she said to her friend with relative seriousness, and then grabbed her arm, and then both of them moved a few feet away from the others to talk privately. What's wrong, Kyoyuka-chan? Momo asked her friend intriguedly and a little worried about her tone since it seemed serious enough for them to have to stay away from the others. Kyoyuka was silent for a few seconds, staring at the ground, then looked up seriously. After we manage to get Midoriya back to our dormitories we should stop the game, she said to Momo, causing the dark-haired woman to widen her eyes slightly. What? Why? Asked Momo in a mixture of confusion and surprise as she didn't expect her ally to say that to her at that moment. Kyoyuka looked away in another direction as she folded her arms. Don't ask the reason. You clearly know that there are many reasons not to continue or to start at first, but we stupidly accepted Mina's terms, Jiru replied, annoyed with herself after thinking the whole thing over carefully. We must stop, he added, lowering his head a little. Momo listened to what her friend said calmly and then smiled at her slightly. I understand what you're saying and you're right, but it's too late to back down. Uraraka and Toru only have one life and Mina has 2 left. We're finishing, Momo said to Jiru, trying to encourage her to continue a little longer. They were in the home stretch. Kyoyuka turned to look him straight in the eye. You're wrong, it's just the right time to finish this before we go too far, Jiru said, determined to make Momo understand that they had to stop, that what they were doing was wrong. Momo became a little serious at Kyoyuka's tone. I won't stop. I'll prevent Mina and Uraraka from staying with Izuku-kun, Momo replied, firmly motivated to achieve her goal as she crossed her arms. Really, the best method to make sure that he wasn't going to be Mina and Uraraka's was to win it, as selfish as it sounds. Jiro took a few breaths to calm himself down and softened his expression to place his hands on Momo's shoulders. Please just think about it. Think about Midoriya, Kyoyuka pleaded, with Momo trying to get her to come to her senses, but the black-haired woman responded by lowering her head while putting a hand to her heart. I do all this for him. It was for him all the time, Momo replied, feeling her pace speed up a bit and her cheeks flushed slightly, which took Jiro by surprise. Momo-chan? Asked Kyoyuka, a little surprised and hoping that what she heard wasn't what she thought, hoping she heard wrong. Momo again regained her composure and looked at Kyoyuka with a confident and conviction-filled gaze. I'm going to win this game with or without your help. I can't let Izuku-kun fall into the wrong hands, she said clearly, meaning what she was saying. That's a lot farther than a friend would do, Kyoyuka told her friend and ally, hoping that she would know her limits, that she would realize that she was just that. A friend. Momo blushed slightly as she looked away in another direction. And I don't want to be just his friend, she replied, a little nervous inside as her feelings for the green-haired man surfaced as she remembered his way of being and the way he makes her feel. What? Asked Kyoyuka, distraught and letting go of Momo's shoulders at the surprise she received. Momo shook her head, still blushing. You wouldn't understand, this is something much deeper than that stupid game. I'm doing this for me, he said with his hands held on his chest as he closed his eyes slightly. I know I'm selfish, I know I'm only thinking about myself, but... She continued talking and then turned her attention to her friend with a confident look. I'm fine with that. I'm not perfect and I don't aspire to be. I'm only fine if Izuku-kun is by my side. That's why I want to be with him, Momo said, coming to her own resolution and smiling slightly as she had her goal clear. Wanting to win Izuku's love. Then it's like that, Kyoyuka said, lowering his head a little, and his eyes were covered by the shadow of his eyes. I'm sorry we don't share Kyoyuka-chan opinions, but I won't be retiring from the game, Momo said firmly and decisively as she lamented the effect this conversation would have on their alliance. You don't have to say anything, Momo-chan, Kyoyuka said with a small smile on her face, then looked up. I'm not going to retire after all, Jiro added, smiling sideways and with a confident look that took Momo by surprise. Kyoyuka-chan? Asked Momo, confused and surprised by her friend's words. Kyoyuka moved closer to Momo to the point that their melons bumped into each other. If you're going to be selfish, then I'll be selfish too, she said defiantly as she placed her hands on her waist with a more imposing bearing. I'll be the one to keep Midoriya, Jiro added with a determined look in clear defiance of Momo, who remained surprised for a few seconds before she became serious. The atmosphere became tense and the meeting between their gazes caused sparks. Clearly Kyoyuka was shorter in height than Momo, but that did not prevent her determined expression from rivaling that of Momo, who would not give up on her goal. They both knew the other had feelings for Izuku and neither was willing to leave him in the other's hands. Their alliance has been broken. BOOM. A sudden rumble caught the attention of all the girls, who focused their attention on a cloud of dust that had formed as Izuku fell from the ventilation shaft in the ceiling, causing them all to become alert and Tsuyu, Ibara, and Mina to stand up more recovered than before. Do it as we planned, Kendo said to all the others with authority, and they nodded to act according to what they had planned. They all slowly began to form a circle around the green-haired man who was standing silently in the same spot where he landed. Some were pointing at him with their flashlights. Then, having him surrounded, Uraraka began to walk towards him slowly and cautiously, while he looked at him silently with shadowed eyes. Deku-kun, Uraraka said, a little nervous, but trying to control herself to keep the boy's attention on her. You know who I am, don't you? Asked the brunette, smiling a little, trying to form a rational conversation, but Izuku remained silent. Please stay calm. As you can see, we are all here with you. There is no need to continue with this. You won, Ochako said to the green-haired man as he continued to slowly approach him. But even with that, Izuku remains silently unresponsive while Momo prepares a blowgun and places a tranquilizer inside, preparing to shoot Izuku in the neck or somewhere on his back. Now that you've won, come with us to our dormitories and all this will be forgotten, Uraraka said to Izuku in the most gentle and kind way she could while she was already 2 meters away from the boy. Did I win? Izuku asked, causing the brunette to nod nervously. Yes, you won, Deku-kun, replied Uraraka, hoping that he would be reassured of his own free will. Izuku crunches his fingers and grins from the side fiercely as he steps forward, causing the brunette to become alert and take a step back while the others brace themselves for some kind of sudden movement he might make. It's not fun this way, Izuku said, starting to walk slowly towards the chestnut that took a few steps backwards until it stopped, because its objective was not to run away but to be of use to the others so that Momo could shoot the tranquilizer at him. And none of this is fun for us, Uraraka said to him with a bit of seriousness on his face, waiting for Momo to fire the sedative once and for all. As I remember, you were having fun with me before, Izuku replied, smiling with amusement and causing Uraraka and the others involved in the game to stiffen and paralyzed while the girls in Class B looked confused. And I don't know what you're talking about, Ochako said, trying to sound convincing as she denied what he said. The last thing she needed was for the B-class girls to know the kind of things they did with the green-haired man. Momo finally fires the first tranquilizer at Izuku's neck, but they didn't expect him to surround her body with one for all, increasing his physical endurance and tensing his muscles, causing the small syringe to fail to penetrate his skin and break to fall to the ground. Izuku continued walking towards Uraraka calmly, and Momo shot him again with another sedative, obtaining the same result, which put them in a bit of a complicated situation. "Shall we attack him?" asked Setsuna to Kendo, who was standing beside him. "We won't accomplish anything. Let's see what he does," Yui replied calmly, and Kendo agreed with her. After all, they could make the attempt to stop him, but now they were all aware that they would be outclassed by him. This was certainly similar to the superiority that Mirio showed when defeating an entire class. That's the level of the strongest student in the academy, and the closest he is to being the #1 hero. That's the potential of Izuku Midoriya. Izuku finally ends up stopping in front of Uraraka, who had remained motionless and was looking at him expectantly, waiting for him to come to his senses. He didn't worry about if something bad happened to him. After all, the chestnut had complete confidence in him. Her next action took both her and the others by surprise. Izuku had gently approached her to give her a kiss on the forehead in an affectionate manner, and then placed a hand on Uraraka's head so that she would lay it on her warm and chiseled chest. "It was fun," Izuku said calmly as the brunette looked up at his face. "Deku-kun?" asked Uraraka, blushing and clearly seeing the green eyes of her friend, who had a blush on his cheeks from the alcohol, which until now had been covered by shadows. Izuku lowered his head to look at the brunette with a faint silly smile. "It was exciting to play catch with you girls, but I beat you," he said, tilting his head slightly to the side innocently. "Is he still drunk?" asked Yanagi, a little disconcerted by this sudden change of attitude. "Probably," replied Mina with a simple shrug. After all, at this point nothing was logical in the boy's drunken state. He is certainly a unique case. "I beat them, so that's why I'm going to take my reward," Izuku said to all of them in a friendly way, causing them to get confused. "Reward, Jiro?" asked Tsuyu, intrigued and with a finger on her chin, and then surprised along with the others to see how he activated the one for all in his body, and then moved at a great speed. At one point Izuku was already in front of Yui and Yanagi, who were out of place to have the front of him. Before they reacted, he wrapped his arms around their waists to attract them to him and first kissed Yui passionately on the lips, taking her completely by surprise and making her cheeks blush, and she tried to push him away and then lose the desire to resist. Yanagi, after getting out of his surprise, tries to push him away with his quirk, but Izuku gets ahead of him and lets go of Yui's lips and then kisses Ryuko on the lips, while the black-haired B-class catches her breath, a little panting. "Shoot him again, Momo. I'll tie him up with the rope," Kendo said to Momo seriously, and she nodded to shoot Izuku in the back with a tranquilizer again, but he quickly reacts by separating from the kiss with Ryuko to turn around and stop the projectile by catching it with one hand, avoiding the syringe. In one swift movement, he moves away from Yui and Ryuko to reach the front of Kendo, taking her by surprise and then trapping her in his arms and cornering her against a wall. "But what?" Kendo asked, surprised and blushing slightly when she saw the position they were in, because he was very close to her. He had one arm on the wall while his other arm was on Kendo's hip, in addition to the fact that one of his legs was in the middle of those of the orange-haired woman, making him feel vulnerable. "SHHH, you must not make noise, Itsuka-chan," Izuku said to the president in a smiling way and with a slightly playful smile, and then shortening the distance between them while his eyes were fixed on the other. "Midoriya?" asked Itsuka, blushing and widening her eyes nervously as her heart beat fast from the closeness between their faces and his intense gaze. He closes his eyes and walks over to Kendo to sniff his neck a bit. "You smell great," said the green-haired man with a shuddering tone for the girl, who put her hands on his chest, making the futile effort to push him away. After all, for some reason the strength of his body had completely left him. "Stop," Itsuka said to the boy in front of her as she closed her eyes in embarrassment and felt a tingle inside her as she felt his breath on the skin of her neck. "Stop me," Izuku replied, and then gently took her chin and then put their lips together in a kiss while the others refrained from attacking as they could hurt Itsuka by accident. After a minute, Izuku lets her go, leaving a strand of saliva between her lips while Kendo stares at him, mesmerized and with her cheeks flushed. "Midoriya," Kendo said, seeing the emerald orbs of the green-haired man in front of him, but suddenly he dropped on top of her, who held him. "Midoriya?" asked Kendo, confused and a little worried, seeing the boy who out of nowhere seemed dizzy. He raised his head, showing his somewhat silly expression accompanied by a smile. "Now I've won and I'm #1, said the boy in a gawking and playful tone, and then lowered his head again. "Are we safe yet?" asked Ibara as she and the others approached Kendo, who was now holding by the arm of Izuku, who looked weak and vulnerable compared to before. "I think so," Momo replied, breathing a sigh of relief that the green-haired man's frenzy had passed. "Anyway, let's tie him up," said Pony, wanting to prevent any mishap, and all the others agreed, and with the rope that Momo created, they tied his arms behind his back and sat him on the ground so that later everyone would have their eyes on him. "You taste very good," said Izuku, smiling innocently, looking in the direction of Ryuko, Yui and Itsuka, who blushed monstrously and then averted their gazes, remembering their kisses with the green hair. "Now what should we do with him?" asked Kanoko, looking at the others with intrigue. "I have a lot of good ideas," exclaimed Izuku with joy and a big smile. No idea where we'll give you more alcohol, Momo said to the boy seriously. I have 10 good ideas, he said, still in good spirits. No idea where we'll set you free, Uraraka stressed strictly to the green-haired man. I have a good idea, Izuku said, looking at them all with excitement. You don't have any contact with us, Kendo clarified, crossing his arms and looking seriously at the boy who puffed out his cheeks. Ew, it's good that everything is fine, Kanoko said, smiling, relieved that it's all over. First of all we must turn on the generator, Momo said calmly to the rest since the next thing they should do was to restore the light to the building. Apparently, he turned it off manually and forcibly locked the lever, Kyoyuka informed the black-haired woman while the newcomers were surprised to hear that. Apparently, the fact that he's drunk doesn't take away from his intelligence, Setsuna said, smiling amused and ruffling the hair of the boy who smiled happily. Give me a few minutes, Momo said calmly, and then went to the place where the lever was to devise a method to make it work again. Wait a minute, I haven't thought about this, but is he really drunk? Yui asked with a bit of intrigue and causing the others to think about it too. Well, he has drunk very large amounts of alcohol, and if we think that he has a low tolerance, then yes, that would explain his attitude, Yanagi replied, trying to give logic to the green-haired man's behavior. But seriously, a drunk person doesn't act that way, Yui said, crossing her arms, and the others agreed. Bone would be dizzy, he would say stupid things or even vomit, so why was he able to do all this? She asked with clear reasons, and all the others could not argue anything against it. After all, he traveled from dorm to dorm, beat the boys in the class and caused a situation of terror in which they had to make a complete tour of the structure to finally immobilize him. You're right, said Ibara, finding the whole situation really strange and unlikely. The only possible explanation is that the real green-haired man was aware of what he was doing, and the truth was that it didn't fit with the boy's kind and a little nervous personality. They shouldn't think about it so much, maybe it was the convenience of the script, Mina said with a simple shrug. What do you mean? Toru asked the hairy woman intriguedly. I really don't know, Mina replied, not really understanding why she had said that. Let's just keep the idea that alcohol has influenced him to act that way. The truth is that I don't have the energy to think about it anymore, Kendo said, sighing exhaustedly. And the others agreed with her. After all, it was almost 0:30 a.m. Don't you have something to say in your defense, Deku-kun? Said Uraraka to the green-haired boy a little tightly, with his hands on his waist. Lo Shinto Musho, Izuku replies childishly and adorably as he closes his eyes and lifts his head, causing all the girls in their minds to forgive him relatively easily. After all, they couldn't get mad at him knowing that he wasn't acting maliciously. Why did you hurt the boys? Kendo asked the boy with a bit of seriousness since he had really given them a reverent beating. Izuku tilted his head slightly to the side in confusion. Hurt, I thought we were training to fight. They threw themselves at me as well as Kaken, Todoroki-kun and the rest, said the green-haired man surprised and remembering the way Kaken grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. To keep you from drinking, Jiro, Tsuyu said, supposing that the whole conflict started because of the boy's abrupt way and asking the green-haired man to stop. But I was very thirsty, he said, complaining childishly, and then bowing his head in discouragement. Anyway, stay still and don't try to escape, okay? Toru said to the green-haired man kindly as he crouched a little at his level. Izuku looked up, smiling happily. Of course, Toru-chan, he replied in a playful and silly way so that the whole room would light up and the generator would start to generate noise. Now we have light, exclaimed Pony excitedly, raising her hands in the air while the others squinted a little, getting used to the sudden change in lighting of the place. It's all over, Yui sighed, relieved and smiling slightly. For you, Mina whispered, turning her head in another direction and scratching her head in feigned ignorance. After all, she and the others had business to attend to with the green-haired man when they returned to their bedrooms. If you want, we can accompany you to your dormitories to prevent her from escaping, Kendo proposed to the girls in class with a friendly smile. And the other girls in Case B had no problem agreeing to help. The girls in class were a little nervous at the proposal, and Uraraka shook her hands in front of him. And it's not necessary, we'll be able to do it on our own from now on, Uraraka said to the girls in Class B, trying to sound as calm as possible so as not to arouse suspicion. Come on, it won't be a problem for us to accompany you, will it? Said Setsuna to the girls of Class A with a relaxed smile and then received nods from the other members of Class B. Thank you girls, but it's our responsibility to make sure Midoriya doesn't keep making trouble, Mina replied smiling innocently and with her hands behind her back. After all, she is a master of deception. Besides, you already have your own problems with the destruction that he did to the whole building, Momo added calmly, and then they all remembered the mess that the boy had left. About that, what are we going to say to the teachers? Yanagi asked calmly, since the teachers would evidently wonder what the hell happened in both dormitories to make them in that state. We'll tell you that villains attacked both buildings, Kyoyuka replied with a small nonchalant smile. Are they really going to believe us? Asked Kanoko, doubting that they were really going to believe that lie. It's most likely, after all, what are you going to believe, that it was all done by villains or that it was Izuku-kun drunk? Asked Momo to the chestnut from the bee house calmly. He has a point, Setsuna said, acknowledging his logic, and the others agreed with the vice president of Class A. We also convinced the kids to keep it a secret and it will be the word of 40 students to make them believe us, Kendo added with a slight smile, looking for his classmates to take responsibility because they were also partly to blame for giving Izuku more alcohol. "We'd better go up," Toru said, and the others agreed with her and nodded their heads. Now the 13 girls were outside the dormitories of Class B. The girls were grouped in their respective classes looking at each other. "Are you sure you don't want us to go with you?" Kendo asked the girls in class again. "No thanks, we're confident you're not going to escape, are you, Deku-kun?" asked Uraraka to the green-haired boy who was floating above her with a friendly smile, because another rope had been tied to him and she activated her quirk to take him as if he were a balloon. A half-naked balloon that minutes ago was a predator that hunted them. "I'm being held against my will, no matter how much someone calls the police," Izuku said, complaining in a childish and adorable way in the eyes of the girls who saw him struggling slightly while floating tied up as if he were a worm. "We thank you very much for helping us," Momo said to the girls in Class B with a faint grateful smile, and then bowed and the others imitated him. "No problem. After all, we're friends," Setsuna replied, smiling relaxedly without giving it a second thought. "After all, it's not like they were going to leave you on their own when they were in their class dorms. They clearly had to intervene." "And friends share," added the green-haired woman, this time with a slightly mischievous expression as she looked specifically at Izuku, as she had to admit that it felt very good what he did to her when he caught her. "Okay?" asked Momo, surprised by the way the green-haired woman said those words, and then began to leave along with the other girls in Class A. "See you." Toru said goodbye with one hand raised with joy as Izuku smiled at the B-class girls as they walked away. "Bye-bye," replied Pony with a big smile, saying goodbye to the girls in the other class. The B-class girls stood in brief silence as the girls walked away along with Izuku until they lost sight of them. "We won't say anything about what happened tonight," Kendo said to her friends without turning to look at them, and they responded by nodding their heads in agreement. "I just have one question. Do you think they were hiding something?" asked Kanoko, looking at her friends with intrigue. "Absolutely," replied the others without hesitation. "Should we do something?" Ibara asked intriguingly, and Kendo calmly folded his arms. "We shouldn't meddle in their business. After all, maybe in other circumstances we wouldn't want them to meddle in our things either," Izuku replied with no intention of meddling in her affairs. Mostly because she didn't want to get into any more trouble, and I'm sure class were a magnet for that. Although she had to admit that it was tempting to intrude to get close to the green-haired boy who had stolen her first kiss. In Momo's room, the girls entered the room after the walk they had to go through and then left Izuku on the ground, when Uraraka deactivated his quirk, leaving him still tied up and making slight jumps as he was almost completely covered like a worm. "Please sit on the bed, Midoriya," Kyoyuka asked the green-haired man gently and with a soft smile. "Sure, Kyoyuka-chan," Izuku replied happily, and then went to sit on Momo's bed. "Could you free me? I'm being bothered by these ropes," he asked his friends while smiling innocently. "Should we?" Toru asked the rest of them, since they must have considered that if they let him go free he could do something again. "Forget it, I've already freed myself," Izuku said, catching the attention of the girls who saw how the ropes were torn, and he rubbed his arms with a calm smile. "We should have assumed that ropes, no matter how strong, wouldn't do much," said Uraraka, lowering his head and sighing with a small smile at the thought that his best friend's physical strength in these situations was not convenient. Mina gave a faint applause with an arrogant and proud smile. "I hope you haven't forgotten what we need to do now," said the hairy woman to her friends, reminding them to pick up where they left off. "You're really testing my patience a lot, Mina," Kyoyuka said with a streak on her forehead and clearly annoyed with her friend who really couldn't stop being irritating for a few moments. "After everything that happened, you should be at least as tired as we are," Momo said to Mina seriously as she took off her glasses as they were starting to bother her vision. Mina blushed slightly as she crossed her arm under his melons. "On the contrary, after feeling a bit of Midoriya when he caught me, I'm more encouraged to have it for myself," she replied, smiling in a perverted way, remembering the way in which he made her orgasm easily, which infuriated the others present. "I won't let you. Deku-kun won't fall into your hands," Uraraka said to Mina determinedly, pointing accusingly at her. "It's true, we're not going to give up yet," exclaimed Toru, supporting his ally as Tsuyu approached with the box of costume names in his arms. "Then you should choose the next outfits, Jiro," the little angel Tsuyu told her friends calmly, since she would continue to wear the same outfit again, although she was a little dirty from everything that happened. Her panties, on the other hand, were damp, but it was better not to say anything to her friends. What used to be the Momo-Kyoyuka alliance looked at each other seriously out of the corner of their eyes. There was palpable tension between the two who knew of each other's intentions with the green-haired man. "I won't back down, Kyoyuka-chan," Momo said to her former ally earnestly, crossing her arms authoritatively and confidently. "Me neither," Kyoyuka replied, placing her hands on her waist as she puffed out her chest with an intense look on her face. After that, the girls began to choose the outfits by putting their hands in the box while Izuku settled on Momo's bed to yawn sleepily while rubbing one eye. "Yawa, I'm going to sleep for a while," Izuku said in a low voice and with a silly smile on his face accompanied by the blush on his cheeks, and then closed his eyes and fell asleep with an impressive ease to start murmuring incomprehensible things. In that respect he had gone back to the beginning. Now the 8th round of the innocent game would begin. Things have changed and the challenges would have a greater intensity. It is only a matter of time before this second half comes to an end. Chapter 11, Declarations and Intentions. We find ourselves back with the girls of Class A in Momo's room after they have chosen the outfits that they would have to wear in this 8th round of the game. The only one who didn't change was Tsuyu, who was still wearing her little angel outfit as she sat on the edge of the bed watching her friends. "It's a little strange to wear this outfit," said Mina, inspecting her outfit with a little discomfort at the aura she gave when wearing it, because she had seen it in some anime or manga but she didn't imagine wearing it. Mina was dressed in a gal suit consisting of a simple white shirt unbuttoned just enough to show much of her cleavage and her pink bra. She wears a blue ribbon that descended from her neck but was not an impediment to seeing her melons. She wears a short skirt down to the green mules. She wears a sweater of the same color tied to her waist and accentuating her figure, in addition to wearing loose socks that gave a somewhat rebellious air to the hairy woman who actually fit the image of a gal. "Well, it seems to me that it fits you like a glove. That appearance could well represent you," Kyoyuka said, smiling sideways with a little mockery, seeing Mina, who finally did not seem entirely happy with her suit. "That didn't sound like a compliment," Mina said with a drop on her temple when she saw her friend's hostility toward her. "It wasn't," Jiro remarked, narrowing his eyes with obvious anger in his eyes at the hairy woman who has been touching his nose continuously since the game began. "Well, your suit, on the other hand, suits you very well, Kyoyuka-chan. I would say too much," replied Mina, smiling knowingly and with a stinging glance as she inspected the outfit worn by her violet-haired friend. Kyoyuka wore a Middle Eastern ballerina outfit that consisted of a very sensual blue sequined fabric bra that uncovers a certain part of her cleavage. She also wears a skirt of fabric of the same color that descended to the height of her ankles but uncovered one leg from the thigh to the foot while the other leg was only uncovered from the knee to the foot. However, that gave a sassy air to the slender legs of the girl, who also wore on her face an almost transparent mask with golden earrings in her ears. Added to her fierce gaze gave authenticity to her appearance as an oriental dancer. "I don't care about your words," Kyoyuka replied without any reaction to Mina's words as she crossed her arms, still annoyed with her. "It's not like her flattery is really going to have any effect on her person." Mina smiled sharply as she leaned close to her friend's ear. "Then if Midoriya tells you, would you mind?" Mina asked Kyoyuka, who widened her eyes and her cheeks flushed as she glanced sideways at the green-haired man asleep in Momo's bed, which in itself was enough of an answer for the hairy woman. "No comment," Kyoyuka said, looking away and closing her eyes, trying not to be affected, but it was too late, because Mina was laughing, amused by how easy it is to read her friend. "Even though I'm invisible, I'm embarrassed to wear this," Toru commented with a little embarrassment, seeing his outfit that was nothing more and nothing less than a cosplay costume from Midnight, with the only difference that he did not have handcuffs on his wrists. The mask, however, he did wear it so it was easier to locate his face. "It doesn't look bad on you, Toru-chan," Uraraka said to her invisible ally with a big smile to cheer her up a little. After all, that tight outfit highlighted her friend's excellent figure. "The same can't be said for you, Flea," Momo said to Uraraka with some hostility in her tone as she hugged Izuku's Matryoshka. Uraraka was wearing a curious and sensual outfit. As she had brown dog ears on her head, she wears a bra of the same color tied against her melons and making them stand out in an attractive way. She also wears pants of the same brown color from which a soft canine tail protruded. For the rest was her bare skin, and in plain sight, Uraraka was dressed in a sensual doggy outfit. Uraraka, hearing Momo, smiled menacingly and turned to look at him with his arms crossed. "Oh my, I thought I heard a cat thief talking," Achako replied without showing an ounce of weakness in the face of the black-haired and vice president of her class who wore a suit that refuted her words. Momo, on the other hand, wears black cat ears on her head. She wears a black bra tight to her melons with an absence in the middle of the heart-shaped neckline, giving a view to the skin of her melons with that shape. She wears in the lower area a black bathing suit from which in the back area of the back came a long feline train that undulated freely. The black-haired woman has small mustaches drawn on her cheeks, and simply her envious figure was at its point to be exposed in such a sassy way, because the vice president of class is wearing a Nico suit. Momo narrowed her eyes as both she and Uraraka closed the distance in hostility. "Bag of fleas," replied Momo with a serious look and a hint of superiority at Achako. "Street cat," Uraraka said to Momo with the same level of hostility and rivalry until they were both in front of the other staring at each other. There is no need to make a comparison to the level of their competitiveness since the nature of their costumes spoke for themselves. Kyoyuka stood in the middle of these two to separate them. "Stop, you two, let's start with this rubbish once and for all," she said to her two friends who were already overdoing their rivalry, almost and could not even recognize each other as the friends they were before they arrived at the dormitories. Uraraka and Momo reluctantly listened to Jiro and separated, seeing each other suspiciously since they had not yet clarified their pending issues. Because although they did not know it, they had erroneous ideas of the other, and that began an ill-founded rivalry in which one looked with bad eyes on the other. "How rude," said Mina, admiring the violet hairs meddling in the conflict. "Anyway, I'm the first one to challenge. In case you don't remember, in the previous round I was the last one to be challenged," she told the rest, who just didn't give her the attention she expected. They just wanted her to challenge once and for all. "I dare to, Kyoyuka-chan," exclaimed the hairy woman, pointing directly at Jiro, who remained calm. "Say it at once," Kyoyuka replied, crossing her arms under her melons and resting her weight on one leg. Unexpectedly for the others, she was very calm. Something strange, since she would have to face a challenge from Mina, who was the most perverted of all. brush your intimacy against Midoriya's arm for 5 minutes, Mina challenged him with a defiant smile, and causing everyone to blush in embarrassment except for Jiru, who didn't even flinch. I won't, Kyoyuka replied a few seconds later with seriousness and closing her eyes. This was something incredibly surprising for the others, who did not expect to hear him surrender so quickly. The most surprised without a doubt was Momo, who approached her. Didn't you say that you would be the one to keep Izuku-kun? Momo asked her former ally curiously and surprised by his surrender as she recalled the conversation he had with her in the basement of the B-class dormitories. She didn't expect that he was going to surrender so quickly. Kyoyuka remained calm in the face of the black-haired woman's question and cleared her throat. I'm going to say something to all of you here, Jiru said to the rest of her friends to address them. No matter who is going to win this stupid game or who is going to cross the line with Midoriya, I don't think what happens is going to please him, and they know it. She told the rest in a forceful way, and no one could deny what she said. They were aware that they were not doing the right thing except for Mina, who was still motivated. Jiru rested his hands on her waist to look seriously at the others. That's why if I get the chance to participate without doing anything extreme, I'll do it. But even if I lose this game doesn't mean I don't have a chance with Midoriya, she said, causing surprise in the others besides Momo, who had understood Kyoyuka's words more deeply. Hey Kyoyuka-chan, you're saying that you, said Toru nervously and blushing, pointing to her friend who sounded like she had feelings for the green hair. The rocker glanced sideways at Toru. Do I like Midoriya? I think so, she said, finishing off the surprise of the others who didn't expect to hear that from her. Momo instead seemed to listen attentively because she was already aware of her friend's feelings. That's why I'm telling you all this. I'm not going to make Midoriya fall in love in such a creepy way by winning this game. I'm going to do it by being myself with him being sober. Kyoyuka told them all with confidence that it could well be considered an open challenge, leaving the others speechless for a few seconds. Kyoyuka sighed, relaxed and relieved that she had let go of what she had to say. She took a beer to drink cold turkey and then glanced sideways at Mina. Now Mina, decide who you're going to pass the challenge to, she said to the hairy woman seriously so that the game could continue its course. Mina was still a little taken aback by Kyoyuka's statement, so she was a little beside herself. Well, I think Momo-chan, Mina said, pointing this time at the vice president, who blushed and then turned to look at Kyoyuka, waiting for her to say a few words. I've said everything I had to say, now it's your turn to decide, Kyoyuka told her former ally firmly and earnestly, waiting to see what decision she would make. Momo, in spite of her nerves and her common sense, plucked up her courage and looked directly at the green-haired man who was sleeping peacefully in his bed. I'll do it, the black-haired woman accepted a little nervously, but trying to be sure, she was willing to continue for the boy she was in love with. She left her Izuku Matryoshka for Tsuyu to hold and then walked over to her bed, where with some embarrassment she would begin to climb while being watched by the rest of her friends. I'm seriously sorry, Izuku-kun. I really understand that you're going to get upset about what I'm about to do. You're so peaceful sleeping with your arms outstretched at your sides, but I'm sure you'll remember a lot of what happened during this silly game. I know you'll be upset with me and the others for the way we're using you and how Mina put you as a prize. I understand all of that, but I'll still go ahead with this. I won't let Mina get you, as I'll beat her at her own game. I won't let her do anything wrong to you if she wins, because I'll prevent that from happening. If I win, then you can sleep peacefully on my bed and I'd just be stroking your hair until you fall asleep too. That's all I plan to do and nothing more than that. That's why I hope you understand my motives for doing this. I know I'm selfish, but it's what I decided. I approach one of Izuku-kun's strong and toned arms to place myself on top of it and place it under my legs. This I am going to do is so humiliating. And to top it off, I am being watched by the others. At least they should leave the room so as not to embarrass me so much. Either way, I proceed to slowly lower my ass until I feel C as my intimacy makes contact against the hardness of Izuku-kun's arm. I bite my lower lip slightly to try not to expel any strange sounds from my lips and begin to move slowly to create friction between Izuku-kun's warm skin against the fabric of the black swimsuit that covers my intimacy. I feel every movement sending an electric current directly to my brain, as if every touch touches a sensitive point on me that generates a strange sensation in my belly. MG. That strange sound escapes my lips involuntarily, and I can't do much to hold back the next moans that follow as I feel my intimacy become more sensitive to the continuous friction of my crotch against Izuku-kun's arm. I'm really sorry to have to do something like this when you're in this state, and I can't deny that a certain part of me enjoys this feeling, but I still think it's not the right thing to do and that I shouldn't do such a thing. But I will still stand my ground. If I have to do things like this, then I will keep doing them until I make sure that your chastity and your innocence remain intact. I wouldn't allow myself to sit idly by while Mina intends to rape you. I can admit that I haven't acted as I should, that I haven't been entirely honest with my motives for continuing this game, but I must clarify it again. I love you, Izuku-kun. I've been in love with you since the second year, and now I just want to avoid being abruptly pushed away from my side with a ruse as dirty as doing perverted things to you when you're drunk. I'll stop Mina and make it so that you can finally rest in peace as it should have been from the beginning, and then I'll make sure you look at me with the same eyes I look at you. Time is up. Hiraka's voice woke Momo from his thoughts and made him stop the movement of his hips on the boy's arm that was slightly wet in the area that rubbed against the privacy of the black-haired Nico. The black-haired woman came to her senses and was a little embarrassed but tried as much as possible to stay calm, so she got out of bed and then went back to her friends who again stood in a circle to continue with the game. I choose Toru-chan, Momo said relatively calmly, and seeing her invisible friend who is supposed to be Uraraka's ally. It is worth mentioning that the black-haired woman once again had Izuku's doll in her arms. I dare you to put on chocolate lipstick so that Midoriya can take it off, the vice president challenged her calmly and with an intense gaze on the invisible girl who became a little stiff. Uraraka placed a hand on Toru's shoulder to catch his attention. You can do it, Toru-chan, it's easier than other things, the chestnut encouraged him with a thumbs up and a smile. I know, but, Toru said with a little hesitation in his tone as he lowered his head and put his hands to his chest. Don't back down, remember that we can't let Momo-chan get away with it, Uraraka told her friend firmly, and to try to give her courage to do the challenge. They both had a common goal and they had to achieve their goal. But it's just that. I think Kyoka-chan is right, Toru replied, raising her head to turn to look at her violet-haired friend. And I don't think it's right for us to keep doing this when Midoriya can get mad at us. Yes, we should just let him sleep in his room, the invisible girl opined, sounding convinced that this was the right way to do things. Thank you. Finally someone who understands, Kyoka said, smiling, grateful that there was finally someone else who shared her point of view. Toru-chan, said Uraraka, a little surprised by her ally's decision. She wouldn't say she was wrong since she understood that she was doing the best that could be done, but that she abandoned him at this point in the game was something painful. Are you sure? You only have one life left and then it will be game over for you, the brunette asked her friend to make sure she doesn't force herself to regret it later. Unsure. I'll give up, Toru replied happily, and seeing his brunette friend and then turning to see Mina, who seemed a little disconcerted by her decision. After that, Kyoka approached Toru to place a hand on his shoulder. You've made the right choice, Toru-chan, Jiro said to her friend, who nodded. Thank you, Kyoka-chan, Toru thanked, happy with herself because she thought she was doing the right thing. But I must tell you that I don't plan to let Midoriya go either. I'm in love with him too, she said to the violet-haired woman, while the others were a little surprised by her confession. Jiro only smiled slightly sideways. I had a feeling, let's still try hard, Kyoka replied, ready to compete amicably with her friend for the love of the green hair. Anyway, it's not like she's going to let their friendship be affected by that. They're friends after all. I'm feeling like all this is losing its sense, Mina said with a nervous smile and a drop of sweat running down her forehead when she saw how her two friends had shown a sincere way to win the appreciation and affection of the green-haired man without having to finish the game. Then the challenge stops, Uraraka-chan, exclaimed Mina, wanting to continue with the matter so that the others would not reveal themselves and end their plan to keep the green-haired man. Uraraka clenched a fist in front of him confidently. I'll keep going, replied Uraraka, frowning slightly, looking at the hairy woman who smiled broadly and crouched in the middle where the sandwiches were and so on. I had the chocolate lipstick inside this box. I thought it would be useful at some point, Mina said, opening the black box she had brought with her to take out of it a completely common lipstick that was at first glance. Mina gave the lipstick to Uraraka, who along with the others focused on the bed where the green-haired man was sleeping. What they were all surprised to see is Tsuyu also lying on the bed and being hugged from behind by Izuku, who smiles foolishly. Tsuyu-chan, how long have you been there? Toru asked his frog friend, who was apparently very comfortable next to the boy who was hugging her possessively. I've wanted to lie down for a while now, and Midoriya-chan hugged me, Jiro, Tsuyu replied with her cheeks slightly flushed but not very nervous, as she kept it a secret that this was her intention when she lay down next to the green-haired man to feel his body heat. Why didn't you ask us to take you out? Momo asked her friend seriously, for she might as well have called for help and been taken out of there. Because I'm comfortable here, Jiro, Tsuyu replied simply and calmly. At this point it's not like she has a big problem admitting that she's also in love with Izuku, but she wouldn't say it directly unless asked. Mina gritted her teeth at the action of her friend who was being freed by the others, thought the hairy woman, analyzing a little more deeply what her friend might think. Ashido thought, biting his finger and with his arms crossed, seeing his ally who had nothing of angel. Please wake him up, Tsuyu-chan, Uraraka asked the frog girl kindly, as it would be easier if she asked him, but internally he felt a little jealous of how obedient or close the boy is when it comes to Tsuyu or Momo. Midoriya-chan, wake up, Tsuyu asked the boy softly in her tone and moving her chest a little to try to wake him up, making everyone appreciate how he was a little uncomfortable. NJH, Frog-chan, asked Izuku, confused and sleepy as he opened his green eyes and yawned a little as he lifted his upper body to look around. Uraraka wasted no time and climbed onto the bed to climb on Izuku's lap, who just stared at him. Deku-kun, please be calm, okay, said Uraraka to his best friend with a bit of nervousness and a blush on his cheeks. I don't understand what you're talking about, Uraraka-chan, replied the boy, confused, and tilting his head slightly to one side innocently. The brunette only plucked up the courage to show the chocolate lipstick with which she began to paint her lips slowly and with a certain seductive air in front of the eyes of the boy, who seemed hypnotized by the course of the lipstick on Uraraka's lips. Uraraka finished and threw the lipstick at Mina, who caught it without difficulty. Then the brunette rested her hands on the boy's bare chest. I have chocolate on my lips, Deku-kun. You want to try it? Ochako asked the boy with a little shyness and with some embarrassment at the distance she had from Izuku's body in front of him. After all, it was only inches from his melons making contact with his pectorals. The boy smiled foolishly happily. If I want to, Izuku replied, placing his hands on the chestnut's bare waist to pull her towards him, making her even more nervous. Deku-kun is bringing me closer to him so that our lips come together, and I can't help but feel nervous and happy with this even though I know it's not right, but it's just normal since I like Deku-kun a lot. I know Toru-chan and Kyoyuka-chan are right that we can win Deku-kun's affection fairly and sincerely when he's sober, but I'd like to enjoy this a little more. With just a kiss I'll be happy. It's not like I plan to rape him like Mina, so it's right that I keep playing, right? Inevitably, I let myself be carried away by Deku-kun and close my eyes to feel him bring me to his body and then join my chocolate-filled lips to his. The sensation of his warm and soft lips on mine is indescribable. I would like to explain myself in detail, but I feel how he begins to stick out his tongue to use it together with his lips to begin to taste the chocolate that sweetens my mouth. I try to fight not to let myself be defeated and try not to finish the chocolate so quickly so I can enjoy this more. I slightly push my hands against his chest to try to separate myself since I lack a little air. But Deku-kun prevents me from doing so by placing one of his hands behind my head while the other directs it to my butt to squeeze it a little. We have a brief fight with our lips and tongues, but I'm the loser because he unexpectedly has more experience in this and easily dominates me. Deku-kun kisses me passionately and affectionately as we exchange the fluids in our mouths. I didn't know that a simple kiss could turn me on like this. I'm sorry it's this way, Deku-kun. Apparently I'm a little kinky to enjoy this with you. Phew, he finally separated me from the kiss so that I could stare directly at those beautiful green orbs that I fall in love with. Deku-kun seems just as focused on me while a strand of saliva that caused our passionate kiss to melt from our lips. Deku-kun, I say, looking at him a little, eager for him to taste a little more of the chocolate that he still hasn't removed from my lips. He seems to understand me and pulls me back together to pick up where we left off. This is paradise. It's really paradise for me, to be able to kiss Deku-kun like this, to be able to give him my first kiss like this. I'm going to make sure he sees me the same way I see him. If I win this game, I'm going to make him remember the taste of my lips and make him want to taste them again. I want you to love me as much as I love you, Deku-kun, although it's selfish of me, I can't help it. You're my best friend, Deku-kun. I was happy with that before, but now I want to be more than that to you. I want you to look at me. I want you to love me. I want you to feel the same way I've felt about you since freshman year. I love you, Izuku. Your first name is very beautiful. I wish I could call you that more often. I would like you to call me Ochako. I don't want that when we become heroes the time comes when you only refer to me as your Avity who was a friend from school. I want to be your girlfriend, your wife, your life partner. I want to be you everything just like you are mine. Izuku and Uraraka kissed passionately on the bed, not noticing that the chocolate on the chestnut's lips had completely disappeared. Momo couldn't stand to watch the scene anymore and grabbed the green-haired man's left arm to get his attention. You can stop now, Izuku-kun, Momo said to the drunken and groggy boy who had released Uraraka, who was catching her breath, gasping and blushing. This marshmallow? Asked Izuku, somewhat confused, feeling the softness of Momo's melons squeezing her arm, which caused the black-haired woman to smile amused, assuming that the boy mistook her melons for her lap. No, Izuku-kun. I'm Momo. Momo replied to the boy with a warm, gentle smile as she hugged his arm even tighter and brought her face closer to his. Momo-chan? Asked Izuku, hypnotized and in a trance, only wishing in those moments to assault the lips of the black-haired woman, to run her hands all over her body to feel her soft skin and fluffy melons. Momo smiled at him, oblivious to his dirty thoughts. Yes, it's me, Izuku-kun, she replied with affection so that then a hand on her shoulder stopped him and caught his attention, making him turn to see how Uraraka prevented him from getting closer to the green hair. Hey, you're cheating to get closer, Uraraka said to Momo with a frown and pointing accusingly at her, having caught her red-handed. Show me the rules and tell me it's forbidden, Momo replied to the brunette seriously, since she had every right to show affection to the boy she liked. TCH, you thieving cat, Uraraka insulted him with annoyance and crossing his arms. Flea cow, Momo replied with the same hostility and letting go of the green-haired man's arm so that they both gave the boy their space and got out of bed to let Izuku resume his superficial nap. Now it's your turn to challenge me, Uraraka-chan, Mina said to the chestnut with a confident and self-assured smile, since she had not a shred of anxiety about the next challenge she would be given. I dare you to rub your ass on Deku-kun's face for 4 minutes, Uraraka challenged her with a serious look and crossing her arms to stare at him, causing everyone to be slightly surprised, and the hairy woman widened her eyes a little. Phew, what? Why are you challenging him like that, Uraraka-chan? Toru asked her friend, intrigued and a little nervous in the face of such a dirty and shameless challenge as that is. Even Mina should be a little ashamed to do that, Uraraka replied earnestly, hoping that the hairy woman would give up so that she would lose another life. Well, think about it again, Mina said to the brunette with amusement and calmness, and then went to bed to climb on top of her and crawl until she got on top of the green-haired man who had just woken up to the movements of the bed caused by the girl. Midoriya-kun, I hope you're prepared for what's coming, Ishido said to the boy with a perverted smile and a blush on his cheeks before dropping his ass over Izuku's face. A little moan escapes me as I feel Midoriya's nose dig a little into my buttocks through the fabric of the blue panties I'm wearing. Unable to help it, because of the pleasure, I start to move my fat and juicy butt a little intensely to increase the incredible sensation that Midoriya's face produces against my skin. This is really addictive. I can even feel her warm breath hitting the damp fabric, causing me to shiver. I feel how something additional begins to rub against me, more specifically in the area of my intimacy. It is something wet, flexible, and hot. He is the language of Midoriya, and Midoriya is licking my through the thin fabric of my panties. Without being able to avoid it, my juices begin to flow and descend until I reach Midoriya's face that seems to be unaffected since I feel how he does not slow down. Instead, I feel how he places his 2 hands on my buttocks to start squeezing them and playing with them as he wants. You're very good, Midoriya-kun, I say, biting my lower lip lightly so that I don't let out any more moans in front of my friends. I certainly wouldn't mind being heard, but feeling such stimulation I think they would sound very loud and I would be a little embarrassed. I certainly hesitated for a second to accept to do this challenge. The truth is that I didn't think about doing something like rubbing my butt on her face. The truth is that I was a little embarrassed to do it, but I wouldn't let them know. If I show a little weakness, then that will be the moment of my end. I can't afford it. My goal is to win this game by chasing the others away so that they leave me and Midoriya alone. I'm perfectly aware that it may not be what he wants and that he may get mad at me, but either way I'll still love this broccoli. Love, did I say that? I love Midoriya. I hadn't really thought about it. I didn't think that's what I feel. I want him to kiss me with passion and love. I want him to hug me, to make me laugh with his cute reactions, to turn me on with that sassy body of his. I want him to mark me and make me his in many different ways. I want to make it clear that I'm only Izuku Midoriya's. But is that love? I don't know how to say for sure. Does it matter? I want him and I'm going to get him. If he doesn't love me at first, then I'll give him 1,000 reasons to love me, to want to have me by his side all the time, to want to go out with me at every opportunity, to show me off in front of the boys by telling them that I'm his, that he's my male and I'm his female. I wanted to take advantage of her helpless state to delight myself with that tempting body of lustful sin that she hides under her angelic and pure facade. It is simply the best of both worlds. I have my apple of Eden right in front of me and I am willing to take a good bite of it. Is that bad? Well, then I will be the worst. Hayo, do it a little slower, I say suddenly as I feel Midoriya take control and push his face against my ass, causing my center of gravity to go forward and my arms to give way and make my face fall forward while he continues to play with my ass as if he wants to eat it. The moans struggle to escape noisily from my lips and the pleasure begins to cloud my mind. For some reason I feel something crash against my face. Something big, hard, thick and throbbing. I could say it's a pole or a bat that has a life of its own. I turn my eyes to the side only to see the green fabric of Midoriya's underpants rise in his bulge. It's his penis. My face lights up red, but I don't even have time to be ashamed to feel the continuous electric shocks that run through me completely until they reach my brain, clouding my logical thinking. See how long until the end of those 4 minutes. Yes, if this goes on like this. I moan with my lips pressed together and with my eyes turning upwards as I reach orgasm, and an indescribable sensation of pleasure floods my senses and my PPL juices escape forcefully against Midoriya's face that would not take her head off my ass. Does she really want to eat everything from me? If this was only 4 minutes, would I really take it all one night with him? Impossible. Mina was breathing heavily with hot air coming out of her mouth while her friends pulled her out of bed while others were in charge of calming Izuku back to sleep. It was fortunate that she was once again easily manipulated as at the beginning of the game. Are you satisfied yet? Kayuka asked Mina gravely and with her arms crossed as she stood watching the hairy gal gasp on the floor suffering slight spasms. Please give me a moment. That's too much, Mina said to her friends, unable to stop breathing heavily while her mind was still a little clouded by the surge of pleasure she felt just a few seconds ago. I didn't think I'd see Mina-chan like that, Jiro, Tsuyu said blushing but calmly, with a finger on her chin as she looked at her ally lying on the ground. Now a magical transition occurs a few minutes in the future where the hairy woman was already recovered and was standing in front of her friends. Her panties were still soaked by her orgasm, but she pretended that they were dry so as not to embarrass herself in front of the others. Now it's time to punish Toru-chan for his game over, Mina said with her hands on her waist with an evil smile on her face as she saw her secret Santa dressed as Midnight. Please don't be too mean to me, Mina-chan, Toru asked her hairy friend with a bit of shyness, but honestly the others knew that she was asking for the impossible. Mina is cruel and ruthless and that's it, no one would be spared. Mina pointed her hand at Hagakure. You will have to be handcuffed and defenseless along with Nico Deku in the room for 9 minutes, Mina said, giving her punishment to the invisible girl who stiffened as she felt a chill run through her body. And Nico Deku? Asked Toru, bewildered and surprised that the hairy woman had mentioned the feline version of the green-haired man. You were the one who created him, it's only fair that he should be the one to see your end, Mina replied, crossing her arms with an evil aura around her and a sinister smile on her face as she saw Toru. You're too exaggerated, Momo said to Mina seriously and then proceeded to create handcuffs with her quirk to place on Toru, who showed no resistance as she knew that this would happen if she surrendered. After that, Momo recreates Deku's cat ears and tail and then draws the whiskers with green marker. It was a bit difficult for him to put the decorations on him as he was a little restless in bed, but with the help of Tsuyu and Uraraka he managed to place the tail and cat ears. Then the black-haired woman leaned into the green-haired man's ear to speak to him subtly with a small smile. Deku, crooned the vice president dressed as a Sessi Nico, causing the green-haired man to open his eyes slightly to yawn and stretch like a cat would. Meow. Deku meowed calmly and a little sleepily looking around as the girls left the room, leaving Toro handcuffed standing in the middle of the room. Now we'll give you 9 minutes with Deku, good luck, said Mina to her secret Santa with a playful smile and making the peace symbol with one hand. No, wait girls, at least 5 my wives, girls, shouted Toro to her friends in desperation, but they closed the door, leaving her alone with the greatest predator known in the animal kingdom. Deku. I wanted to do the right thing. I should have been selfish like Mina-chan, and that way I shouldn't have been left alone with Deku. My most terrifying creation. I still don't understand how it really worked to make her believe that she is a cat while she slept. I am an idiot. Well, I have enjoyed what Izuku and Deku have done to me, and I can't keep allowing those things. If they leave me with him for so long, then I really won't stand it. I'm going to go crazy and they won't be able to stop him. I see how Deku is staring at me and I stiffen and static in my place, trying not to move a single muscle. He smells fear and also pheromones. In that case, in the latter, I think he did detect me. He crawls a little in my direction and I take a few steps back awkwardly and then fall on my ass. And don't move, Deku, I ordered Toro in a futile attempt to get him to obey me and stay still so that he doesn't come near me to stimulate me in a very pleasurable and exciting way, even though the little perverted part of me really wants it. To my surprise, Deku stayed still in place and didn't move anymore, just yawned a little and then settled in circles to lie down comfortably and close his eyes. Did you listen to me? I asked, really impressed that he didn't disobey me or sexually assault me, repeatedly bringing me to orgasm. I have to stop expressing myself this way, I sound like a closet pervert. Oh hey Midoriya, can you help me free myself from the handcuffs? I asked, smiling sweetly at him to appeal to his good side, although I doubt he can see my cute smile because I'm invisible, damn quirk. At least I guess he'll understand my sweet tone and help me. But apparently he just stands still in place without moving a single muscle to help. I guess I'll take that as a no. Can you at least get a little closer? I'm cold, I asked politely and trying to appear cold. That way maybe he will come to me so that I can finally free myself from these handcuffs. Deku only opens one eye to look at me boredly. I don't want to, he said simply, to close his eye again and leave me as I am. Did I make him angry in any way? He usually doesn't behave like that with me. He would be willing to explore my body with his tongue to give me sensations that I have never felt before in my life. Please, just get a little closer to me, I asked him pleadingly, hoping that at least he would keep me a little company. I could well get close to him, but that would be dangerous. The best thing is for him to approach me on his own. Again I observe how he doesn't move a muscle to get closer to me. I guess I understand what he wants. He wants to play with my body again. He wants to lick me in different corners of my body and handle me as he pleases. And it's not like I like the idea, I just wanted to avoid it at all costs. But apparently that's the only way for him to keep me company in the time remaining before the girls come in. Okay, you can play with me. But just a little, okay, I say, hoping he wasn't going to overdo it too much, but I watch as he opens his eyes that are shadowed, and from the shadow shine 2 sinister red dots that look at me with lust as if I were undressing with my eyes even though I'm invisible. I guess the silhouette of Midnight's costume helps him imagine my body. Shame on you. Please be gentle, I ask you, vulnerable, hoping that my creation will have a little mercy in my final moments. Meanwhile, outside the room, the other girls were standing in front of the door, waiting for the time to run out so they could come in to help their secret friend. How long is it? Asked Uraraka to Momo, who had her phone in one hand and was looking at the clock. Not much, just a couple of minutes, Momo replied calmly, and after that a faint strange sound from inside the room caught her attention. Hey, listen, Jiro, Tsuyu said to the others so that they all put their ears against the surface of the door to try to hear what was happening on the other side. This was the moment where Kyoryuka specifically listened in detail to the loud moans of Toru, who was being subdued by Izuku. It looks like Deku is eating Toru-chan, Mina commented, amused and smiling mockingly when she heard how her friend was having a great time with the cat boy. I want to see you mock when it's your turn to be the one punished, Kyoryuka said to the angry-haired woman, ready to somehow give Mina some of her own medicine. As if that were going to happen, Mina replied nonchalantly and with a simple shrug of her shoulders. Time, exclaimed Uraraka when she saw the time on Momo's phone and then opened the door to see what was going on inside. They were shocked when they saw Deku lying on Momo's bed while on the floor was a panting and exhausted Toru who was not wearing a mask. The handcuffs were broken, the arm parts and shoulders of the suit were torn as if the green-haired man had bitten him. Toru gasped with his mind blank as he expelled hot air from his mouth after reaching orgasm. Toru-chan, Tsuyu said, a little worried about her friend, understanding what she had to go through and approaching her to check on her condition. Momo took out a red pill from her hand and walked over to her bed as she held out her hand to Izuku. Come here, Izuku-kun, try this, said the black-haired woman to the cat boy gently and softly, and the boy reacted and calmly ate the pill. What's that? Uraraka asked Momo, curious about what she fed Izuku. A tranquilizer. It's going to help you stop believing Nico Deku, Momo replied calmly and then turned to see Izuku rubbing his eyes with one fist while with his other hand he removed his cat ears. Then the black-haired Nico and the brown dog moved away from the boy to approach their friends who surrounded the panting and exhausted Toru who was still on the ground. For the moment it's time for a break, Momo said calmly and closing her eyes, and most of them agreed. Rest, but we've just come back from the B-class dormitories, Mina replied, somewhat against the idea of taking a break at that moment. Kayuka folded her arms and spoke. All the more reason we need to get married. Besides, that happened between the previous round and this one, so technically it's time for the 10-minute break, she said to the hairy woman seriously, and closing her eyes. Then they all noticed that Izuku was sitting on the edge of the bed without cat decorations while holding his head with one hand. Girls, my head hurts a little, the green-haired man said to his friends as he complained a little about his pain. I'll bring you water, Deku-kun, Uraraka replied with a sweet, cute smile, and then headed for the door. Take the opportunity to take Toru-chan to his room so he can rest a little, Kayuka said to her brunette friend who could take her with her quirk levitating without problems. Okay, Uraraka calmly agreed, then touched Toru and then took her out of Momo's room. Okay, we'll get rid of two, now who's going to take care of Midoriya? Mina asked the others in the room since one of them should be in charge of guarding the boy. Suyu raised his hand slightly. I think it should be Kayuka-chan, Jiro, said the frog girl, to the surprise of her hairy ally who looked at her incredulously. Momo then lowered her head slightly. I think it's better for her to take care of it than for you to do it, Mina, she said to Ashido seriously, looking up at the hairy woman who only sighed in defeat while Kayuka was surprised that her former ally supported her. Okay, let's get out of here. The 10 minutes are already ticking, Mina said with a simple shrug so that she and Suyu left Momo's room while the owner headed for the exit. Momo, Kayuka said to Momo as she held out a hand trying to stop him. Momo stopped, turning her back to Kayuka. Don't get confused, we're still rivals. I just think it's best for you to take care of it for the time being. Suyu-chan is surely allied with Mina and at least you have better intentions, Momo said to the violet-haired woman calmly and then continued on her way to the exit where she closed the door on the way out and left Kayuka inside who had a small smile on her face. Then she walked over to the boy who was trying to stand up despite his headache. You can sit quietly, Midoriya. Uraraka-chan won't take long to bring you water, Kayuka told Izuku with kindness and a small smile as she made him sit down and she sat down next to him. Izuku stared at her face for a few seconds that made the girl a little uncomfortable. Kayuka-chan, you look very pretty, he said to her with a slightly silly smile as he looked her up and down. She looked spectacular, beautiful and sassy with that Middle Eastern ballerina outfit. Her bare legs, her slightly tight neckline, her navel uncovered, the exposure of her pale skin and above all her beautiful face barely covered by the almost transparent mask that only covered her mouth. Jiro blushed at his words and looked away in embarrassment. And you don't have to say that, you're drunk, she replied trying to convince herself that this compliment was only caused by alcohol. It couldn't be true that he thought she was cute. Izuku was innocently curious. Really? Well, I don't think that matters. I think you're very cute all the time, Kayuka-chan. I don't think I'm drunk all the time. Hee, said the green-haired man amused and laughing slightly as he saw Kayuka next to him. Midoriya, said the girl, a little perplexed and moved by his words, then lowered her head in a shadow over her eyes. You're very bad, she added, causing Izuku to intrigue. Did I say anything wrong? Asked Izuku a little worried about her friend's change of attitude. She had no intention of offending her in any way. No, but you make things harder for me, Kayuka replied, raising her head a little shyly and with a blush on her cheeks. After all, every word that came out of his mouth was a clear provocation towards her to fall even more in love with him. I'm sorry, Kayuka-chan, I don't want to be a problem for you or the others, the boy said, understanding a different thing and feeling guilty when he thought of himself as a burden to his friends. Kayuka smiled sweetly at him as she held one of his hands with both hands to comfort him. Maybe you don't know it, but it's very easy for me to talk to you. Maybe because of what happened in this game I realized that. Jiro said with a soft, gentle smile as her cheeks grew more carmine. Izuku only acted on impulse and placed a hand on Kayuka's head to stroke her hair. You know, Kayuka-chan, you're very pretty. I've always thought so, said Izuku, a victim of alcohol and being as honest as you can be, causing Kayuka to be more embarrassed but also to feel happy. She looked away in another direction. That's not true. The others are more feminine and pretty than me, Kayuka said to the green-haired man, remembering the continual comparisons he heard from other boys in his class and from other years and courses. Izuku raised his head thoughtfully. The other girls are really pretty, he said, causing Jiro to get a little depressed, but then Izuku smiled at her radiantly. Well, you're still just as pretty as they are. Kayuka-chan is Kayuka-chan and that's why she's cute in your own way, added the green-haired man, shaking the heart of the rocker dressed as a dancer who was deeply moved by her words. She smiled gently at him as she rubbed her thumb over a scar on his hand. You know, there's no way you'd tell me this if you were sober, Kayuka said to him, amused by how nervous the green-haired man would be trying to say these same words to him. It would look cute. I think that's true, Izuku said, laughing with amusement and a little dazed. Then it's a good thing that he's drunk, isn't it? Asked the green-haired man, smiling happily and tilting his head slightly to one side. I guess you're right, Kyoyuka replied with a small smile as she saw the boy next to her, and then they both fell into a brief silence. Do you think you're going to remember anything? She asked him curiously and intrigued. Remember? I hope I can remember everything. You guys are so funny, replied the boy, smiling innocently cheerful and happy, which pushed the Violet movie to the limit. Then please remember this, Kyoyuka said to Izuku, and then took off her mask and threw herself on him to land on him and plant a deep kiss on his lips while their legs were intertwined and her melons pressed against his pectorals. After a minute of exchanging affection, she stood up a little to stare at him from above as she caught her breath a little. I like that, why was that? Izuku asked Jiro with an innocent smile and looking a little intrigued while their cheeks were flushed. Let's just say it's just a whim of mine, even I can play a little dirty, Kyoyuka replied, smiling sideways a little playfully while she was still on top of the green-haired man who was captivated by her beauty from that perspective. Can you fulfill my whim, Kyoyuka-chan? Izuku asked her with a smile, and she was a little curious. What is it? She asked, and then Izuku's arms wrapped around her back and waist and then pulled her to him in a close and warm hug that took her by surprise and made her blush a little. Sleep with me for a little while, Izuku asked her with a small smile as he closed his eyes and made himself comfortable with her in his arms, pressed against his bare and toned torso. I guess I can do that, Kyoyuka replied a little shy and with a slight smile on her face, and then pressed her cheek against the warm and soft skin of the boy she was in love with as she closed her eyes and extended her jacks so that they made contact against her pectorals to again focus only on the concert of their hearts beating in unison. What they both didn't know was that they were being watched from a small opening in the door where Uraraka had brought the glass of water for Izuku. But when he opened the door a little, he discovered them talking and just listened and saw what was happening. After seeing enough, she slammed the door shut, then walked away and walked down the halls with a thoughtful expression. Kyoyuka-chan is also in love with Deku-kun. Apparently she is not the same as Momo-chan, but still I can't be left behind, thought the chestnut, and then showed a confident and determined expression. I'm more in love with Deku-kun, Uraraka added with a slight blush on her cheeks and determined not to lose to her friends when it came to the green-haired man's love. In Mina's room. On the other side we met the Mina and Tsuyu who were sitting on the bed of the hairy woman who at that moment had her eyes fixed on her frog friend. Why did you have to suggest Kyoyuka-chan? Mina asked Tsuyu, a little annoyed since she might as well have offered herself or both of them so that they could finally take care of him together. So that there would be no suspicion about me, Jiro, Tsuyu replied calmly and with a bead of sweat on his temple. The frog girl thought to herself with detail and calculating mind as she looked down at her lap. You're very quiet, Tsuyu-chan, Mina said, bringing her face closer to that of her friend, who had suddenly fallen silent. I'm sorry, I was thinking that the next round is the 9th. We've been playing this game for a long time, Jiro, said Tsuyu, acting so as not to cause suspicion in Mina. For the moment she should just stay by her side until she finds an opening that the others can take advantage of. I guess you're right, maybe I'm taking this too far, Mina said, crossing her arms thoughtfully as she looked up at the ceiling. Are you serious, Mina-chan? Asked Tsuyu, a little surprised that her friend, Mina, the same one who created that silly game, was considering finally ending it. Mina nodded with a broad smile. Of course, that's why I'm going to try to eliminate them with more complicated challenges to get Midoriya faster. There are only Uraraka-chan, Momo-chan and Kyoyuka-chan left to lose, replied the hairy woman, and in that way Tsuyu's hope and illusion fell to the ground. I guess to think you'd end this was naive of me, Jiro, Tsuyu said a little depressed and lowering her head and then sighing. That's right, said Mina, smiling, amused by her frog friend's naivety. Then Tsuyu looked up to look innocently at her hairy ally. Out of curiosity, wouldn't you like to be challenged, Jiro? As Tsuyu asked without much hope that her friend would be foolish enough to reveal something like that, Mina was simply too cautious to answer. It's a strange question, but it's curious. Listen, said Mina to begin to tell Tsuyu what she kept as a secret, which surprised the green-haired woman by confirming that yes, she did indeed overestimate Mina. With Momo in Toru's room. On the other hand, we found ourselves in Toru's simple room where she was sitting on the edge of her bed while the door opened and Momo entered through the threshold with a slight smile on her face. Have you recovered yet, Toru-chan? The black-haired woman asked her secret friend calmly as she approached her. Yes, Momo-chan, I'm glad they didn't leave me there any longer, Toru replied a little happy and grateful since she might as well go crazy if they left her for any longer with the uncontrolled Nico Deku. After that, both of them found themselves in a little awkward silence. Not that they had nothing else to talk about, but nevertheless there was still tension between them that prevented them from speaking normally. Perhaps considering that just a few rounds ago they were enemies on opposite sides trying to eliminate each other. You know, I wanted to tell you that. I'm sorry, Momo said to Toru, lowering her head a little and causing intrigue in her secret Santa. Why? Asked Toru, confused. Well, I can't tell you a particular reason, only that. I should have supported you when you said we were able to finish the game when we had Mina tied up, Momo replied calmly and with a bit of guilt on her face as she recalled her friend's words at that moment rounds ago. Oh, don't worry, Toru said cheerfully and carefully, downplaying the matter. In the end Uraraka and Tsuyu also objected to concluding and the only one who agreed was Kyoyuka. If we had listened to you, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. That's why I apologize, Momo said, bowing slightly to her friend while still holding the Izuku doll in her arms. But now that I've come this far, I have to make sure Mina doesn't stay with Izuku-kun, Momo confessed, regaining her composure with a determined expression. I recognize that you and Kyoyuka are right and what you're doing is the right thing to do, but if someone has to get their hands dirty to stop Mina, then I'll do it, she added earnestly and ready to play along. Momo-chan, said Toru, a little surprised by her black-haired friend's conviction. You don't have to worry about him doing anything to Izuku-kun, I just don't want Mina to cross the line with him taking advantage of his condition, Momo told her secret friend so she wouldn't think badly of her. It may sound hypocritical coming from me, but I've really been in love with Izuku-kun since before I started this game. I don't intend to ruin my relationship with him by doing something inappropriate to him while he's drunk if I win the game, the vice president revealed, smiling gently as she hugs Izuku's Matryoshka a little more. Toru could see the affection in her friend's words and smiled despite her invisibility. That relieves me a bit. In the end you didn't have the same intentions as Mina-chan. Apparently Uraraka-chan was wrong with you, Hagakure said to Momo, who was a little serious at the mention of her brunette rival. I can't trust her yet, only you and Kyoyuka-chan, that's why I'd like you to listen to what I have to say, Momo said to Toru seriously, then turned over her shoulder to see how Uraraka had entered the room. You are very timely, Uraraka-chan, said the black-haired woman calmly, sensing that the brunette listened to all her conversation. Momo-chan, Uraraka said with folded arms and a serious expression looking at Momo. The vice president stood in front of Uraraka to stare at him. I have a proposal to make to you, Momo said seriously, causing the chestnut to intrigue. What kind of proposal? Asked Uraraka, raising an eyebrow and listening for any tricks her rival's words might have. One that allows us to have an advantage over Mina and that gives us the opportunity to finish this game once and for all, Momo replied calmly and capturing the attention of both Toru and Uraraka, who was still a little wary. But don't get me wrong, I still don't fully trust your intentions with Izuku-kun, but I think we should unite against our common rival, she said to him sincerely and firmly, referring to Mina as the enemy to be defeated. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, join forces to win. Uraraka was silent for several seconds and then sighed wearily. I don't trust you very much either, but I'll listen to you, Uraraka replied seriously, seeing Momo, who nodded her head to proceed to tell both of them the plan she had in mind. Chapter 12, One Step Away from the End. Returning to Momo's room, we find Kyoyuka curled up next to Izuku, using part of her chest as a pillow while the sleeping green-haired boy had her wrapped in his arms, which did not displease the rocker, who was awake despite having her eyes closed. She was just enjoying the moment with a small smile drawn on her lips. But the door of the room opened and Mina entered through it, followed by Tsuyu, who were the first to arrive and were somewhat surprised to see their friend lying next to the boy. Wow, I didn't expect to find them this way, Mina said, smiling mischievously and playfully, trying to embarrass Kyoyuka when she was discovered. But Jiro kept his eyes closed and settled down a little more next to Izuku. Please don't bother me. 5 more minutes, Kyoyuka asked, causing Mina to be a little disappointed by her reaction. Kyoyuka-chan, this is not the time for you to fall asleep with Midoriya-chan, Jiro, Tsuyu said calmly to her friend as she approached the bed to speak to her. It doesn't matter, I'm very comfortable, Kyoyuka replied, maintaining her position and keeping her eyes closed, refusing to leave the comfort she was at the moment. Are you thinking clearly? Maybe now the alcohol is affecting you, Mina said, crossing her arms a little thoughtfully as she watched as her friend seemed more direct and impulsive than before. Of course not, said Jiro, who listened to him and got up, separating himself from the green-haired man to see Mina with a frown. I was just comfortable sleeping with the guy I like, is there a problem? Asked Kyoyuka with a bit of hostility, leaving her two friends somewhat surprised. Yes, certainly maybe she was a little rough with them, but being innocently lying next to him wasn't a crime. I just wanted to enjoy that feeling more. In those moments, it bothered him a little that it was the hairy woman who was ruining his moment, but he had no choice but to calm down. Mina, on the other hand, resumed her simple and playful attitude. None for me. I'd really like to experience the same with Midoriya-kun, she said, smiling broadly and then focusing her attention on the green-haired man who was asleep, looking for Jiro to hug her, so she gave him a pillow with which he was calm. You're probably going to do something wrong to him, Momo said calmly, entering the room followed by Uraraka and Toru, who agreed with the black-haired woman. Oh, come on girls, I'd like to snuggle next to you too, not everything has to be sequel, perverts, Mina said to her 3 friends in a playful and somewhat mocking way, causing the 3 of them to blush and take a little offense. How dare you call us perverts? Asked Uraraka nervously and somewhat indignantly that it was precisely Mina who called him that. Ashido shrugged innocently. I'm just saying that they've challenged things that aren't very holy and they've also done part of those challenges. As far as I know, normal girls wouldn't do that. She commented with simplicity and indifference as if she had nothing to do with it, which only angered her friends who were really about to tape her mouth shut. Jiro took a few breaths to calm himself down and then stood up with his arms crossed. Let's put the subject aside and start this at once, Kyoyuka said, and the rest agreed with her. Toru held up the box with the names of the suits. You all know what to do, she said, turning to Mina, Kyoyuka, Momo and Uraraka, who were the 4 remaining players. They all approached their invisible Santa dressed as Midnight and took the papers with the outfits they would wear. After that, a magical transition took place in which minutes later the 4 of them were already dressed. Hey, don't you feel like time went by so fast? asked Mina, looking at her three friends curiously. What do you mean, Mina-chan? Asked Uraka, confused by what the haired woman was saying. I don't know if it's my impression, but before I know it I'm already dressed in the suit that I got, Mina explained to herself, somewhat confused by the strange events she has just felt and has felt the times in which she had to change her costume. I've felt it too. It's strange, Momo said calmly and feeling a small shiver caused by this strange event that had no explanation. Toru approached Momo and Kayuka to point at them. Now you're going together, she said, looking at her friends who were dressed in the couple in police suits and robber suits. Momo was wearing a short, small police officer shirt that exposed her belly button and was somewhat unbuttoned, showing part of her cleavage in a provocative way. She has tight black pants highlighting her slender legs, a leather belt with an entry for a fake gun, and has her hair down while wearing a police cap. The sassy side of the law. Kayuka, on the other hand, wears a black long-sleeved shirt fitted to her attractive figure. She also wears a blue mini short fitted to her butt and thighs, making her look sassy with an air of danger. She has a black wool hat on her head and wears a strap on one of her legs where she has a fake gun. Allure of crime. Both who were previously allies had outfits together, police and thief. Curious that they are such opposite roles for those who have the same goal, but their methods are different. Apparently the intentions of stopping Mina and making Izuku fall in love were on both sides of justice. Jiro looked a little uncomfortable at Toru's comment and crossed her arms with a small blush on her cheeks. I think so, she said as she turned her back to them. Momo smiled slightly and walked over to her to place a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to be so far away, Kayuka-chan, or I'm going to have to arrest-rt, the black-haired woman said to her friend in a joking tone and smiling with amusement. Ah, that's funny, Kayuka said sarcastically and not too amused by her friend's joke as she turns her head to look over her shoulder, but notices a small folded piece of paper under Momo's hand. What is this? Jiro asked his former ally quietly and earnestly. Momo reached over seriously to say something in her ear. Read it and you'll understand. We're counting on you, she said to her friend, who remained thoughtful for a few seconds and then put her hand on Momo's to surreptitiously take the paper. Okay, Kayuka accepted calmly and Momo smiled slightly and then both walked away, making sure they didn't look suspicious in front of Mina, who was chatting with Toru. Uraka, on the other hand, wears a Playboy rabbit costume that Toru used a few rounds ago. Of course, because of the detail that Uraka is visible, she could wear it much better. The suit fitted her cleavage, highlighted her butt and legs, and her black ears gave the brunette a certain adorable air. Hey Mina-chan, do you know that would be fun? Said Uraka with a cheerful smile, catching the attention of her hairy friend. Mina, on the other hand, wore a mime suit, which consisted of a short shirt, a short one that revealed the skin of the lower area of her melons along with the rest of her abdomen. She also wears a black strapless shorts that reach the knees, highlighting her thighs and her sensual hips. She has a bit of red lipstick on her lips. Lastly, she has a mime beret over her head and has white gloves on her hands. What? Asked Mina, intrigued and smiling animatedly for something funny. From now on act like a mime, without speaking and gesturing, Uraka recommended, maintaining her expression as she clasped her hands behind her back innocently. Sounds good. I'm going to try as hard as I can, said Mina, accepting the idea that it might as well be fun since she could mime, but she realized something. But wait a minute, I have to challenge, said the hairy mime, looking at her brunette friend, since she would have to speak at that moment, and that would be now, since it was her turn to be the first to challenge. Don't worry about that. We don't want you to decide first, Momo said to Ashido calmly as she crossed her arms, hugging her Izuku Matryoshka. Why? Asked Mina, confused by what Officer Yaoyorozu had just told her. The thief Jiro was the one who answered. You also started the previous round. It wouldn't be fair for you to start challenging twice in a row, argued the veteran of crime seriously, while the others agreed with her except for the little angel Tsuyu, who remained neutral as a double agent. Mime Ashido remained thoughtful for a few moments. All right, but we must decide who will start, she said simply, leaving her freedom to challenge first. I'll decide, cried Toru happily, to which Mina bowed and gave her permission. Then Hagakure began to point her hand at her friends, debating which one to decide. I want you to start challenging Kayuka-chan, said the girl dressed as Midnight, and the thief nodded her head calmly. Great, in that case I'll challenge Momo-chan, Kayuka said with a small smile on her face as she looked directly at Officer Yaoyorozu, who remained serious. I dare you to sit on Midoriya's lap and place a chocolate carrot on your melon so you can feed him like that, Jiro challenged, causing the hairy woman to blush a little. I refused to do it, Momo refused, closing her eyes and remaining calm, which caused surprise only to Mina. So the mime silently began to gesture to the officer, things like imitating a chicken, making a gesture as if she was drinking a bottle of alcohol and ending up drunk, also silently encouraging her to accept in a mocking way. They all silently watched their friend, who couldn't utter a word, to which everyone, including Tsuyu, breathed a sigh of relief. It's relaxing not to listen to Mina's complaints or provocations, Momo commented, smiling slightly at how satisfying it was not to listen to the comments of the hairy woman, who was exaggeratedly offended while putting a hand to her heart. Yes, I appreciate that you got the mime suit. Uraka thanked that she had planned very well for this to happen so that they could take a break from the voice of her friend, who listened to her and depressed fell to the ground, leaning on her hands while looking at the ground. A Summer Aura surrounded her. At that, Tsuyu approached Momo while holding a can of alcohol. Well, you've lost a life, Momo-chan, Jiro, she said to her friend calmly as she offered her the can, to which the officer accepted without problems and accepted it to take it all at once and then throw the can to the ground while sighing more blushing than before. I pass the challenge on to Uraraka-chan, Kyoyuka said with a small smile, this time pointing to the chestnut who blushed slightly embarrassed. With you, if that challenge fits better, Toru commented sincerely, seeing how her friend who wore a rabbit outfit was the most suitable to have a chocolate carrot on her melons. Uraraka looked a little shy as she played with her fingers. I accept, but can I eat some too? Asked the chestnut, looking at her friends who were intrigued by it. Kyoyuka raised an intrigued eyebrow while the others also looked curiously at Ochako, who looked a little more embarrassed. We've been using sweets and chocolates and for a long time now I've wanted to try some too, said Uraraka smiling embarrassingly, and then both she and Jiro turned to look at Mina, who looked thoughtful and after a few seconds made an O with her arms while nodding her head smiling. I guess that means there's no problem, said Momo smiling slightly, and before that freeway, the 6 of them went to the sandwiches and sweets to try a little. Uraraka put a chocolate ball in his mouth to taste. It tastes so good, exclaimed the chestnut, delighting in the sweet taste of chocolate in his mouth. Are you ready yet, Uraraka-chan, Jiro? Tsuyu asked her friend with a small smile as she approached her who was turning her back to her. Then Uraraka turned to see her friend supporting her weight on one leg while holding a small chocolate carrot in her hand and taking a small bite of the tip. What's new, old man? Asked Uraraka with a smile and a relaxed expression as he continued to chew the chocolate. Her friends looked at her emotionlessly as they recognized the clear reference to a certain famous rabbit. Her silence only made Uraraka ashamed of what she did and blushed as she scratched her head. I'm sorry, I've wanted to say it since I was little and I thought it would be funny, she apologized sadly despite not being necessary, and then went to Momo's bed where her best friend and love interest was resting. Ochako climbed onto the bed and sat on his legs, placing hers around the boy's hip, who remained asleep. She took a few breaths to calm herself but couldn't erase the blush on her face. She placed a chocolate carrot between her melons and then moved closer to the green-haired boy's ear. Hello Deku-kun, it's time to eat, Uraraka whispered in his ear, and as if it were a summons, Izuku opened his eyes somewhat sleepily to get up a little on his elbows while looking at the chestnut above him. Uraraka-chan, are you going to give me chocolate? Asked Izuku, intrigued and smiling sleepily, being able to perceive the smell of chocolate coming from her. So he looked down only to see the chocolate carrot that was in the middle of those 2 meat marshmallows. Uraraka blushed as Izuku looked at the chocolate between her melons, but managed to awkwardly nod her head. Yes, so hurry up and eat it, she said to the boy who woke up attracted by the wonderful offer that was presented to him. Eating chocolate, melons were something secondary that he would enjoy squeezing. Izuku licked his lips a little as he got up enough to be seated with Uraraka sitting on his lap. Itadakamasu, said the green-haired man, smiling happily as he brought his face closer to the cleavage of an embarrassed Uraraka who pressed them together and leaned a little to make it easier for Izuku to eat the chocolate carrot. I must do this to defeat Mina, and there is no other choice but to fulfill this challenge, I know that, but still, it's very embarrassing. I watch as Deku-kun closes his eyes and opens his mouth as he brings his face closer to my melons. My heart beats like crazy and my breathing becomes a little racing as I can begin to feel Deku-kun's breath against my skin. This is not something I should be doing, dressed as a rabbit and having a chocolate carrot on my melons to give to him. It's humiliating, but I still have to do it for him. Finally, Deku-kun bites the tip of the carrot between his teeth to pull it out a little, causing me to purse my lips to avoid making a strange noise. He ends up biting the piece of the tip to eat it without moving too far from my melons and without stopping to see them. That embarrasses me much more. This Deku-kun is a bit perverted, but it's okay. After all, he's a guy too, I guess it doesn't bother me. It takes me by surprise that he places his hands on top of mine to press my melons even more against each other. And I'm not quite sure what he wants to do, but I withdraw my hands for him to squeeze while I wrap my hands over his beautiful green curls. I think in this position it's easier for him to eat the chocolate. Deku-kun squeezes his hands a little on my melons and brings his face closer to take another bite. I for my part do my best to contain those strange sounds that he makes me produce. If we get married, will we do things like you? It's just a question I ask myself. Well, if Deku-kun asks me, I see no reason not to accept. After all, it's not that this is bothering me, it actually feels good. Having the guy I like so close to me with his hands on my melons and eating chocolate from them. It's certainly not as romantic as I'd like it to be, but still that doesn't take away from the fact that I'm next to Deku-kun. I think that's enough for me. I must keep playing this game just to prevent Mina from having Deku-kun to herself. I can't just believe that she's not going to end up raping him after everything she's done. I'll just make sure she doesn't win. If Momo-chan was serious, then I guess I can assume she won't do anything wrong. But I'm still not totally willing to let her win. But either way, one problem at a time, I must first complete the plan to defeat Mina. I make an effort to keep my mouth shut at the stimulus that Deku-kun makes me feel. The carrot is almost finished, so it shouldn't be long before this ends. Seeing him calms me down a bit. He doesn't have that intense look, and instead he looks like a little boy eating a candy. I can't help but smile when I see him like that. I caress his hair a little and pull his head a little to my melons so that the chocolate runs out. I guess it doesn't help much if I don't tell you directly, but I love you, Deku-kun. Izuku took the last bite of the carrot and then moved his face away from the neckline of the brunette that released his head and then placed his hands on the boy's chest to slowly push him to the bed to put him to bed. Very well, you can go back to rest, Deku-kun, Uraraka said to the green-haired man with a sweet smile while he resisted a little, but within a minute he was drowsy again and fell asleep again, giving the brunette freedom to get out of bed without waking him. When Uraraka got off, he shared knowing glances with Momo, Toru, Kyoyuka and finally with Tsuyu and then took a few breaths and put on a confident expression to focus his gaze on Mina. Now I challenge you, Mina, Ochako said with a small smile looking at the hairy mime who smiled defiantly as she began to make short jumps like a boxer. I'm ready for everything you have in mind, Mina replied, breaking her silence of mime for what her friend and rival would have prepared for her. I dare you to hit Deku-kun, Uraraka challenged simply, and the hairy woman opened her eyes in shock. Kuye, the mime exclaimed confused and shocked as she put her hands to her cheeks because of what she heard. Jiro had covered her ears at her friend's scream. Now the noise is back, she said, already getting ready for how noisy Mina would get again. Why are you challenging me to do that? Mina asked Uraraka, still surprised by the challenge the chestnut gave her. Momo steps in by taking a few steps forward. There's no rule that forbids it, and in simple terms it's a very intense challenge if we take it into account, so it's not against the rules, the black-haired woman argued serenely while still hugging her Izuku doll. Uraraka nodded at Momo's remarks. Besides, I mean your best punches, don't be soft with him, Ochako said to Mina calmly, causing the hairy woman to be even more surprised by what they were saying. What's wrong with you? I couldn't hit Midoriya-kun like that, exclaimed Mina to her friends who insisted that she should hit the boy. Why, Mina-chan? Asked Toru in confusion as she moved a little closer to her friend. Mina calmed down a bit to explain herself. He hasn't done anything wrong to me, and I don't like that kind of violence since we're not in training or anything like that, she told the others so that they understood that they were asking a lot of her. Uraraka put a finger to her chin as if he didn't understand her. But it doesn't matter if you hit him, it won't hurt Deku-kun much. Remember that he's the strongest in the school for a reason, the brunette argued simply, and the hairy mime bowed her head. I know and understand that, but I can't do it, replied Mina somewhat in conflict with herself but giving in to her values. She simply couldn't accept senseless violence. No matter how much they were in trust, she wouldn't dare to hit the boy who has been so good to her since they met. If it were a training thing, would be different. When they heard him, they all smiled victoriously. It's a pity, Kyoyuka said, crossing her arms enjoying seeing Mina on the ropes. With this she would only be left with one life. But wait a minute, that's a forbidden challenge. I won't accept a life being taken just for that. Instead challenge me to something else, Mina declared quickly and crossing her arms with authority since she wouldn't accept losing a life like that. If you say so, Uraraka said, unaffected. I dare you to wake up Deku-kun to start insulting him until he gets angry, the brunette challenged with a small innocent smile and causing the hairy woman to be surprised again. What the hell is going on with your mind, Uraraka-chan? Mina asked, shocked by the kind of challenges her friend was telling her that she wouldn't normally be in favor of that. What, is it simpler than the previous one? Asked Uraraka innocently and without understanding the surprise of the haired woman. I can't insult Midoriya, and I told you that he hasn't done anything wrong to me to deserve it, and maybe because he's confused he really thinks I hate him or something. Ashido explained to herself with a bit of embarrassment but sure of her position, she just didn't want to make the green-haired man feel bad. And isn't it? Asked Momo seriously, causing Mina to turn to look at her. Don't say that in jest, there's no way I hate Midoriya-kun, Mina said to the black-haired woman seriously for even hinting that she hated the cinnamon roll. Well, you don't seem to like him very much if you were planning to abuse him when he's helpless, Kyoyuka commented indifferently but it sounded like a reproach to the hairy woman who recoiled a little when she heard him. That's complicated, and it's not what you think, Mina told them, a little intimidated and rubbing her arm, not knowing exactly how to explain herself. Besides, you created a game in which you treat it as an object to be beaten. That doesn't seem to me to have much consideration, said Uraraka this time seriously, and causing the mime to bow her head a little. And they don't understand, Mina said without having anything to deny what they were saying. But they were right, it didn't seem that she really had any consideration for Izuku who had never been cruel to her. You think about it a lot, just ask him like you do with Minta, Momo said to Mina calmly and sighing as she closes her eyes. You know Minta deserves everything I tell her, but the difference between Minta and Midoriya-kun is like night and day, Ashido said to them all as he raised his head and then blushed a little. Simply Midoriya-kun is an adorable and cute cinnamon roll that doesn't deserve to be spoken to like that, added the girl somewhat embarrassed feeling a little strange inside. She knew that feeling very well. Then what will you do, Mina-chan? Asked Uraraka to her friend and rival, who seemed undecided about what to do. Mina sighed in defeat as she lowered her head. I give up, he said, causing both the chestnut and the others to smile surreptitiously. Is there no more complaint? Toru asked her hairy friend, who shook her head. No, this was my second chance and I also turned it down, so there's no other way, Mina replied as she approached to take a can of alcohol to drink it all at once in front of the others who watched proudly as the mime was losing a life. When she finished, Mina tossed the can aside and smiled at her friends. Congratulations, girls, now I only have one life, she congratulated them while raising a thumbs, but then looked at them somewhat annoyed and smiling sideways. But know that I won't forgive you if you give me challenges like that again, understand? She said threateningly, whereupon Uraraka, Momo, and Kyoyuka nodded calmly. Specifically, Momo, Uraraka, and Toru looked at each other with knowing looks, remembering their conversation before starting the round. Flashback. Several minutes before the start of the 9th round, Momo was talking to Uraraka and Toru in the latter's room. All of them sitting on the bed while they had just finished listening to the plan that the Airazu proposed to them. Then let me summarize. Your plan is basically for Toru-chan to decide the start of the round so that Kyoyuka-chan starts it by challenging you, Uraraka said, somewhat surprised and lost, looking at Momo, who nodded her head. How do you plan for her to collaborate with us? You already told us that they stopped being allies. Toru asked her black-haired friend, who with her own words had told them that her alliance with Kyoyuka ended. I'll give you a piece of paper that will summarize the whole plan. I'm sure it will help since it's to take a life from Mina, Momo assured calmly and confidently, knowing that her best friend would agree to collaborate with the plan. Then she'll challenge you and you'll refuse, Uraraka added, understanding from what Yaoyorozu told them about the plan earlier. Why are you determined to lose a life? You'll be left with only one, Toru asked, somewhat confused as she did not understand why Momo, who had 2 lives, would sacrifice herself to have only one. I know, but I don't care. I'm showing that in order to beat Mina I'm willing to lose, Momo replied confidently and with a small smile on her face, and then looked directly at Uraraka. Even if you want me to trust you, I'm not entirely sure if you're telling the truth that you don't want to win, said the brunette, crossing her arms and looking at Momo with some distrust. I don't need to win this game to make Izuku-kun fall in love, but if I don't need to win in order for Mina to win, then so be it, the class vice president declared with determination in her eyes, one with which Uraraka felt identified. I think the same, Achako said with the same determination on his face, noticing how the black-haired woman's words were sincere. Then it's okay for us to collaborate, right? Asked Momo with a slight smile, looking for a favorable answer, since she alone could not carry out the plan. I suppose so, Uraraka replied with a small smile, looking at her friend and then both nodding their heads. After all, they both had the same priority, to prevent Mina from beating Izuku. I have a question, Toru said, raising a hand and catching the attention of both girls. If what you say is true and Kyoyuka-chan cooperates with us, then after you reject her challenge, it will be Uraraka-chan's turn. Then she complies and it is her turn to challenge Mina-chan. What is she supposed to challenge her? Remember that it is Mina-chan that we are talking about, Toru said, addressing Momo, since there was still the detail of knowing what challenge Mina was unable to do. I have that same doubt, too, Uraraka said with the same doubt as her secret friend, as they both turned their attention to Momo, who had formulated the plan. Momo smiled slightly confidently. I have a slight feeling we'll have a little help with that, said the black-haired woman, remembering her observation that Tsuyu could be allied with the hairy one. She could trust that the green-haired woman didn't lose her way and would be willing to help them. She just had to trust her. There's something I've wanted to say before, Uraraka said, catching Momo's attention. I know I was the one who challenged you to have him with you the whole game, but could you stop hugging that Deku-kun Matryoshka? The brunette asked her friend, hoping that she would stop holding him all the time in her arms. That made her a little jealous. No, I got attached to him. Anyway, when it's all over I might create one too, Momo said firmly but sounding friendly to her friend, who smiled happily about it. Of course the vice president omitted the fact that she would make it smaller. I want one too, exclaimed Toru excitedly, causing both Uraraka and Momo to smile in amusement. End of flashback. Then Uraraka and Tsuyu looked at each other without being noticed by Mina, who was sitting on the ground along with Momo, Kyoyuka, and Toru. Another flashback. By this time Uraraka, Momo, Kyoyuka, and Mina had chosen their outfits for the 9th round and were changing, each undressing and dressing in the next outfit at a different pace, so they weren't as focused on the others. Toru was chatting relaxedly with Jiru and Mina, who were dressed in their mime and thief outfits respectively. Momo in a corner of his room was having a hard time putting on his short officer's shirt. Tsuyu, on the other hand, surreptitiously approached Uraraka, who was finishing putting on her rabbit costume in the cleavage area, and began to put on her gloves. The frog girl dressed as an angel leaned into her brown friend's ear to speak softly. Uraraka-chan, I must tell you something, Tsuyu said to Uraraka, who raised an intrigued eyebrow. What's the matter, Tsuyu-chan? Asked Uraraka, also in a low voice to hear her friend. Tsuyu remained silent for a few seconds and then answered. The challenge is that Mina-chan won't like to do, Tsuyu said calmly and with a slight concern that Mina would discover him betraying her. But the green-haired woman has already made up her mind. Achako became serious when she heard what her friend had to say. Then it's true. You were allied with Mina, she said, remembering what Momo had told her and Toru before they got to the room, that they should wait for Tsuyu to come and tell them something since she was allied with Mina. I should have done it. It was also useful to get this information, Tsuyu said calmly, to excuse herself a little, since to some extent she had planned to remain faithful to the hairy one to get Izuku. But seeing the opportunity to be able to stop Mina, she decided to give support to the others. Tell me the challenges, please, Uraraka asked her friend with a small knowing smile, and Tsuyu nodded her head to proceed to whisper in her ear what she had managed to get from Mina. End of flashback. And the joint effort of the 5 of them had finally led them to push Mina to have only one life. It is as if finally after so many rounds they have all collaborated together to achieve what they should have done in the beginning. Thought the 5 involved confidently and victoriously when they saw that there was almost nothing left to leave Mina without a chance to have the green hair. Now I'll challenge, at least let me do it for comfort, Mina said to her friends calmly and with her hands in her lap. All right, Uraraka agreed, not really caring about giving her that opportunity to challenge. All that was left was Kyoyuka to be challenged. I have no choice but to challenge Kyoyuka-chan, said Mina with a small smile, turning to look at her thief friend. I dare you to put your honey-covered jacks inside Deku-kun's mouth for 4 minutes, challenged the hairy woman with a mocking smile that made the class rocker blush a little. That's a strange thing, Kyoyuka said, a little embarrassed by the challenge Mina had given her. Will you? Asked Ishido in a playful tone, to which Jiru plucks up the courage to nod. Sure, it's not much compared to what I've done before, Kyoyuka said seriously, and then Tsuyu handed him a jar of honey, which he calmly uncovered and then slowly stretched his jacks until they submerged a little. It's cold, she complained, shuddering a little as she felt the sweet honey covering her jacks. Don't complain, Mina said to her friend. Try putting honey in your ear, Kyoyuka replied angrily, looking at him out of the corner of her eye. Then Jiru took his lobes out of the honey to proceed to stand up, approached the bed to climb on top of him and placed himself on top of the sleeping Izuku who slept peacefully on his back but maintaining a blush on his freckled cheeks from the alcohol. Kyoyuka was a little enraptured as she watched him sleep, but she concentrated and smiled slightly at him. Midoriya, wake up sleepyhead, Jiru said to the sleeping green-haired man as he brought his hand to his face to pinch his nose and cut off his breath, causing the boy to be waking up seconds later due to the lack of air in his lungs. Izuku opened his eyes somewhat sleepily. Kyoyuka-chan, the boy asked, looking at the girl above him. I'm going to give you some honey, please, open your mouth and just lick, okay, said Kyoyuka to the boy with some embarrassment as she showed him her jacks covered in the candy that reached the nose of the boy who smiled dazedly. Okay, Izuku agreed, smiling childishly, which didn't inspire much confidence in Jiru. I'm serious, don't touch any part of my body or kiss me suddenly, she said to him with some firmness since she didn't want surprises, at least not at that moment or in front of her friends, to which she received a cheerful nod from the boy. All right, try to be soft, Kyoyuka said shyly and closing her eyes slowly as she lowered her jacks to the boy's mouth. God, I swear I never thought I was going to go through something like this, having to be on top of Midoriya like this and he was about to taste the honey that's on my jacks. This is just something I didn't have even in my wildest dreams and now it's happening. Okay, now I can admit that I like it, but still this is going a little far, as something like this would only happen in SS Sec, but here I am now, with him about to touch my lobes with his tongue. That strange sound escapes me as I feel how he runs his tongue over my jacks to savor them with a certain enjoyment in his tone. I open my eyes slightly to see his face and I can't help but be a little captivated to see how he sensually moves his tongue under me. I don't know if he actually moves his tongue sensually, but in my eyes it's that way. It's the only possible explanation for why I find him so sassy and provocative at this moment. See, control yourself, Kyoyuka, and you shouldn't let yourself be affected by that. And she doesn't look sassy while licking your earlobes, nor does her warm touch on your skin make you feel good. Ugh, who the FCK am I kidding? I find it sassy and cute the more I see him licking my jacks. On the one hand he may look like a freckled little boy tasting a candy he likes, but on the other side is an attractive young man who moves his tongue as if he is inviting me to try it. If you're really okay with it, then I guess. No, I don't have to think like that. I'm a rational girl, it's obvious that that's not her intention. She's just tasting the honey, she doesn't want to kiss me. I know I told him not to touch me or kiss me, but he could disobey me if he wanted, and not that I was going to bother him about it. He's free to do it and I just scold him a little. Come on, stop licking my lobes and at least try to kiss me. You did it before, so why don't you do it now? Alright, it's my fault. Heck, if I just thought things through before I said them, maybe if I hadn't denied him that he'd be kissing me just as passionately now as he was before. My breathing becomes arrhythmic and I feel the heat of my body increase in the stimulus that he provides in my lobes, causing me to shudder without being able to help it. Phew, why is it so easy for him to do this to me? He's not touching me with his hands and he's just finishing licking the honey on my jacks. So why is Midoriya so skilled at making me feel this way? Needing just a little more from him? Am I so turned on? Shit, I didn't expect that I was going to fall so in love with this boy, and not that I dislike it either. Time ran out and Jiru proceeded to retract her earlobes, leaving Izuku pleased as she licked her lips while she breathed a little, gasping with a blush on her cheeks. 2. Even though you didn't touch my body, why am I like this? She asked, looking with some fever at the boy below her who was smiling innocently at her. Kyoyuka-chan tastes very good, I'd like to try a little more, Izuku said, speaking cheerfully and sincerely, causing the girl to be a little embarrassed and regain a little of her reasoning. And don't play with your luck, Kyoyuka said to the boy as she looked away from him, still on top of him, who smiled amusedly to get up a little and bring his face closer to hers. You're all red, Kyoyuka-chan, you look very cute, the green-haired man flattered him, smiling kindly and then giving a small kiss on the tip of Jiru's nose. who was a little surprised while her face turned redder. Tonto, she said, looking away so that they wouldn't see her face, mostly so that no one would see the silly smile that had been drawn on her lips. He got off Izuku and he yawned sleepily to resume his nap, but it seemed that his head hurt, but this detail went unnoticed by the girls who were already seeing each other in a circle. Now we're done with the 9th round, it's really all feeling shorter than it did at the beginning, Mina commented calmly, thinking about how short the rounds seemed to last compared to the beginning of the game. Hiro stood idly by with his eyes closed. It's normal, Tsuyu-chan and Toru-chan are out of the game, so if 2 of the 4 of us left refuse a challenge then there are only 2 left who do, Kyoyuka said calmly, implying the obvious. Clearly, as the game progressed and the players were exiting, the rounds would be shorter than at the beginning. Even so, it was more entertaining at the beginning when we were all participating, Mina said with a friendly smile as she looked at her friends. It was inevitable that the game would move forward and eventually reach our current state, Momo said serenely from her place as she still hugged the Izuku doll that was in her arms. Uraraka nodded in agreement with what the black-haired woman had said. It's true. Besides, in a matter of rounds someone else can be eliminated and we'll get closer to the end, said the chestnut, already waiting for that game to come to an end. But there's still time for that, there's no need to rush, we can entertain ourselves for a while, said Mina cheerfully, tilting her head slightly to the side. I don't understand you, Mina-chan, do you want to beat Midoriya or do you want to keep playing? Toru asked her friend curiously as she was really starting to confuse her with her intentions. Obviously I love Midoriya-kun, but I'm having fun with you, I'd be lying if I said I wanted to end all this, Mina said, speaking honestly and smiling at her 5 friends with amusement. It's funny that sides were formed and stuff. Apart from the fact that there's some tension between us, I think the truth is that it's been fun. She added, and the others could see that he wasn't lying. He was really having fun being able to hang out with them like that. See girls, Izuku said, getting out of bed in pain and sitting on the edge of the bed while holding his head with both hands. What's the matter, Midoriya-chan, Jiro? Tsuyu asked the boy with a bit of concern as she approached him. Tsuyu-chan, asked the boy, somewhat confused, opening one eye to see the frog girl. Can you give me some water, please? He asked kindly despite the pain in her head, to which she took a bottle of water that she brought before coming to the room. Here you go, Tsuyu said calmly as he offered it to the boy who smiled gratefully. Thank you, Izuku thanked and then desperately drank the entire contents of the bottle as if he hadn't drunk anything all day. Are you feeling better, Midoriya? Toru asked the boy who was still holding his head tightly as he closed his eyes. I'd like to say yes, but my head hurts a lot, said the green-haired man, sounding more fluid and aware as if his previous innocent and drunken side had disappeared. Don't you think you speak more normally than before? Asked Uraraka to her friends, a little nervous and blushing when she heard her friend speak as he normally did. The others were a little nervous at the mere thought that he was already conscious. But specifically, the boy stood up from the bed somewhat dizzy, still holding his head. Girls, Izuku said, catching the attention of them who watched him start walking towards the exit. I'm going to my room, he added, causing surprise in them that they remained silent for a few seconds watching as he tried with difficulty to open the door. What? They all asked when they came out of their surprise and then went quickly with the green-haired man to hold him between them and sit him back on the edge of the bed so that he would not leave. And you don't have to leave if you don't want to, Midoriya-kun, Mina said to the green-haired man with a nervous smile, gesturing for him to stay seated. What are you talking about? Ishido-san, this is the room of, said the boy, somewhat confused, and then stared at the place around him. Whose room is this? Ah, Momo-san's, he answered himself when he managed to identify his friend's room in which he has woken up early in his talks about literature. You look disoriented, Kyoyuka said, worried about the boy who seemed to be suffering. And my head hurts a lot, things are a little blurry, Izuku said, putting a hand to his face where he opened one eye between his fingers while closing the other tightly. Really, his dizziness made it difficult for him to see. Could it be that the effect of the alcohol has worn off? Asked Mina, somewhat nervous at the thought that maybe, just maybe, it's the case that Izuku is experiencing some kind of hangover. What's the last thing you remember, Izuku-kun? Momo asked the boy with a slight blush on her cheeks and hiding the matryoshka from him behind her back so he wouldn't see it. Why do you call me that, Momo-san? Izuku asked his friend, looking at him somewhat confused since she didn't call him by his name before. Nothing in particular, Momo replied shyly as she looked away trying to appear calm, but it was very difficult for her to have the boy she likes consciously in front of her. Why are you dressed that way? Asked the boy somewhat nervous and blushing as he tolerated the pain in his head, causing the girls to look confused and then embarrassed to realize that they were dressed in those costumes in front of the boy. So several covered themselves as best they could for the embarrassment of being observed by him. That's the least of it. What's the last thing you remember? Toru asked the boy, sounding nervous and desperate to avoid answering that question from him. The last thing I remember, said the boy, clutching his head in pain as he gritted his teeth, trying to remember as he was watched by the 6 girls who were tense waiting for his answer. The taste of honey, he said, causing Toru and Kyoyuka to tense up after having done challenges with honey. Then Izuku opened his eyes in surprise. Jiro-san, he said, and then focused his perplexed gaze on the aforementioned who looked away embarrassed and frowned. And I did that with Jiro-san, he said, shocked and blushing a lot. And you don't have to say it, Kyoyuka told the boy with a bit of embarrassment to stop thinking about what she did. After all, she wasn't mentally prepared for him to even know about what they've done. Wait a minute, Izuku said, closing his eyes for a few seconds, trying to remember even more, remembering what he's been doing. NJH, he complained in pain with his hands above his head, making the girls even more worried. Deku-kun, are you all right? Asked Uraraka to the green-haired man worriedly, and the others stood just like her as they stood around her hoping he wasn't in danger. Please leave me alone, I have a lot to think about, Izuku told them, managing to stand up with difficulty while he staggers a little from dizziness and the headache barely allows him to stand. See, how much do you remember? Mina asked the boy, this time wanting to make sure exactly how much he remembers, because depending on the answer they could tell him a little lie with which they could get rid of his anger when they knew that it was the prize of a game. Enough, Izuku replied with a strong blush on her cheeks that caused the 6 girls to be speechless for a few moments. Izuku-kun, asked Momo, somewhat perplexed that he really remembered as much as he seemed. If he remembered the challenges, his escape to the B-class dormitory, if he really remembered everything, then they would be in a bind. And I want to drink water, and my throat burns, my head hurts, complained the boy, uncomfortable and sore from the dryness of his throat that was tormenting him along with the senseless waves of pain that subdue his head. If you want, you can go to bed and we'll bring you water, Toru offered the boy worriedly so that he would stop exerting. The truth is that he didn't want to see him suffering. And no, Izuku denied pain but managing to walk slowly towards the door. I don't want to rest in front of you, he added, causing the 6 girls to feel a pain in their hearts as they listened to him. And I can't do it, continued the green-haired man, managing to reach the exit but had to lean against a wall to keep from falling. Why, Midoriya-chan, Jiro? Tsuyu asked the boy while she and the rest hoped he wasn't so angry and that it was for another reason why he didn't want to be with them. The boy struggled to place a hand on the doorknob while his expression reflected guilt. Because I'm so sorry, Izuku apologized, closing his eyes as the force left his body and he fell to his knees with his head staring at the ground. Asked the girls, confused by the boy's apology, but then slowly approached him, who was not moving or talking and only seemed to be breathing. Uraraka knelt beside him and looked at his face. Ochako asked, confused that he had fallen asleep at any moment. He must have been dizzy and fainted. He couldn't stay conscious any longer, Kyoyuka said with concern reflected in her gaze on the green-haired man who until a few moments ago could not tolerate the pain in his head. Then you think I'm going to continue to be groggy? Toru asked the others intriguingly, for there was a possibility that he might not be quite sober. I don't know, but I'm sure of one thing, Mina said with her arms folded and a sorrowful expression on her face. He didn't want us around, she said, reopening the wound caused by the boy's words in each of them, because that simple fact was painful to accept or for whatever reason the green-haired man had. It's understandable, Momo said calmly, but there was still sadness in her expression as she hugged the Izuku doll in her arms a little more. Right, we expected something like this, Jiro, Tsuyu said, bowing her head and rubbing her arm, unable to help but feel hurt and sad. I think the same, but still, said Uraraka in the same state as the others and then put a hand to her heart while grimacing sadly. Still, I don't like it, he added, feeling something important inside him to squeeze. It was a pain difficult to describe. They all stood in a dead silence for a whole minute. None of them had anything to say in those moments because they were so busy focused on their own thoughts, but it was inevitable that it would be one who would break that silence. What do we do now? Toru asked her friends, trying to find out what they should do at that moment. Momo made an effort to regain her composure and become serious. Let's take him back to bed, replied the black-haired woman, causing a little surprise in the others. But you heard what she said. She wanted to go to her room, Kyoyuka told her friend without understanding the logic she uses in proposing that. In the state he's in, it's not safe for us to leave him unattended. If he's still affected by alcohol, then he might run away and make a mess again. We can't allow it. Momo said, not only speaking out of genuine concern for the green-haired man, but as vice president of the class she had to stop him from doing more damage than he already did. Jiro, I think the same as Momo-chan. If he wakes up and needs something, we can give it to him. That way he won't have to force himself, Tsuyu said calmly, agreeing with her friend who was certainly right that they should keep an eye on him. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he doesn't want to be with us, said Mina, still a little slumped and lowering her head a little, but then she feels a hand on her shoulder and turns to see that it is Jiro who is looking at her firmly. If he wakes up, we will have to face the consequences of our actions head on. It is understandable that he is upset and we will have to listen to what he has to tell us, Kyoyuka said to the hairy woman seriously, since they should take responsibility for their actions. I don't feel as prepared as I thought I would be, Uraraka said a little sadly and uncomfortable with the pain that kept her heart at ease. We'll all be embarrassed, but we'll deal with it when he regains consciousness, said Toru, rubbing a somewhat drooping arm and then lifting the boy who lost his gravity due to the chestnut quirk and took him to the bed where they laid him. Again they all fell silent watching him rest in Momo's bed. The blush caused by the alcohol on his freckled cheeks was no longer so noticeable. Nor did he seem to rest peacefully, since at certain moments he grimaced in pain, surely due to the of this same that he felt in his head. Then what do we do now, Jiro? Asked Tsuyu, looking away from the boy to look at his friends. We should wait until he wakes up, Momo proposed calmly and without taking his eyes off Izuku. Enough was enough. They should wait until he woke up to face the consequences of his actions. Mina stood silently looking seriously at the green-haired man. She seemed to be thinking about something very deeply. Within seconds she came up with an idea and inhaled and exhaled air, mentally preparing for what she was about to say. She would know the image they would all have of her, but she had to stick to her role, just as she has done from the beginning and just as she has been doing throughout the game. Or we could do one last round, Mina said quietly, but audibly enough for the others to hear him and turn to look at him. What? Please tell me you didn't say what I heard, Uraraka said to her friend with a bit of incredulity and seriousness, since she really couldn't believe that she had proposed that. Mina was silent for a few seconds and then formed a lively smile on her face. Just think about it. The four of us have only one life left. It doesn't hurt to have the last round before he wakes up completely so that he gets upset with us, Ishido said to the others as he walked among them to convince them. It's just the worst idea I've ever heard, second only to the idea of creating this game, Kyoyuka said earnestly, glancing at her friend who hasn't stopped talking nonsense since they started the game, as if she was more impulsive than usual. We have no reason to give in because of your words. Izuku-kun is already recovering, and there is nothing left you can do to him. There is no reason to continue playing, Momo argued serenely and showing herself firm in her position. After all, Mina could not do what she wanted with the green hair. In a sense, they all achieved their goal. That may be true, but, said Mina with a little mockery, and then stood behind the black-haired woman to put both hands on her shoulders. Just think for a second, if he really likes the last challenge you do with him, maybe it is the case that he doesn't get so upset with you, or better yet, that he falls in love with one, she said to the others in a tempting way, as if she were a cunning snake that could see through their intentions. They remained silent, thinking about Mina's words that went on as I walked towards Toru. Midoriya-kun is a man after all. It wouldn't be strange if he could fall under the charms of one of us, she added, closing her eyes simply, knowing that his words affected her friends. But that's still not right. Besides, no one will win anyway, Toru stammered, somewhat nervous and embarrassed as she blushed and played with her hands at the thought of the four of them doing something else to the boy. Mina shook her head in amusement and then placed her hands on his waist. This is no longer about winning the game. There couldn't be a winner with this sudden turn of events, but this last round may be the final chance to catch Midoriya-kun's attention, she told the others, who were surely rethinking her words, so she held out her hand as an invitation. So, what do you say, one last round? Ishido asked his friends with a biting and sly smile, inviting them to be accomplices of his idea. Jiro remained silent for several seconds and then folded his arms. I refuse. I'm not going to be fooled by your words, Kyoyuka replied curtly, clinging to her values that simply told her that she had to stop. If playing no longer made sense to stop Mina, then her role was over. That's very cruel, Kyoyuka-chan, Mina said without really being offended, and then looked at Momo and Uraraka, who were thoughtful. Anyway, Momo-chan, Uraraka-chan, now it's up to you to decide, he told the two of them, who were certainly big shots in the game considering the tension between them as the rounds went by. Both girls spend several seconds thinking and look at each other sideways with some distrust in what the other will decide. If the other agrees to play, it would make it clear that if she had reasons to fall in love with Izuku, something that they would not allow and would stand in their way, since after all they were still fighting for the love of the boy. Certainly they had managed to get rid of the danger that Mina represented in case she won the game, but now there was the problem of who would be the one who would fall in love with the green-haired boy. Of course, this last round was only a desperate measure to appeal to his kind side, but for each one it was an opportunity to fall in love with him, and for clear reasons each one had to fight for her love, even if they had to get in the way of him. The other, love is not just a game, love is a war. There are losers and there are winners, and none of them were willing to be the loser. Anything goes in love and in war, and this was a war for Izuku's love. I do, said Momo and Uraraka at the same time with seriousness on their faces as they smiled at each other with a certain malice towards each other. They knew each other too well, they could see through each other. After all, they both put themselves in each other's shoes and could predict their decision, because yes, they were both in love and both recognized the other as a rival. They knew that Tsuyu, Toru, and Jiro were also in love with the boy, but they both recognized each other as equal rivals and knew that the next round would possibly place her one step above the other to get her romance with the boy they were all in love with. Mina smiled, pleased by the response from both of them, while Jiro was surprised that they had agreed to participate in what would be the 10th round. Well, it's decided. There's nothing left to discuss, said Mina, looking at Kyoyuka with some mockery, since by general vote she would be obliged to participate. Although of course she could simply refuse a challenge and be subjected to punishment to get out of the game. I guess there's no other choice, Kyoyuka said, looking seriously at the hairy woman who had finally managed to persuade Momo and Uraraka. But she wouldn't give in like them. She would stand firm, and if necessary she would lose her last life to show her willingness to do the right thing. That's how you talk, Mina said to her friend dressed as a thief to pat her on the back with joy. I guess you all know what you're doing by now, Jiro, Tsuyu said, a little tense at everyone's participation in what would be the last round of the game. But I'm still worried about how Midoriya is going to react, Toru said a little nervously, looking at the sleeping boy of whom she didn't know how he would react to everything that happened and what he remembered. Would he be drunk, sober, embarrassed for everything he did, or would he be upset with them for treating him that way when he was vulnerable? Mina stood in front of Kyoyuka, Uraraka, and Momo, who saw her seriously. From that moment on, they were about to walk a tightrope where they risked angering the green-haired man or even attracting him if he was conscious. So, Mina said, smiling defiantly as she stretched out her arms to introduce what was to come next. Let the last round begin, she declared as the mastermind of the whole thing, and there was nothing else to say. The last round of the game has just begun. Endgame, endgame. The last round of the game has already begun, and the 6 girls were in Momo's room, being Tsuyu and Toru, who had left the game and kept their angel and midnight outfits respectively. The other 4, on the other hand, had already changed their clothes and were dressed in the outfits that had been assigned to them from the box. Mina is wearing a Yui cheerleading outfit, white calf-length stockings, an orange skirt with a green stripe that barely covers her thighs, an orange top with green stripes and a large white stripe in the middle where UA is written in green letters, a green necklace around her neck, and finally the essential yellow pom-poms. Uraraka, on the other hand, a cosplay class of a red BLD cell from some anime, wearing a blue mini short tight to her thighs, a brown belt, a black sleeveless shirt showing a little of her cleavage, on top of which she wears a red jacket up to the navel and open in the middle and with her sleeves rolled up to the elbows. Finally, he wears a red and black cap on his head. Kyoyuka is wearing an Indiana Jones-style adventurer's outfit, consisting of beige shorts up to a little above the knees, a brown tank top somewhat revealing, a beige button-down shirt open in the middle and sleeves rolled up to the elbows, while she wears a leather hat and an adventurer's whip on her belt. Finally, Momo wore a blue school bathing suit in one piece. This suit was somewhat tight, highlighting the size of her melons and her rear, as well as leaving the right places of skin in view, being a very attractive sight. Without a doubt, Minta would kill to see that. Momo, Uraraka, and Kyoyuka remained silent with a bit of seriousness in their eyes, while Mina smiled contentedly as she shook her pom-poms a little. Very well, now that we are dressed, we must take care of Midoriya-kun, as Shido said to her friends with a big smile, and then pointed with a pom-pom to Izuku, who was asleep in bed after having passed out. What do you mean now? Asked Uraraka, confused and raising an eyebrow curiously at what the haired woman meant. I mean to keep him groggy so he doesn't walk away from us when he recovers and wakes up, Mina replied simply and calmly, leaving her friends a little surprised by such an intention, to which Jiro looked at him seriously. I'm not going to let you give him alcohol again, Kyoyuka warned him, speaking seriously, as it was obvious that it would only make everything worse and surely cause more pain to the boy suffering from a headache. I think I can give him a tranquilizer that is not so powerful to make him not sleep, Momo proposed with calm on his face, giving that possible alternative. Not that he agreed to stun him, but it was that or Mina would surely give him alcohol and Momo really would not allow it. Great, I'll ask you, Momo-chan, Mina said to her black-haired friend happily, giving the vice president space to approach Izuku while in her hand she created that red pill that she had given Nico Deku to calm him down. Here you have water, Momo-chan, Tsuyu said to her friend, kindly giving her some water, which Momo thanked with a gesture, and then approached Izuku to put the pill in his mouth, then raised his head a little to give him water to drink, and he reflexively began to drink, and with that he swallowed the tranquilizer created by Momo. After a few seconds, Izuku slowly opens his eyes, and they are cloudy because of the tranquilizer. While he had a tired and empty expression as if he was not looking anywhere, he just sat on the edge of the bed to look at the floor a little. Sekai, not so, Izuku said between intervals of silence, with his voice muffled and almost without emotion, but it was clearly a plea from the bottom of the consciousness of the green-haired man who struggled to make his words reach his friends. Midoriya-chan, Tsuyu whispered, a little distressed and with her hands held on her chest, looking pity at the boy who did not deserve what was happening to him. The others thought the same, but seeing Mina shake her pom-poms in the air caught her attention. Well, the last one to be challenged was Kyoyuka-chan, so it's your turn, Mina said to her rocker friend who was the first to challenge in the final round. She just looked annoyed and looked away. Ugh, I guess I'm challenging you, I don't care, Kyoyuka replied with a shrug of her shoulders with indifference and a bit of irritation in her tone. You don't seem motivated, Mina said to her friend, making a small angry pout because she wasn't taking it seriously. Jiro glanced at him out of the corner of his eye with a bit of hostility. What did you expect? You're asking me to challenge you to do something indecent with the boy I like, Kyoyuka said defensively and taking out a little of her annoyance while looking at the hairy woman seriously. During the game I was forced to do it because I would stop you from doing something indecent to him if you won, but now you have no chance of winning, and I would be giving you a chance to seduce him, she added, frowning a little, looking directly at Mina, who remained silent for a few seconds and then smiled sideways. Be that as it may, now you must challenge me not to go against the second rule of increasing the intensity, Ashido replied with a sly and playful smile, and then shook his pom-poms a little mockingly, causing Jiro to step forward to face him. What would happen if I didn't follow that rule? Tell me a reason why I should obey it, Kyoyuka demanded to Mina intensely, while the atmosphere in the place became somewhat heavy for the moment between them. I'll choose what to do to him, replied Mina, smiling with a bit of malice, silencing Jiro, who widened her eyes. It's either you or it's me, it's that simple, you decide, Kyoyuka-chan, Ashido said to his friend innocently, causing the violet-haired woman to sneer as she looks away. TCH, I dare you to behave flirtatiously with him for 2 minutes, Jiro challenged Mina with annoyance and clear disgust and then crossed his arms. What, isn't that very simple? Asked Toru, a little surprised by this challenge, which was not specific and seemed to be easy at first glance. We're talking about Mina, that's more than enough time, Momo interjected seriously, and hugging her matryoshka of Izuku, giving Mina so much freedom would be dangerous. Very well, let's get to work, exclaimed Mina with a big smile and then began to model her figure sensually in the direction of Izuku, who was sitting on the edge of the bed and slowly raised his gaze to the hairy woman. Tea please, Ashido-san. No, he asked in a low voice, but Mina only silenced him with a finger on her lips while smiling mischievously and coquettishly. Relax, Midoriya-kun, you're going to like this, Mina assured the green-haired boy and then proceeded to sit on his lap and place her hands on his strong shoulders and then begin the challenge while Uraraka watched his stopwatch. I begin to lower my hands towards his hard pectorals and his marked abdomen to begin to caress him slowly, which causes him to clench his teeth trying to resist my caresses. It is tender to see him like this and I can't help but want to bring my face closer to his pale and tempting neck to start giving him brief kisses to taste his skin. It's just fascinating to feel like he's feeling good about me, he just seems to be reluctant to accept it. Oh my adorable and attractive Midoriya, if you only had an idea of what I am risking by doing all this, I can't afford to fail at this point. I want to make you feel good and start looking at me, that you notice me and you can feel something for me, so I must act even if my ultimate victory does not happen. But I'm still fine now, because now I know perfectly well how I feel about you. It was just a vague idea that in the past I thought was just interest, but I realized that no, it's more than that, and that only motivates me more to try to fall in love with me. His body is tense and I bring my mouth to his ear to blow a little, causing him to shudder, and I smile flirtatiously. You don't have to resist, Midoriya-kun, I don't bite unless you want to, I said with a certain mischievous touch and then kissed her ear and took advantage of smelling the natural aroma of her being. Yes, I'm the worst at doing this to you, but I'm desperate. This may be my last chance to achieve something with you when I finally plucked up the courage to act. But the others got in my way and it's still my chance to prove that I'm not the only one who can fall under it. Love, to think that what I've felt for you since freshman year was love, that's why it bothered me that you were becoming so popular and still I couldn't be so close to you. But that's over now. I place both my hands on his freckled cheeks and bring my face closer to his as my heart beats fast and I close my eyes with the outside to finally join my lips to his with intensity. My world freezes and in it only Midoriya and I exist, being my person who tastes the taste of her mouth and feels the warmth of her lips and then advances further and inserts my tongue to trigger a battle against hers where we exchange saliva. At this precise moment I am the girl closest to you, I am not in the background like the noisy companion of always. But now I am the girl who is kissing you with such intensity. I do not want to continue to be distant from you, I want you to look at me and love me as I love you. I'm in love with you, the only thing I can trust is my body to try to attract you and make you mine just like I can be only yours. Our lips are separated with a strand of saliva acting as a bridge while we both catch our breath after that prolonged kiss in which we could barely breathe. I'm sorry, it seems that I lied a little bit, I just couldn't contain myself, I said, smiling a little, blushing but trying to keep my flirtatious facade. I said that I didn't bite but I still kissed him, although he didn't resist much since later he went along with me. You should be more honest, Midoriya. Yes, this daring thing is the only thing I can do, but I'm not the only one who has done it during the game. The others have fallen low and maybe they have made tricks to get here. They have fought among themselves, they have separated into sides, they have broken alliances, and surely even Suyu-chan betrayed me to tell them what things could challenge me. They have all stooped as low as I have to try to have you despite what they say and appear to have justifiable reasons. The difference between them and me is that I am aware that I am the bad one here, but I will be okay with that if you are by my side in the end. I bring my face close to hers to speak softly in her ear. That was my first kiss, so take responsibility, Midoriya-kun, I say softly and with a slight smile, and then kiss his freckled cheek affectionately and then smile satisfied to see him blushing and a little surprised despite his cloudy gaze. Time, Uraraka said calmly, calling it a time for Ashido, who shrugged her shoulders in satisfaction and then climbed down from the green-haired man's lap to start walking away in the direction of her friends. What did you say to him? Asked Kaiuka to the haired woman seriously and looking at her closely, referring to what she said to Izuku before kissing his cheek, because now the green-haired man seemed to be surprised and embarrassed as if something occupied his mind. Nothing, it's just that it looks very cute, Mina replied, smiling innocently and not intimidated by Jiru's gaze, who laughed in frustration at not knowing what he really said. Anyway, now I'll challenge Uraraka-chan, added the hairy woman, pointing with a pom-pom to the chestnut that tensed up a little. Very well, said Uraraka, slightly blushing but trying to be as confident and firm as possible since she had decided to participate so as not to fall behind Momo. I dare you to rub your intimacy with Midoriya-kun's matryoshka that Momo-chan has right in front of him, Ashido challenged with a slightly sinister and menacing smile, causing Uraraka and Momo to widen their eyes. What? Both girls exclaimed, shocked and blushing at the challenge that the hairy woman had just said. You can't be serious, Mina, Momo exclaimed to Mina angrily and protectively hugging her Izuku doll while Uraraka next to her was nervous about the challenge but still looked at her friend with disapproval. "Oh, I'm very serious," Mina replied with amusement and her hands on her waist. "Girls, something's wrong with Toru-chan, Jiro," Tsuyu said to her friends, catching their attention as they turned to see Toru, who was sitting hugging her legs in a corner while holding her head in her hands. "Damn Netherware, damn Netherware, damn Netherware," Toru said on loop and sounded deranged as if she had some kind of trauma, making her friends a little worried. Emine, on the other hand, seemed indifferent. Ignore her. In a shoujo manga that she liked, the protagonist appeared cheating on her boyfriend with another guy. It affected her a lot. She told the others since it was not the first time she saw her friend in that state because of her trauma with infidelity. To say that this is Netherware is an exaggeration, Kaioyuka commented a little relaxed and simply as she crossed her arms. Tsuyu for her part was trying to reassure Hagakure with a few pats on the back. "It's just a doll, it's not something to write home about," Mina said, calmly closing her eyes. But even so, Uraraka wasn't comfortable with that challenge, much less Momo who owned the doll. "Anyway, I'm not going to hit my Dakun," Momo declared to Mina and Uraraka with seriousness and possessiveness, hugging her Matryoshka tightly to avoid having to give it. "Dakun, did you name it?" asked Kaioyuka with a bead of sweat on her temple when she saw that her best friend and class vice president had named a doll. To think that an exemplary and impeccable student could give a cute name to a doll was strange. Momo blushed slightly embarrassed, but remained calm. "Sure, it may sound ridiculous, but I had to refer to Dakun somehow," Momo replied, closing her eyes and calming down without letting go of her beloved doll whom she became very fond of. Mina sighed and then turned to the black-haired woman. "Just lend it to her. It won't last long, only 4 minutes." Ashido asked his friend calmly to give in once and for all and give the doll to Uraraka, who seemed to want to stay on the sidelines until the black-haired woman agreed. Momo turned to look directly at the chestnut seriously. "I refuse. If you want, I'll create one for you and use that one," she said to Achako, who blushed embarrassedly but managed to nod her head awkwardly. "Okay." Uraraka accepted a little shyly and then saw how Momo from her right thigh created a Matryoshka similar to Dakun, and this doll fell to the ground to roll to the feet of Uraraka, who lifted it in her hands. "Isn't this one smaller?" asked Uraraka, raising an eyebrow intriguingly as she noticed that the size of her Dakun was smaller than the Dakun that Momo held in her arms. If, from that moment on, every Matryoshka with the appearance of Izuku would be called Dakun by rule, years later it would be sold like hotcakes in toy stores and companies for both children and young fans of the Deku hero. Of course, a certain amount of Dakuns bought was by the female population, but that is an irrelevant fact. "Buy your Dakun soon." "No, it's just an optical illusion," Momo denied, closing her eyes and turning her head in another direction indifferently. "No, this one is definitely smaller," said Mina, who was looking at the Uraraka doll that was half the size of the original Dakun. Achako wasn't happy about this and set his sights on Momo. "It's not fair. Create one just like yours." The brunette complained to the black-haired woman angrily because her doll was smaller and that bothered her for some reason, as if she didn't deserve to have a Dakun of the same size. Momo didn't ignore his complaints and looked at him seriously. "If you have the energy to complain, then you better use it by doing your stupid challenge," she replied sharply and forcefully, silencing the chestnut, who had no choice but to swallow her frustration to concentrate on what she had to do now. She blushed as she remembered what she should do with her Dakun in front of the green-haired man sitting on the bed. It just took a lot of courage on her part to do something like that in front of him, so she swallowed nervously and began to get a little closer to Momo's bed right in front of Izuku. "Uraraka," Izuku said in an interval of silence and with his eyes cloudy as he looked at the chestnut that was a meter away from him while holding the Dakun doll in his hands. Uraraka looked shy and embarrassed and looked straight into the boy's face. "Please don't think badly of me for what I'm going to do, Deku-kun," Achako asked with some concern, as she didn't want the image he had of her to be tarnished even more. She closed her eyes in deep embarrassment to place her Dakun on the ground. Then she proceeded to kneel with both legs slightly spread and perched on top of the doll that remained motionless in place with its adorable face. The brunette was clearly nervous and slowly descended on the doll until the doll's head came into contact with her crotch, causing her to hold a strange sound in her mouth, and began to move slowly to produce friction with Dakun. Honestly, in any other situation it would be a sensual and even exciting panorama, but at this precise moment such a thing could not be assured, because Izuku watched all the action with his cloudy and silent gaze while the brunette seemed to fight between whether or not to enjoy the pleasure he received in intimacy. Uraraka opened her eyes shyly and with tears on the edge of her eyes to observe Izuku's expression. "And don't look at me, it's embarrassing," she asked him embarrassingly as she put her hands to her face to try to cover it but leaving space between her fingers to see. Mina, on the other hand, climbed onto the bed and stood behind the green-haired man to place her hands on his shoulders. "Oh no, he's going to see everything," Ashido said with a mocking smile to make sure the green-haired man didn't look away from what was happening. "For some reason this is all looking very murky to me," Kaioyuka commented, somewhat disturbed by the whole situation that had become somewhat sinister, since he was drugged and forced to watch as Uraraka was forced to masturbate with a doll that looked like him. "Damn Netherware, damn Netherware, damn Netherware," Toru said from his corner, hugging his legs and with a mournful aura surrounding him as he holds his head in despair at his latent trauma from the current situation. "And no, I shouldn't be doing this, and much less in front of Deku-kun. What will he think of me after this?" He must already remember several things about what I did with him while I was drunk, and surely he must be upset with me, and having to see me now will surely worsen the image he has of me. Like I'm an indecent and hopelessly perverted girl. Shame on me. I want to die, and I don't want him to think that about me, not him. Not Deku-kun. NGH, I contain that strange sound that wants to come out of my lips. I do my best not to open my mouth and make dirty sounds that make my image in front of Deku-kun even worse. But it's hard to fight this, as much as I hate this situation as still. It feels good. And I don't know the reason, but it turns me on to have Deku-kun in front of me observing how I please myself. There is no doubt that it embarrasses me a lot. But even so, that does not take away from the fact that the protagonist of my fantasies is in front of me looking at me. For a long time I have fantasized about Deku-kun, no matter how embarrassed I am to admit it, but it is like that. But it's normal to masturbate to think about the person I like, right? That's not strange, right? It's something physiological. I couldn't help it, fantasizing that Kyukwe Deku-kun and I, Kaya. And I can't say, it's just thinking about it my body gets even hotter and the feeling in my intimacy becomes more intense while I feel more sensitive. And I don't want Deku-kun to look at me, but it still feels good to do this while he's looking at me. I'm embarrassed to think this way, and it makes me look like a pervert, but it's not. It's just that I like him too much. Yes, I like Deku-kun. He has always been him, my first love, my first friend in Yui, my first hero by saving me in the entrance exam. He has been the first in many things for me. Tonight he also took my first kiss, and I don't regret that. And now, yes, I just need him to have my first time someday, and I don't want to sound perverted or anything like that. It's just that. I just wish I could do something like that with Deku-kun. My hero. Time. Toru shouted desperately from her corner so that the challenge would end once and for all, and her psychological torture would end so that she could forget her trauma. Uraraka, hearing Toru's scream, was surprised and woke up from his thoughts to fall backwards, then rub his rear and then stand up where he crouched down to take his Deku-kun and carry him just like Momo. It was a relief that luckily his juices had not pierced his blue mini shot to moisten the doll. Mina, on the other hand, got out of bed and walked towards Ochako with a smile. It wasn't that bad, was it? She said to the chestnut in a friendly way, causing Uraraka to frown. I'm going to take revenge for this, Mina-san, Uraraka replied seriously, ready to take revenge for the humiliation she just went through in front of the boy she likes. It just wouldn't stay like this without breaking scores. That's what friends are for, Mina said with a big friendly and innocent smile, ignoring the threat of her friend, who sighed exhaustively as she lowered her head a little. Then the chestnut remembered that she had to challenge someone and became a little hesitant. And I'm going to challenge, she said, debating whether to challenge Momo or Kyoyuka, because in truth it would be predictable that she would challenge her rival, but she pointed to Kyoyuka-chan. She asked, not quite sure of her decision. After all, she had nothing against her and couldn't think of a challenge. Very well, hurry up and tell me what it is, Kyoyuka asked the chestnut, wanting to get straight to the point and receive his challenge to decide whether or not to accept it. Not that he was in the mood to continue with the silly game that no longer made sense. Uraraka seemed to have doubts as to what to challenge her friend, so Mina leaned into her ear with a smile and gave her several ideas for a challenge. I dare you undress in front of Izuku-kun until you are naked. Uraraka challenged Jiru with a firm expression that was only trying to hide her embarrassment, but the blush on her face was clear evidence of it. She only said the last challenge Mina had said to her, and now she regretted it. I refuse, Kyoyuka rejected quickly and sharply, leaving Mina more surprised than Uraraka herself, who seemed relieved by his answer. What? Asked Mina, distraught and confused in her place, not processing Jiru's answer, as if she had really rejected that challenge so easily. Well, you heard Mina, I refuse to meet the challenge, Kyoyuka repeated to Ashido earnestly and crossing her arms, waking Mina from her thoughts to show her clear bewilderment at his answer. But I don't understand, you could make him fall in love in the best of cases and you don't lose anything doing it. So why? Mina asked, raising her voice and clearly shocked and confused by Jiru's motives for rejecting this challenge that could surely come to be of great interest to the green hair. Kyoyuka remained composed in place. Because I would lose what little I still have of my dignity. Besides, I don't want to stoop to fall so low just to like him. I'd rather he fall in love with me for who I am instead of for a stupid perverted challenge that only wants to expose my body, she replied so confidently that she silenced Mina. Then the rocker's cheeks flushed slightly. I like him. I may have denied it before, but it's not because of this stupid game that I fell in love with. I like him for the way he is and not just for his looks. I like him for how he makes me feel warm and safe. I'm going to take my time to try to make him feel the same way for me, Jiru declared with conviction in his gaze and assurance in his tone. Momo, Uraraka, Tsuyu and Toru couldn't help but smile at the reason that their friend had. Yes, she may also be in love with the green-haired man just like them, but she was still clear about her goals and her determination to be loved in the same way and not be part of a unilateral or superficial relationship. She wanted the feelings to be mutual and reciprocated, and that was to be applauded. Mina was shocked by her friend's words and then turned her attention to Izuku and observed how he, despite being under the effects of the tranquilizer, smiled slightly as he saw Kyoyuka. Jiru-san, Izuku said with a small smile, happy to hear those words from the violet hair, which affected Mina personally, who lowered her head, making her hair shadow over her eyes. "No," Mina said in a muffled voice, catching the attention of her friends who turned to look at her, intrigued, not knowing that she had finally reached her limit, that she could no longer hold what she had inside. "It's not fair." The haired woman exploded angrily, revealing her face to look directly at Kyoyuka, who was shocked just like the others. "Why is it so easy for you to say that? Why do you have the courage to think like that?" Ishido asked annoyingly as she hugged herself and took off that playful and mischievous mask. "Lina-chan," asked Toru, somewhat intimidated by the outburst of fury of her friend, who seemed genuinely affected by something in particular, since she was not someone who would get angry in that way, much less against one of them who are friends. Mina hugged herself a little tighter as tears formed at the edge of her eyes. "It shouldn't be like that. I should be right and prove that I'm not the only one." "I'm not the only one who's afraid," Mina said, lowering her head a little while her tone broke as if sadness was beginning to make its way into the hairy one. "Scared? What are you talking about?" asked Momo as kindly as possible, since she was worried about her friend who had suddenly burst into anger and no one had any idea why. Mina was silent for a few seconds without taking her eyes off the ground. "I'm afraid that Midoriya-kun can't love someone like me," confessed the hairy woman, showing her vulnerable and delicate side while feeling her heart squeeze as she said it out loud. "Loving someone like you, Jiro?" Tsuyu asked, curious about what she said, since she was actually worried about the hairy woman who looked sad and discouraged as if something was weighing on her soul. Mina gritted her teeth and raised her head with her moist eyes. "I like him, happy. I said it," exclaimed Ishido, openly declaring himself and causing a bit of surprise in his friends who didn't expect that she was going to feel something romantic for Izuku. But of course it was impossible for them to know since she never showed it. She never gave even the slightest sign that she could feel love for the green-haired boy. She only showed what she wanted. She only showed her daring and perverted side, trying to camouflage everything with lust and perversion. But now she had finally brought to light her infatuation with Izuku. Mina lowered her head slightly as she smiled sadly. "Since the first year he has interested me in a special way. He has been different from the rest of the boys who look at me in a dirty way. Midoriya-kun has treated me for who I am and not for how I look," said the hairy woman, remembering those moments in the past. Izuku greeted him in the morning with a friendly smile. He helped her at times with homework generously, kindly giving her notes from the classes among other moments. She always smiled at her in a pure and angelic way, as if she were an angel fallen from heaven among a sea of beasts that were the other boys at school who mostly came to see her with perverted eyes for her body. She noticed those looks, but she tried hard to ignore them, since there was at least one who treated her normally. He was so gentle, so kind, so attentive and so nice that I couldn't help but see him from my seat during the classes. I wanted to talk to him, I wanted to be a great friend of his and maybe something else, but I was scared," Mina said, cowering in place as she closed her eyes in anger directed at herself. Her friends felt bad when they saw their friend in that state. They tried to understand her as best they could. They understood what she was saying for the most part, but still they were not able to understand the origin of all her sadness. What was the reason why Mina is afraid? As if reading their minds, Mina looked at her friends with a sad smile. Uraraka-chan was his first friend in Yui, and she always stayed close to him as the closest in class. You even got to feel something for him, and apparently it hasn't been taken away from you in all this time," Mina said to the chestnut with tears in her eyes and causing surprise in the chestnut, who could not deny what she said to be the truth. Yes, Ishido remembered very well those moments in which Izuku, Ida and Uraraka were at first the most established group of friends in the class, then Todoroki, Tsuyu and then Shinso in second year joined him, but the point is that all the time the chestnut was the closest to the green-haired, as if they had a special connection that united them. Later, when Mina found out that her friend was in love with Izuku, she didn't want to intervene and wished him well, but deep down, she felt a discomfort that she didn't know what it was due to. There was also Tsuyu-chan, who spoke directly with him in a friendly way without hesitating for a second. That way of being so honest and sincere of yours undoubtedly brought both of them closer, and he seemed to express himself well when talking to you, Mina said this time to the frog girl, who opened her eyes a little while blushing. She was a little surprised that her friend noticed that. But the hairy one did, from her seat where she listened to the noisy conversations of Shiro, Kaminari, Kirishima and Bakugo. The hairy one could see how her friend Tsuyu approached Izuku when he was alone and writing in her notebook to start talking quietly with him, without hesitating for a single second and saying everything she thinks, even making Izuku nervous, who was smiling embarrassed but didn't seem at all displeased with her way of being. Then Momo-chan in the second year approached Midoriya-kun and they began to get closer. For God's sake, they even got up early in the common room to talk about books, exclaimed Mina, looking this time at her black-haired friend, and then lowered her head and wiped her eyes with her hands while Momo looked at her worried. Her approach to the green-haired man took us by surprise to see how from one day to the next she was more friendly and expressive with him, while Izuku did not seem to get nervous in his presence, and on the contrary was enthusiastic to see her, and without further ado, both began to chat pleasantly. It was in the early hours of the morning, when Mina was thirsty, that she went down to the first floor only to find Izuku and Momo chatting on the couches, laughing while they both had stacks of books on the table. Then after a short time Kyoyuka-chan became good friends with him by talking about music and instruments and other things. It was impossible not to hear them both sing when Kyoyuka-chan passed by your room, said the hairy woman to her friend, who was silent in her place while blushing slightly and with one hand lowered her hat a little to cover her face a little shyly. It was shocking to pass by her friend's room one day and hear an excellent male voice coming from inside, and then she was surprised to learn that that voice was Izuku's, and he was talking animatedly with Jiro, who seemed equally motivated with him, and they even began to play instruments together, as if the music connected them both in a unique tune in which both were the only participants. Even Toru-chan was closer to him than I was. On several occasions you would meet when you went shopping. I really felt jealous of you when you told me about it during our message conversations, Ashido admitted with his moist eyes as he smiled sadly at his invisible friend, who looked at him with concern and a little bit of pity. Yes, she found out about those free encounters between the two of them, as if fate played a cruel joke on her, as it was her invisible friend who was easily found by the green-haired man when they were both in the same store or mall. She could only feign absolute joy when listening to how Toru animated told her the funny things that happened to both of them during those moments. He certainly felt happy for her, but he couldn't help but want to take her place and be the one to experience the same. Mina lowered her head to look at the ground as her grimace of sadness became more evident. On the other hand, I always stayed away as a classmate. Only as the loud and energetic friend of the class. I never had the courage to approach him as you did. I was interested in him, but I was afraid that nothing was going to come up between us, confessed the hairy woman, revealing her insecurities to the light. All her interactions with the green-haired man were limited to being just as classmates. She never had that spark of courage that encouraged her to approach him to ask him things and learn more from him. She didn't approach him to ask him to exchange emails and talk by messages, She stared at him from a distance, ignoring what she was feeling and becoming uncomfortable as she saw how each time the opportunities to make an advance slipped away from her when she did not take the initiative. Yes, most likely Izuku only thought that Mina Ashido was just the noisy classmate. That was a constant pain in the heart of the hairy woman, who was not happy with such a position. Why would you be afraid? Uraraka asked her friend with concern and intrigue, as she didn't understand why she was afraid that they weren't going to have something. After all, she is a great girl. Mina was hurt by the question, and tears began to flow from her eyes. I was afraid he would see that I'm a horrible person, she replied with her voice breaking and then raising her head. Because I'm not special compared to you. If he compared me, I'd know that it was 1,000 times better to be with some of you than to me, she exclaimed, frustrated and sad, while the tears didn't stop and she clenched her fists. The 5 girls were surprised to see how their friend Mina was not that girl brimming with confidence and security that they knew. Apparently she had those worries inside her during all that time, and they never noticed it. That made them feel guilty to see how all that has been accumulating until finally exploding. Mina tried her best to stop the tears, but they wouldn't stop. Uraraka-chan is friendly and cheerful, Momo-chan is understanding and intelligent, Tsuyu-chan is honest and gentle, Kyoyuka-chan is reliable and mature, and Toru-chan is funny and tender, and I'm instead, she said, talking about the virtues of her friends with a smile and then gritting her teeth. I'm bad at classes. I'm loud, clumsy, stubborn, jealous, cowardly, hypocritical, selfish, and also stupid. Who forced you to play this stupid game just to try to prove that you can be just like me? Exclaimed Ashido with anger directed at her person and causing surprise in her 5 friends, who widened their eyes. Now light was finally being applied on Mina's true intentions in creating the game. The reason why she created the game, which the 6 of them have been playing until this early hours of the morning, all seemed to be intrinsically related to the emotions of the hairy woman. Mina put a hand to her heart to squeeze it over the fabric of her cheerleading uniform. I thought that if I can't make him fall in love with my way of being, then I could try to make him fall in love with my body. That's why when I saw him helpless in the common room, I saw an opportunity to make him mine, but you tried to stop me. That's why I came up with an idea, she said, leaving a pause in which she wiped her eyes. With this stupid game, I could show that you two could be hypocrites, selfish and cowardly, that you would have to resort to your bodies to make him fall in love just like me, too. Maybe that way I wouldn't feel so bad about myself, Ashido said with a sad smile on his face, feeling bitter inside as he revealed his selfish motives out loud. Mina-chan, Toru said sadly, looking at her friend. She was down and needed to think of the right words to calm and comfort her, but nothing came to her mind. Mina lowered her head slightly as a tear escaped against her will. But it's not fair. You're not like that. I made you behave like that. You're good. I'm the bad one, admitted the hairy woman, feeling disgust and self-loathing only to be greeted by a slap in the face. Ashido widens his eyes as well as the others when he sees how Momo slapped him and looked at her seriously, leaving the hairy woman perplexed, who seemed shocked while she had the mark of a red hand on her cheek and now felt pangs of burning. Don't say that, Momo scolded her with a withering, serious, authoritative look as she picked up her hand as she watched as Mina put a hand to her beaten cheek while still looking at the blackhead. Momo, Mina asked, surprised to have received a slap from her friend without knowing that it served to calm him down. Don't you dare say you're the bad one, Momo said to the haired woman with a firm gaze that slowly weakened to show a soft expression while her eyes moistened a little. You're just another normal girl just like us, so don't think that of yourself, Mina, she scolded her as best she could, since it hurt her soul to hear her friend talk like that about herself. Uraraka smiled warmly at Mina as she moved a little closer. It's true, you also have a lot of good things. You're funny, cheerful, friendly, brave, direct, and also very reliable, the brunette said to her friend, speaking from the bottom of her heart because she was really one of her best friends for a reason. It's true, Mina-chan, you're a great friend, and I really couldn't think of what I would be like if I hadn't met you, said Toru to the hairy woman in a tearful voice, as she was the most sensitive and felt sad that her friend was criticizing herself when she was a great person. Jiro, you have many virtues, Mina-chan, and it's not like we don't have flaws, Tsuyu said to Ishido calmly and smiling comfortingly at him as he walked over to pat her on the shoulder. Kayuka nodded her head in agreement as she smiled slightly at Mina. We can be selfish, hypocritical, cowardly, stubborn, and many other things. We are human beings and worse. We are teenagers and we are full of flaws that we have to deal with and try to improve. You are not the only one, Jiro told her dear friend, that as annoying and irritating as she was still her friend and she loved her. Mina wiped her eyes and looked surprised by her friend's words of encouragement. See, girls, she said, really moved by his words, while the five of them approached her to surround her in a group hug. Momo smiled gently at her friend. Don't look down on yourself because you're a great girl and any guy would be lucky to be with you. After all, we've been lucky to have you as a friend since you've helped us in our worst moments, she said to Mina, who closed her eyes as she began to sob under the warm warmth that her friends gave her. Uraraka hugged him a little tighter as they bumped their cheeks. We love you, Mina. We are friends and we will always tell you the truth. You are actually an amazing girl, Hachako said to her dear friend with a small smile, while the hairy woman began to smile, feeling little by little comforted. Even though you're annoying on several occasions and very perverted, I still wouldn't change you for anyone else, silly, Kayuka said to the hairy woman with a sideways and somewhat mocking smile, causing Mina and the others to laugh a little, while the hairy woman seemed to have stopped sobbing. Jiro, you don't have to be afraid, Mina-chan. We're with you to tell you that you're great. No doubt Midoriya-chan would be interested in you. Tsuyu encouraged him, saying what he thinks, sincerely thinking that the green-haired boy would really be interested in the great person that Mina Ishido is. Yes, he probably thinks you're very cute and funny, said Toru confidently and happily, hugging her friend more as she wiped the tears from her eyes so that her friends would then give her space to look at her face. Girls, thank you, was the only thing Mina could say, as she was so grateful to have such good friends like them by her side. She honestly considered herself lucky at that moment. I really regret everything. I know I did everything wrong and I'm really sorry for dragging you into all this, added the hairy woman, lowering her head a little, feeling guilty. Don't worry, Momo said to her friend gently and placing a hand on her shoulder to encourage her, causing Mina to raise her head with a sincerely happy smile. But we will still take revenge for the humiliation and embarrassment we went through, said Momo, Uraraka, Tsuyu, Toru and Kayuka at the same time, with innocent expressions that were intimidating to the hairy woman, who shuddered with fear and smiled somewhat tensely. I deserve it, Mina accepted with a bead of sweat on her temple, feeling that she had no choice but to accept the revenge of her friends for everything they have done in the game. They were the Avengers. Then the five girls took space between them and were already in a better mood, and there was no tension in the atmosphere, just a calm and warm aura, as if the previous happened had been a way to lower the intensity and show the friendship they had. Well, what's my punishment? Jiro asked Mina with a calm smile so that she could tell him once and for all his punishment to get out of the game. Oh, forget that. The game is over now, Mina said to her friends with a big smile, causing surprise in her friends, who saw her walk to the center of the room to raise her arms. Officially, the game is over, declared the hairy woman with joy, ending the game in which they have participated for hours, although for some in particular it was months and months. The others finally sighed calmly, letting themselves sit on the floor from both mental and physical exhaustion, considering everything they had to go through telling Izuku's escape to the B-class dormitories. Mina smiled amused and also sat on the floor with her friends. It's good that it's finally over, Uraraka said, smiling slightly and really glad that it's finally over. Yes, we really had to go through a lot, Toru seconded, coinciding with her friend as she rested her hands on the ground as she leaned back. I got rid of that punishment. It's a relief, Kayuka said, breathing a sigh of relief and taking off that adventurer's hat to throw it somewhere else with ease. And luckily I didn't have to do anything to Izuku-kan, Momo said with a small smile, that she didn't have to do anything else perverted to her platonic love, because that would only worsen the anger he surely feels towards her. Jiro, you probably would have liked to do something to her, Momo-chan, Tsuyu said, looking at the black-haired woman and speaking her mind, causing Momo's eyes to widen and her cheeks to flush. Of course not, protested Momo, embarrassed by her green-haired friend's words, though deep down she might be right that a part of herself wanted to do something. Mina laughed amused at her friend's embarrassment. Aha, at least now I know I'm not the only pervert, we're all perverts, exclaimed the hairy woman, raising her hands in the air with joy, causing the veins to stand out on the foreheads of the others. Don't put us in the same category as you. They all shouted angrily at him, since comparing them in perversion levels with Mina was out of the question. Mina's perversion level is more than 9,000. Although of course it was nothing compared to Lord Minda's level. Oops, I'm sorry, I thought I could joke about that already, hee, said Mina, smiling amused and shrugging her shoulders to hit her head playfully, feigning awkwardness. They all heard Izuku's voice and were paralyzed as they turned and saw him standing with a sad look on his face. "I'm really sorry," said the green-haired man with his green eyes looking at the ground with guilt, and it was evident at first glance that he was not under the effects of the tranquilizer. Who they had in front of them was Izuku Midoriya. Izuku, divided by Deku, divided by Midoriya, they all asked, surprised and confused to see him standing and apologizing. They blushed a little when they realized that they were wearing those embarrassing suits in front of him, but he didn't seem to care since he looked down and sad for some reason that worried them. "I'm really sorry, girls, and I didn't want to. I didn't mean to do that to them," Izuku told the girls wistfully as they stood up worried about him and confused by his words. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. "What are you talking about, Midoriya?" Kayuka asked the green-haired man she was in love with, and it hurt her to see him in such a downcast way as if he had something weighing on his shoulders. Izuku put a hand to his head in a sharp twinge of pain as he lifted his head slightly. Of everything, I'm sorry for everything that's happened," he said to the girls who couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in confusion. "It all happened because of me, because I was reckless and drinking from that bottle was that I got out of control and fought with my friends. I really didn't want to hurt them. I wasn't myself at that moment," said the gentle boy, feeling guilty for having fought against his friends since at that moment he thought they were training. He felt ashamed of himself just remembering it. "And don't worry about that, Deku-kun. They asked for it when they made you drink. They wouldn't throw anything in your face," Uraraka said to his best friend with a slightly nervous smile but trying to cheer him up since the mistake had not been made by him but by the boys. "I want to see if they dare to do it," Kayuka muttered with a frown and a chilling smile as he cracked his knuckles ferociously, ready to teach a lesson to anyone who was going to reprimand the green-haired man, among whom would surely be Bakugo. Izuku put another hand to his head for another twinge of pain. But not only that, apparently I hurt Ishido-san and made her feel sad. I really don't have forgiveness," said the green-haired man while his spirits fell to the floor just thinking that his dear friend whom he appreciated very much was sad because of him. After all, he had appreciation for her being the one who secretly taught him to dance after the cultural festival. Mina, for her part, couldn't bear to see him blaming himself like that. "And don't blame yourself for that. You're not to blame for anything. I'm just very clumsy and I was sad alone," she said to encourage him while she had a nervous smile on her face since she couldn't express herself well knowing that he was conscious and seeing her dressed as a cheerleader. Toru nodded his head sharply, which was evident from the mask Midnight was wearing. "Yes, Mina-chan is a big idiot and she's just to blame for underestimating herself. You don't have to worry about that," she said to the green-haired boy, doing her best to make him happy. "That hurt, Mina said to her secret friend, but she was olympically ignored. Izuku, on the other hand, lowered his head a little in melancholy and sorrow. "Then I escaped to the dormitory of Class B and hurt the boys and did. That's what the girls, I'm worse than the scum," he said, discouraged and blushing a little when he remembered what he did in that building. "It's also Mina-chan's fault. If she hadn't started the game in the first place, none of that would have happened." "Jiro," Tsuyu said to the green-haired man with a small smile pointing back to the culprit of everything. "Weren't you comforting me a few minutes ago?" asked Mina to her friends who seemed to have changed their minds and were making her look bad. Momo smiled kindly at Izuku. "You don't have to worry, Izuku-kun. It's all our fault, although Mina is more to blame," she said to the boy while she hid her Takun behind her back so that he wouldn't see it. The same was imitated by Uraraka, who hid her Takun, and it was easier for her to be smaller. "Why all this hate directed at me? Is it because I'm sassy? I can't help it. It comes naturally to me," Mina said to herself and shrugged her shoulders simply despite being attacked by her friends who a few minutes ago were trying to cheer her up. Izuku looked up a bit to look directly at her friends, causing her blush to rise and her guilty sneer to deepen. "And as if that wasn't enough, I dared to do that kind of thing to you. I really am ashamed of a hero and a man," the boy said to himself, discouraged and feeling trash as he dropped his arms. Needless to say, all of them disagreed with what he said. He is the best man they had ever met, and it was clear that he would be the greatest hero of all time. He had countless virtues and was undoubtedly the soul that kept all of Yui with an aura of hope and security. It was their symbol of peace. It was only a matter of time before the rest of the world knew about it. Izuku Midoriya was the best, so hearing him say all those bad things about himself hurt the 6 girls who were supposed to intervene. "That's not true, Deku-kun," Uraraka said to his platonic love with a soft and warm smile, approaching him a step along with the others who only wanted to calm him down and encourage him. But in the same way, Izuku took a step back with fear on his face, which caused them to stay still before the dagger in the heart that caused them to see that. He was afraid of them. Izuku expressed guilt and grief on his face as he looked at them at 6 o'clock. "And I'm sorry, it's just that I can't be near you now, I need to be alone," he told them as gently as he could so as not to hurt them more than he had already done in his opinion. He still remembered perfectly the expressions on the faces of Momo, Uraraka and Tsuyu when he got out of control. He didn't want to do that to them, so he wanted to stay away and not hurt them. Momo did what she could to regain her composure and then stood right in the middle of the place. "And we won't let you out until we've cleared things up," the black-haired woman exclaimed, and the others agreed and stood up as a kind of barrier to prevent the green-haired man from leaving the room. Izuku smiled sadly as his body covered in One for All. I'm sorry, girls. The boy apologized and then disappeared from sight, and the next thing that happened was that a breeze hit the room, and the next thing everyone saw was the door to the exit open since the green-haired man had left at full speed. They remained silent with their eyes widened, feeling a great emptiness in their hearts, as if an essential piece was missing, or rather as if something had broken. Because the boy with whom they were all in love had escaped from them. Feeling that rejection had them with their hearts contracted by the suffocating feeling of sadness. Herself, it was, Uraraka said, still in pain, and then dropped to his knees to the ground as he hugged his Takun to his chest and bowed his head. Mina tried her best to clear her mind and thought clearly again. We must go get him, said the hairy woman to her friends, turning to look at them only to see how they were all down and depressed and their faces showed a lack of motivation. Girls, what's wrong with you? We have to go get him, Mina asked the others to get them to react and help her find the green-haired man. What's the point? He'll just be upset with us, and besides, I don't think he wants to see us right now, Momo said, dejected and with a vacant look as she stood in her place but kept hugging her Takun, who was the closest thing she could have to the green-haired man she fell in love with. Now she only felt destroyed by his rejection. You heard it. He needs to be alone to think, Kyoyuka said to the haired woman seriously and looking at the floor while clenching her fists in frustration. But then she sighed and relaxed her hands to fall apart looking at the floor. She didn't understand how such a simple action had hurt her so much, feeling guilty that he criticized himself and had escaped from her. It's painful. It's better that we go to sleep, then we'll have to see that he doesn't want to be near us, said Toru with his spirits on the floor and with an oppressive sadness in his heart as if he had lost the motivation to do anything. Nothing was worth it anymore. And don't say that, Toru-chan, Mina said to her friend, placing a hand on her shoulder to try to make her react, but she only heard a sob from her invisible friend. Suyu, on the other hand, remained silent, turning her back on the others. She didn't feel like saying a word. Small tears began to stream down her cheeks from Achako's face. Be well, I knew this was going to happen, and now. Deku-kun hates us, Uraraka said in a broken voice as a few drops of her tears fell on her. Takun, feeling miserable to surely lose her best friend for all he has done, she deeply regretted everything. Don't be stupid, Mina yelled at the girls angrily, causing the 5 half-hearted women to turn to look at her slowly. I was the one who caused all this. I must take responsibility for hating only me. You don't deserve anything bad, exclaimed Ishido, determined to take full responsibility for what happened, causing her friends to be surprised. Kyoyuka was a little worried. But we accepted the game and participated during all this time. We are the same fault as you, Jiro said to the hairy woman, since she didn't think it was right that she was going to put all the blame on herself while they were forgiven. It just wasn't right. Mina, for her part, stood her ground. Of course not. I was the one who forced them to accept, and I insisted on continuing to play. I'm the bad guy in this story and I must explain it to you, Ishido replied confidently and crossing her arms ready to solve the whole matter, and that way her friends are free of guilt. We told you not to keep calling yourself that, Momo said to Mina seriously, recovering as it wasn't right for her to keep saying those things. But it's true, I tried to make it mine when I was helpless and I did dirty things taking advantage of it. That's a horrible thing, said Mina to all of them, clearly regretting what she did and pressing her hand above her heart. She couldn't live knowing that her selfish actions completely ruined a future where surely her friends would have been happy with Izuku. Then we're the bad guys too, exclaimed Toru loudly, sounding confident, causing surprise in the hairy woman to see how everyone nodded their heads. Jiro, we did the same as you, Mina-chan, Suyu seconded with a look determined to also take some of the blame since she would not allow her friend to be the only villain. Girls, Mina said, surprised that they were willing to accept such a role. Momo smiled slightly at her friend. If you're going to look for him, then we'll make sure we find him to tell him that we're all guilty, the black-haired woman said kindly, and the others nodded in agreement with them since they were all in it together, for better or worse. One for all and all for one. Ishido was silent for a few seconds and then laughed lightly, causing her friends to become a little irritated and intrigued by the reason for her laughter. What are you laughing at? We had a very touching moment, Kyoyuka said to the hairy woman reproachfully for having ruined their emotional moment in which they were willing to share the blame with her. I'm sorry, I remembered something very curious, Mina said with a smile as she wiped away a tear and then looked at her friends. There is a point of view that thinks that in a relationship someone always dominates over the other as if one was superior and the other inferior, a winner and a loser, so I remembered a phrase from that, she told them and then cleared her throat. Love is a war, he who falls in love loses, quoted the hairy woman in a slightly deeper voice, causing her friends to widen their eyes a little. After a few seconds Momo started laughing along with Mina, then Uraraka and Suyu joined in the laughter and finally Jiro and Toru had joined the collective laughter of the 6 friends. It almost seemed as if the previous tense and depressing atmosphere had been just an illusion as the girls laughed amusedly together. After a couple of minutes they stopped laughing and were recovering and then fell into a comfortable silence with the 6 smiles on their faces. Apparently, in this game of love, we all lost, Momo said, smiling slightly, looking at her Takun while thinking about the phrase said by Mina. Yes, that's right, said the others, agreeing with the black-haired woman, and then the 6 of them smiled at each other with some amusement. They were all participating in a game of which they were not aware, one in which each of their actions could trigger a possible ending in which they are happy. In the end, for different reasons, each one ended up interested in the gentle green-haired man destined to be the symbol of peace. In different ways they spent time with him, and that night they had cleared up any doubts and were certain that they were in love with him. Boy, they all aimed for victory without knowing that they were the first to lose in the game of love. Now each one knew that after losing they only had to win. Winning would mean getting the love of the green-haired man who had treated them with kindness and generosity. They all participated in the innocent and sometimes perverse game of love. The next goal of the 6 was to get their well-deserved victory. They had to win Izuku Midoriya's heart. Then, we better look for the winner to face our punishment, don't you think? Kyoyuka told her friends with a sideways smile as she scratched her head relaxed. Yes, we're sure we'll find him. He must still be in the building. Jiro, Tsuyu commented with a finger on his cheek since his friend was sober and had a headache. Surely he wouldn't be so irrational to go anywhere else. The 6 of them came over and formed a circle and attached their fists to the middle while showing determined smiles on their faces. Whatever happens, we'll still be friends, Mina told the others with a cheerful smile, and the others smiled at each other to nod their heads. Forever, said Momo, Uraraka, Tsuyu and Toru equally encouraged to fulfill that promise. No matter if one of them gets the boy's heart, the others won't feel hatred or anything like that. It would be hard, but they would admit defeat and move on, wishing the best to the winner who, no matter what happens, would still be their friend. Their friendship was strong and he could withstand that. They all noticed that there was one left to speak and turned to see Jiro, who looked thoughtful. Kyoyuka-chan, asked Uraraka, confused, looking at her friend who hadn't made the promise to them. Well, the truth is that Mina has bothered me a lot in this game, and Kyoyuka said thoughtfully, causing Mina to tense at the thought that she might lose her friendship, to which Kyoyuka smiles mockingly. I'm just kidding, Kyoyuka said before sticking her tongue out at Ashido, who breathed a sigh of relief. Friends forever, added the violet-haired woman, just as motivated as the others to maintain their friendship at all costs. Mina could only smile at them with determination. Very well, girls, let's find that cinnamon roll, she said to the others, who nodded confidently and decisively, and then proceeded to leave the room and split up to look separately for Izuku, who must be somewhere in the building. This was the end of the game, though more specifically it was just the turning point at which the various endings break through. Sometimes a great event is necessary to trigger realities that are very different from each other. Perhaps this ending was just a beginning for some of them in the not-so-innocent game of love. End of the game. Players' lives. Ochako, X. Kyoyuka, X. Tsuyu, X. Mine, X. Toru, X. Momo, X. Do you want to continue the game? And that's been it, folks. I don't know what to tell you right now. I'm really happy that everyone who has been there since the beginning has endured this far. I'm also glad that those who came halfway haven't given up despite my late update time XD. I know this seems like a farewell, but it is not at all. But I must say that in general this is the end of the story, and from here everything branches out into the alternate endings that will be uploaded in this same fic. I should clarify that they won't be as long as a normal chapter, or maybe they will, nor am I sure since I haven't started writing them yet. I can only assure you that the pace of updating will be faster, perhaps one end per week at best. Now I just feel nostalgic remembering how several months ago I started writing this story, and now look where we got. I never expected that a story of this type would have so much attention. I really only have to thank you for accompanying me and the girls from beginning to end throughout this innocent game. Now remember that those who somehow guess the places where Izuku is hiding will receive a Dekun fresh from the factory. Don't worry, just guess where our freckled green hair is in the class of dormitories, so participate and comment your answer, and if it's correct you'll receive a Dekun right at your doorstep. Try to give different locations to others, I'm counting on you. I hope you liked the final chapter, and if so, please comment in the reviews what you think. Without anything else to say, I say goodbye. Sayonara. Toru ending, you don't have to see to feel. We met in the corridors of the dormitory of Class 3 where Toru was running with Midnight's cosplay. He was looking for Izuku, who a few minutes ago had left Momo's room, and she and the others decided to separate to find him as soon as possible. I already checked in his room and found the door open. Surely he went to get dressed and then left there, but even so I wonder where he is now. I already checked in the corridors of the 5th and 4th floors and I still can't find him. Besides, I doubt that he was going to get into the room of any of the boys. With that in mind, I keep running in the hope of finding him and clearing things up with him. It's the only thing I can do having reached this point. I want to find him to tell him that he doesn't have to be discouraged, that he doesn't have to blame himself for what happened. Since we are to blame for having participated in that silly game, he doesn't have to reproach himself for anything since he only had good intentions. I want to tell him all that. I just hope to find him to encourage him. I'm not looking for him to forgive me because honestly I don't deserve it. It hurts me the idea that he's upset with me, but I have to live with that since I asked for it myself. Maybe he is on the 1st floor. With that idea in mind, I decide to go to the stairs to start descending quickly. Waiting for the elevator would surely take a lot of time, and the best thing will be to hurry if I want to find him quickly, because I need to find it. It's strange, I know he'll be upset with me, that he'll probably never forgive me, that he'll have a bad image of me, and I understand that. But I still want to find him to talk to him. It's as if the need to see him is greater than the fear of receiving his rejection. But I can't do anything anymore. My legs don't obey me anymore. They move only because it's what my body wants. As much as I know that I can get hurt by her rejection, I still want to talk to her about what happened so she doesn't blame herself. Because that's the kind of guy Midoriya is. Someone who takes full responsibility even though it's not his own. Someone who sees other people's mistakes as his own. Right now I don't know whether to consider that a flaw or a virtue. I just know that I like that part of him. I get to the first floor and everything is still as it was before we went up. Everything is chaos, and the destruction of the place only makes me think about how extreme Midoriya's fight was against the other boys. Surely it was intense, since in the end he was the victor and they were forced to escape from here. That just reminds me how mad I am at them for making her drink from that bottle of alcohol. I swear I'm going to hurt Minda a lot, to the point where she'll want to have prepared her will beforehand. A strange sound from the kitchen catches my attention, and I start to slowly walk towards there, only to see Midoriya in front of the fridge. Now wearing a baggy white shirt, green shorts, and his red boots. I guess he chose the first thing he found to dress up and not continue in his underpants. It seems that his head still hurts. Surely he came here to get a glass of water to try to get over the pain. Before my suspicions, he takes a glass of water from the fridge and is willing to drink it, but I notice that he complains of a twinge of pain. Izuku complained of a sudden twinge of pain in his head and gritted his teeth, bringing a hand to the area. But this pain was enough to make him lose his balance for a few moments, and the green-haired man ended up leaning against a wall to avoid falling, which alerted Toru, who was hiding until now. "Midoriya," cried Toru, worried about the boy running towards him to hold him up and slowly make him sit on the ground. "Here, drink slowly," she said to him softly and attentively, so that he would drink from the glass of water that could perhaps serve to relieve his pain a little. He seemed sore, but he still slowly drank the water and then let the glass rest next to him. He was silent for a few seconds while he felt that the pain in his head was subsiding. It did not disappear, but he could tolerate it. After a couple of minutes he decided to stand up, and Toru helped him as much as possible since she was still worried about him. When they were both standing, the green-haired man took a few moments to take a few steps away to regain his composure while he was observed by Toru, who was in front of him with his hands held on his chest. She was attentive in case at some point he lost his balance again. Izuku frowned with guilt on his face. "Hagakure-san," he said, worried about having her in front of him. He didn't want to do anything bad to her. Now he only considered himself a danger. It was best not to be near her so that she would be safe. With that thought in mind, he was about to turn around to leave, but a hand held his to prevent him. Please don't go." "Not again," Toru asked Izuku with a tone of pleading while holding his hand tightly so that he would not leave. Now that he had found him, he would not let him go so easily. She wanted to talk to him. I needed to talk to him. Izuku closed his eyes, annoyed with himself, reproaching himself for what he remembered doing. "I can't be near you, I'd hurt you," he said to the invisible girl, worrying about her, but Toru shook his head instead. "You would never do something like that, Midoriya. I'm sure of that," Toru said, determined and sure of what she was saying. There was no way the kind green-haired man she is in love with could hurt her. "But I did those things to you. I did several things to you, Hagakure-san," Izuku said to her with clear regret in his tone while blushing a little. Because it deeply affected him to know that he himself came to do improper things to his friend despite the fact that she asked him to stop, he felt guilty. Toru blushed knowing what he meant, but still tried to stand her ground. "That's different. Besides, you didn't hurt us. We're fine." "I'm fine," Toru said to the green-haired man to encourage him and make him understand that no one had been hurt. "But even so, I can't forgive myself for having done so many bad things," Izuku said wistfully, giving up on escaping and deciding to look Toru in the face, who was still holding his hand firmly to keep him there. Despite being invisible, Toru smiled warmly at Izuku. "You didn't do anything wrong. Besides, it's not your fault. You just tried to protect us, right?" "Hagakure-san, I'm confused," Izuku said, discouraged and lowering his head to finish looking at the ground. Now he remembered everything he saw and heard while he was drunk. There were many things that his mind needed to process and assimilate. Toru held both of Izuku's hands comfortingly and gently as he looked into his face. "It's okay that you went through a lot and you weren't yourself in those moments. Plus part of the blame is mine for not stopping that silly game," he said to Izuku kindly while feeling somewhat happy to be able to hold his warm hands and be so close to him. Izuku noticed their closeness and blushed as he turned his head in another direction. "I have several questions about that," Izuku said to her secret friend, who tilted her head to the side. "Like what?" asked Toru curiously as he looked directly at him. "Why did they have to put on those suits?" asked Izuku, somewhat nervous and looking sideways at his friend, who was wearing a tight suit similar to Midnight's hero suit that was dangerous for him since this suit highlighted the body that her invisibility hid before. Toru was confused for several seconds until she finally noticed the place Izuku was looking at nervously, to which she blushed even more. "Well, because it was better than ending up naked," she replied, looking in another direction with no intention of separating from him. She couldn't give him a chance to escape again. "Edo, I don't want to sound bad, Hagakure-san, but aren't you almost always naked?" asked Izuku, embarrassed and smiling nervously, remembering the workouts and other activities where she only wore her gloves. Well, yes, but it's different, Toru replied, embarrassed and with a little steam coming out of her head from the embarrassment of having to talk about it. Normally she wouldn't have a problem, but now she was talking about it with the green-haired man she is in love with. Different? Izuku asked intriguedly as he looked directly at her, more specifically Midnight's mask that gave away the place where Toru's face was. You know, my quirk is invisible so no one can see me, but I didn't want to be naked in front of you, replied the invisible girl, fighting as best she could against her nerves, but it was too much to ask having the boy's green orbs watching her. I don't understand, Izuku said, confused and not understanding his friend's reasons for calling him a special case. Me neither, Toru replied, calming down and remaining silent for several seconds and then looking up. Or so I thought until today, she said confidently and looking determinedly at Izuku, who was a little surprised by this sudden change. What do you mean? Asked Izuku, walking away a little, as somehow the closeness of their faces had been reduced as she raised her head. Toru remained silent for several seconds looking at the boy, then sighed and plucked up the courage to speak. You know, Midoriya, the girls and I are very sorry that we got you in so much trouble because of that game. We really are sorry, and we will understand if you are upset with us, Hagakure said to the green-haired man honestly while lowering his head a little and smiling. But I want to tell you that in a way it helped me discover something, she said softly in her tone, causing Izuku to be intrigued. Find out something? Izuku asked curiously as he raised an eyebrow. I discovered two things. The first is that as Nico Deku you are a danger to any girl, Toru said amused, raising her head to look at Izuku, who blushed a lot and let go of Toru's hand to cover her face in embarrassment. Please don't remind me of that. I'm very embarrassed to remember how I behaved, Izuku said, smiling nervously and sweating a little, remembering how he himself behaved like a cat, mewed and then got out of control in a peculiar and undue way. That would be something he would try hard to forget. Toru looked amused as the boy was nervous. She smiled slightly as she held Izuku's hand again to get his attention. The second thing I discovered is that I want to have a future with you in it, confessed the invisible girl, revealing the feelings she had stored inside. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise as he opened and closed his mouth without being able to utter a word. Hagakure-san? Asked the green-haired man, surprised and blushing at what he had just heard. Surely he must have misunderstood something, or he must have misheard what she said. Believe me, I'm very nervous inside, but it helps that you are too, Toru said, smiling amused by his cute reaction, and then she blushed and lowered her head with some shyness. I'm not very good with words and I can't describe to you what it is that I feel, but I'm sure I felt this for you for a while now, she said with gentleness in her voice as she recalled moments from the past. At first I thought you were a good friend to talk to and who is a good listener. Then we started to meet more often, and over time I started talking to Mina-chan about the things you and I did. For some reason you made me very excited, he said happily and pressing his hands on Izuku's to try to calm the agitated beating of his heart. She was really nervous about what she was about to say at that moment. She was grateful to be invisible so that the green-haired man wouldn't see the features of her face contort into a funny expression because of the nerves that gnawed at her inside. Toru kept her gaze on Izuku's green eyes and smiled even though she was the only one who knew. Now I understand that this is probably love, Toru confessed, watching from the front row how the boy's freckled cheeks turn red like tomatoes and the hue extends to his ears. If she could take a photo she would keep it as a good memory. Izuku was certainly shocked, but he knew that she plucked up the courage to confess her feelings. He couldn't hesitate to answer her truthfully. Hagakure-san, he said, lowering his head a little until a finger of Toru's suddenly silenced his lips. I don't want you to answer me now. That's not my goal. I just wanted to tell you and make my feelings clear, Toru said calmly as he put his other hand over his uncontrolled heart. I'm in love with you, Midoriya, she added happily, smiling at the green-haired man who, because of her invisibility, couldn't see him. He could only sense it by the tone she used. Although I'm sure you don't feel the same way about me, much less after everything that has happened and the way I behaved. But I still wanted to tell you, Toru continued talking, but his tone was more discouraged and sad. That's not true, Izuku said somewhat shyly, looking away from the corner as he scratched his cheek. I could easily feel the same way about you, Hagakure-san, said the boy, blushing and trying to stay calm in that situation. He didn't expect to have to be so sincere, but he didn't like that she thought he disliked her. That's impossible. You don't have to lie to make me happy, Midoriya, Toru said to the green-haired man, grateful that he tried to comfort her even though he knew all that she did to him when he was drunk. And it's not a lie, exclaimed Izuku more confidently and then grabbed Toru's hands, taking her by surprise. I was also excited to talk to you, Hagakure-san. It's just that I'm not very good with that kind of thing and I didn't really know how to say it. It's just that. You made me feel strangely happy, the boy confessed with a small smile on his lips while his cheeks continued to redden. And I can't say I'm in love since I don't know if that's how I feel, but I'm sure this I feel is for you, Hagakure-san, Izuku said, looking directly at Toru, who widened his eyes and blushed a lot. And don't be silly, and you can't see me, and you can't fall in love with me, Toru said to the green-haired man nervously and with steam coming out of his head as he turned his head in another direction with embarrassment since he had taken him by surprise by holding his hands and getting so close to his face. Izuku didn't back down and smiled kindly at the invisible girl. But I know you're here, next to me, trying to cheer me up despite what I did to you. And you don't need to see yourself to know that you're a nice and friendly girl that I'd like to keep talking to. Izuku spoke without hesitation for a second as he spoke the truth. Midoriya, Toru said, surprised and amazed by his words that penetrated her heart with overwhelming force, clearing all her doubts. I'm not sure if I'm in love or not, but I want to find out, Izuku said with a determined look and a confident smile as his heart beat fast as he knew the weight of his words and the girl they were aimed at. After that they were silent for several seconds, staring at each other, Izuku smiling sure of his words while that strange and warm feeling surfaced inside him. Toru on the other hand was surprised and very happy to have listened to him, as if a great weight was taken off his shoulders. Izuku noticed that she wasn't answering and was embarrassed by what she said and the nerves returned. Of course I'm just thinking out loud, and you don't need to take me seriously, exclaimed the green-haired man blushing a lot and with his eyes in spirals letting go of Toru's hands to give him his space. He hoped he hadn't made a fool of himself with what he said. Toru, on the other hand, let out a cute little laugh when he saw him nervous. Silly, she said amused, approaching him and without warning resting her head on Izuku's chest, who was petrified in its place. You know I'm in love with you, so I'm going to take you at your word and I'm going to make you fall in love with me too, Toru declared to the green-haired man as he raised his head to look at him. At the time, Izuku was a little happy to hear those words, but then he remembered what he had done while drunk, specifically the parts where Deku went. But I don't want to hurt you, he said to her with some insecurity, wanting to keep her safe from him. Toru underneath his invisibility frowned. Are you still doing that? You haven't hurt me, so don't worry or I'm going to get upset with you, Hagakure reprimanded him strictly and firmly, making him smile a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, Izuku apologized, scratching his head and smiling a little nervously at being scolded by his friend. Don't worry, I like that attentive part of you anyway, Toru said with a cheerful tone and a smile as he placed both his hands on the shoulders of the green-haired man who blushed when he heard him. Please don't be so honest, Izuku asked his friend while he was somewhat embarrassed by his sincerity. He was simply not very good at receiving compliments of that kind, his heart was not prepared. That's not going to happen, I like to embarrass you and see your nice reactions, Toru replied, amused and pleased to have that effect on him. Besides, we'll be close at hand, she whispered to herself with a slight blush on her cheeks, for she personally wanted to match the nerves he had put her through without him noticing. Izuku complained of a sudden twinge of pain in his head and put a hand to the area. I hope I'm not a nuisance, but could you please give me more water? My head still hurts, she asked kindly to her secret friend who nodded. Of course, wait a minute, Toru accepted happily to go to the fridge and pour another glass of water to the green hair. When she finished she turned around to offer him the glass but she ran into Izuku covering his face as red as a tomato with both hands. What's the matter with you, Midoriya? Hagakure asked the boy curiously as she approached him. It's that suit looks very tight, replied the green-haired man nervously and embarrassed, opening his fingers a little to be able to look sideways at his friend, because when she turned around he accidentally found himself looking at her rear that was marked by the tight suit. Toru, listening to him, remained silent for a few moments until his face blushed completely. And don't think I like wearing it, cried Toru embarrassed and abruptly handing the glass of water to Izuku and then hugging herself shyly. But if you asked me I could put it back on, she said quietly, but she could tell that the green-haired man was more focused on running out of water all at once. Did you say anything, Hagakure-san? Izuku asked Toru curiously as he finished the water that slightly helped him endure the pain in his head. Toru decided to shrug it off. Nothing important, she said to the boy calmly, then jumped up to him to look at him closely. Izuku-kun, Toru added cheerfully. For some reason she had to start approaching him and it would be appropriate to start calling him by his name. From that moment on, she would fight to earn the future she longed for next to the green-haired boy who was blushing and stuttering in shame in front of her. 5 years later, we found ourselves in a double bedroom. The light of the night sky entered through the windows of the place, and on one side of the bed was Toru wearing a simple white dress to sleep. She was reading a book quietly while the lamp next to her was the only source of light that helped her in her reading. Underneath his invisibility he had a soft smile as he waited for his life partner to arrive so they could both sleep together. And as if summoned, the door of the room opened and through the threshold entered a young man with green curls and freckled cheeks. Are you asleep yet? Toru asked her husband kindly as she closed her book as he closed the door and walked over to the bed to sit on the other side. Yes, it's a good thing that little one wasn't born invisible. It would be chaos if he were, Izuku replied smiling amused and scratching the back of his neck. Because his little 1-year-old son had a lot of energy and if he were born invisible then it would be a challenge to have to take care of him. Toru let out a sweet chuckle as she heard her husband's complaint. My parents told me something similar since I was very restless as a child, she said amused while the green-haired man lay down next to her and approached her to give her a chaste kiss on the cheek. You still are, Toru, Izuku said to his wife with a small amused smile, only to receive a sudden, slightly hotter kiss on her lips. You're not far behind either, Izuku, Toru replied to his best friend and husband in a somewhat playful and seductive tone, causing both of them to laugh together in amusement at those games they had. But you know, I can't take you by surprise anymore, that's boring, she said, making a childish pout despite her age. That's what it takes to live with you for so many years. As invisible as you are, I can know where you are and what you do, Izuku boasted with a smug smile as he crossed his arms. Somehow he had developed a sixth sense specialized only for his wife. Okay, oh all-seeing symbol of peace, what face am I making right now? Asked Toru, smiling mockingly at the green-haired man to put him to the test and perhaps bring him down from that cloud of pride. Izuku turned to see him remaining silent for a few seconds and then from one moment to the next kissed him intensely on the lips, taking her by surprise, to which the kiss lasted for a minute and then the green-haired man let her go, leaving a trickle of saliva between his lips. Well, surely you have a surprised face and you're blushing, Izuku replied, smiling funny and playful, looking at his wife who was indeed surprised by the sudden kiss, to which she took a few seconds to put her feet on the ground. That's not fair, it's cheating, Toru complained, crossing her arms and pouting adorably since she was a bad loser in a way. She wouldn't accept her husband winning that way. It's a trap to dress up as a cat while I'm sleeping to take pictures and extort money, Izuku commented, looking a little mischievously at his naughty girl who at the slightest she let her guard down made his move to try to embarrass him. I was just playing with you, Toru said to him, smiling happily and cheerfully as she remembered the event. And I'm just playing with you, my dear wife, Izuku replied, smiling kindly at his invisible wife who smiled as she approached his face. I'll let you in this time, she said to the green-haired man as they looked into each other's eyes and their noses touched slightly. Toru, I love you, Izuku confessed with gentle and welcoming affection directed at his life partner and the mother of his child. You know I do too, Tannen, Toru replied, smiling amusedly, and then they both joined their lips in a chaste kiss of pure love, which lasted only a few seconds and then they both separated and snuggled together. Izuku lowered a hand to his wife's belly to gently caress it. I swear I'll protect the one on the way, too, the peace symbol said to the love of his life as he looked at him sweetly. I couldn't expect anything less from my pretty husband, but what will you do if he's born invisible like me? Asked Toru in a playful and amused tone as she caressed the soft curls of the man she loves. You know I don't care about that detail, I don't need to see him to feel that I already want him with us, Izuku replied without a hint of doubt and in a gentle and warm voice, knowing that another life was growing inside Toru, that of the little brother or sister that his son would have, who now slept peacefully in the next room. Toru knew that he would respond like this, but she never tired of listening to him. She just smiled, pleased by his answer. You're a very loving father, replied Hagakure, hugging his man's torso with deep love. And you're all ours, our family, she added, deeply happy, feeling happy that he is the father of her children. In the end, all the effort was worth it. She had managed to lay the foundations with him of what would be the love nest of her beautiful, happy family. Winner, Toru Hagakure.
Thanks for watching, legends. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more epic What If Deku stories and fresh updates. Hit that bell so you never miss the next upload. See you in the next one.